Hi all you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be both summarizing and reviewing Rhythm of War, the fourth novel in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. I'm going to summarize and review everything, part by part, chapter by chapter, so you're prepared for the next installment, which is due to come out in December. After the summary, Jeremy will be joining me to share his thoughts on the novel as well. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to jump right into things with the summary. Prologue. To Pretend, 7 years ago. The book begins with another flashback of the day Gavilar died, this time from Navani's perspective. Gavilar has disappeared from the feast, and she is forced to run the show and fix all the feast's problems in his stead. Frustrated, she goes in search of her husband and finds him in her study with a pair of uncommon figures. There are a group of spheres and gemstones that glow with an inverse of light in front of them. That's on page 24. After interrupting their meeting, Navani gets into a fight with her husband, who refuses to tell her what the meeting had been about. Their relationship is struggling because of rumors that Navani had been unfaithful, Navani's refusal to support Gavilar's desire for their daughter to marry Amaram, and Gavilar's sense that Navani isn't worthy of involvement in his affairs because everything distinctive about her came from someone else. She went where the money and power would be greatest. That's on page 27. She prays for his death. When Navani hears of her husband's assassination after pretending to be part of a healthy couple during the feast, she doesn't believe it possible. Upon seeing his body, she grows to pity him, but feels no grief and vows to give him his legacy. She finds the pouch of spheres on his body empty, makes a show of composing herself, and begins organizing a city thrown into chaos. Part 1. Burdens. Chapter 1. Calluses. Present day. It had been over a year since the coming of the Everstorm and the fall of Alethkar, a year during which the country of Herdaz had somehow kept fighting. 2 months ago, the enemy had finally decided to crush the kingdom for good. Refugee numbers had increased soon after. That's on 36. Lyran cares for those refugees in Hearthstone. He's keeping a hidden general, the leader of the Herdazian resistance, known as the Mink, from being found and executed by the Parshmen occupying the town. While attempting to help the Mink and his companions escape Hearthstone by pretending that one of the men required surgery, immediately, the refugees are told to wait by City Lady Abiyajan, a Parshwoman, while Lyran is directed to attend her. Lyran is brought before one of the Fused, who is looking for Kaladin, whom they view as a dangerous spy. The Fused soldiers begin uncloaking nearby refugees, revealing Kaladin. Kaladin draws his power. Chapter 2. Severed Cords. Kaladin uses his powers to battle the Fused. It nearly kills him twice. Eventually, the Fused retreats after vowing that they'll meet again. Kaladin returns to town. Vale is hoping to be kidnapped. She is hunting the Sons of Honor. Vale stops at a wine house to pour over accounts and channel her anger toward Eli Sidious, who had been planning treason. As she drinks, Vale realizes her wine had been drugged. Kaladin kills one of the Fused soldiers and forces the others to retreat. Then Kaladin goes in search of the Mink, of the fallen Herdaz, and discovers that he has snuck away from his soldiers. Before the soldiers go in search of him, Kaladin asks them to pass along a message. We need to be out of this town quickly. I have reason to suspect a larger force of Fused is on its way here. That's on page 59. Kaladin fights with his father about what his hands are used for, and the need to leave. A giant floating platform arrives to take the people of Hearthstone away. Chapter 3. The Fourth Bridge. Edge Dancers leave the Fourth Bridge, the world's first air transport of Navani's design, after it touches down and begin to gather and heal the people of Hearthstone. Navani wonders how people once thrived in mountainous Urithiru. Dalinar promises to use the transport to rescue the remainder of the Mink's army as refugees begin to make their way onto the Fourth Bridge. Lyn arrives and warns the royals of an incoming attack by 3 full flights of Fused. Chapter 4. Architects of the Future. Vale, disguised as Chanasha, a low-born light-eyed merchant, is brought before the Sons of Honor, whose sworn and sacred duty it is to usher in the return of the heralds, the return of storms, and the return of our God, the Almighty, and claim to have guided the return of the Radiance, and orchestrated both the Everstorm and the Parshman's awakening because they are the grand architects of the future of Roshar. That's on 73. Vale had been tasked by both Dalinar and Mraize to slowly infiltrate her way to the top and discover if Ilayi had taken over the cult, if the cult planned to seize the Oath Gate at the center of the Shattered Plains, and to put an end to the cult. After being initiated into the Sons of Honor, Vale discovers that the group already knows what Dalinar is planning, because they have a source in his inner circle. Alarmed, Vale realizes that they don't have time for our original plan. They need to know who the informant was ASAP because of the danger they posed. Before she can be taken away, Shallan steps forward and announces, "I'm not who you think I am," on 76. Chapter 5. Broken Spears. Kaladin and the Windrunners, who came with the Fourth Bridge, engaged the Fused. Kaladin chases Leshwi during the battle, but she gets away. The evacuation of the townspeople continues. Shallan explains that she has a second secret business, copying schematics the Kholin artifabrians have been developing, including that of the flying platform, and selling them to Natan buyers. That's on 84. Shallan creates a light weaving of the Fourth Bridge's schematics to back up her story. It may be enough to grant her an audience with ELA. The cultists discover that they have been followed. Kholin troops are coming. Kaladin continues the fight and sees the strange new fused he had fought earlier. His people move to protect Dalinar, where they can no longer spot the fuse Kaladin had indicated. When he notices Leshwi again, Kaladin chases after her. Chapter 6. A Loose Thread. Shallan escapes with a handful of the cultists through a secret tunnel. She is brought before ELA. She intends to assassinate her because Shallan views her as a threat, which jeopardized all the things Shallan had grown to love. Kaladin forces Sigzil to drop his spear and bow to Leshwi to keep her from killing him. After Sigzil retreats, Kaladin accepts a challenge from Leshwi. The evacuation continues. Some of the townspeople refuse to leave their homeland behind. Navani continues to search for the source of her husband's power. If they discover how the ancients made the tower work, they would be able to restore Urithiru and potentially provide their airships with power. That's on 98. Navani is startled when she spots Moash, the traitor who had killed her son. Kaladin is forced to leave his fight with Leshwi behind, declare a draw, when he notices the city lord's manor is on fire, and the fused from earlier and his soldiers are harassing some townspeople. With Leshwi's encouragement, Kaladin heads to the rescue. Chapter 7. The Rarest Vintage. Ela appears to be a shadow of her former self and senses why Shallan has come. The High Princess assumes Shallan works for the Ghostbloods, who Ela reveals killed Thanadal. Asks if she knows what the Ghostbloods are truly after, why they feared the Sons of Honor, and why she and her circle needed to die. Before Ela can say more, their conversation is broken off by Adolin and his soldiers. One of the last things Ela says to Shallan before she's taken into custody is, "Once I'm dead, don't let them search my rooms before you do. Look for the rarest vintage. It is exotic." That is on 107. It appears to be a clue the treasonous woman left behind. She had wanted to depose Yasna and put Gavinor on the throne, for she dies while being taken in. Poison. She can no longer answer anyone's questions. Kaladin follows the fused and his soldiers into the manor, a trap. A strange fabrial, powered by voidlight, suppresses Kaladin's powers, but he manages to best his enemies. As Lift takes the injured Godeki, an edge dancer, to safety in the fabrial to Navani for study, Kaladin decides to go after Roshone, who is still trapped inside the burning building. Shallan and company are dismayed. They have another mess on their hands. It is decided that Ela died of Blackbane. Since she died quickly, Shallan realizes that Ela had been right. The Ghostbloods hadn't trusted her to kill Ela, and they sent a second knife to see the job done. That would mean they had an operative among Adolin's guards or Shallan's own agents. And this person was separate from the spy Ela supposedly had among Dalinar's elite. This is on 114. Ela's prediction that she won't get to answer Shallan's questions, "They won't let me," back on page 108, had been correct. And Shallan wonders if the room Ela died in contained secrets Mraize didn't want her to discover. Chapter 8. Surrender. Kaladin heads through the burning manor to the cellar where he finds two prisoners who had been killed by a shardblade, and Moash, who was holding Roshone at knife point. Moash slits the man's throat, killing Roshone. Kaladin is enraged and challenges Moash, who refuses to fight him and chooses to surrender. Shallan and her agents search Ela's room for secrets. Shallan searches for the rarest vintage. The clue allows her to find a notebook hidden behind a loose stone. She tucks it away before anyone can see it. Although a part of him wants to, Kaladin finds that he cannot kill his old friend, Moash. Moash taunts Kaladin by saying things like, "Everyone you love, everyone you think you can protect, they're all going to die anyway. There's nothing you can do about it," on 123. Pushing Kaladin's insecurities and insisting that the only way out, the only way to end his suffering, is to jump into the darkness, on 124. A bright light appears and chases Moash away. Renarin has come to take Kaladin away. The fused have retreated and the airship is prepared to depart. Chapter 9. Contradictions. The Fourth Bridge departs. Kaladin is frustrated with himself for locking up and failing to kill Moash, for letting the man get in his head. Syl expresses her concern over how Kaladin is slipping farther and farther into darkness. Kaladin and a few of his windrunners begin flying the command staff back to the Shattered Plains while the airship makes a longer trip. Navani realizes that the gemstone pillar at the heart of Urithiru is the same as the one she was given to study, and surmises that it must be a way to suppress the fused abilities, since the Radiants would not want to suppress their own. Navani finds a Spanreed ruby hidden in her room. After touching down in the Shattered Plains, she receives a series of messages from a mystery writer. The core is that you capture Spren. You imprison them. Hundreds of them. You must stop. Stop, or there will be consequences, on 134. When Navani defends herself by saying that both Intelligent Spren and Honor Spren accept it, the writer responds, "The Honor Spren cannot be trusted. Not anymore. You must stop creating this new kind of fabrial. I will make you stop. This is your warning." That's on 135. After delivering the prisoners, Shallan fills Adolin in on everything she found out. That before you came in, ELA implied that if I took her captive, she would be killed. She knew the blow was coming. That's why I was suspicious of her death. She also said she didn't kill Thanadal, that it was another group called the Ghostbloods. She thought the Ghostbloods would send someone for her, which was why she was certain she'd die. That's on 137. She explains that the Ghostbloods are the people who tried to kill Yasna, and me by extension, by sinking her ship, on 138. Shallan shows Adolin the notebook, explains that it seems to be ELA's attempts to piece together what the Ghostbloods are planning. Like this page, a list of terms or names her spies had heard. She was trying to define what they were, on 139. Thydakar was listed as their leader. The pair decide to find out what the Ghostbloods are up to and stop them. Adolin is to send his men away since they have a spy in their midst, while Shallan keeps an eye on her agents. Shallan also determines that she needs to leave the Ghostbloods to prevent them from getting inside her head. Chapter 10, A Single Casualty. Dalinar, now a king and ruler of Urithiru, but not a high king over any other monarch. Yasna now rules as queen over Alethkar, is given a report and learns of what happened to ELA. Afterward, Dalinar speaks to Kaladin of how they need more Honorsprent and Windrunners to help with the war. Then, Dalinar relieves Kaladin of duty because he sees a soldier who can't sleep, who snaps at those who love him. He's a soldier who pretends he can still function, but he can't. He knows it. That's on 146. Kaladin is not happy. He fears one of his Windrunners will die because he won't be there to protect them. Dalinar fears the opposite. One of them will die because Kaladin freezes and fails to protect them. Kaladin knows he's right and regrets his inability to say the words that would have saved Elhokar a year earlier. Instead of fighting, Dalinar wants Kaladin to train and teach others. Kaladin doesn't want to train others. Sending the Windrunners off to die without him would rip him apart. He doesn't think he could see them fly and not join them. That's on 149. Dalinar understands and gives Kaladin, who is now very much struggling with a sense of worthlessness, time to decide what he wants. Kaladin feels as though the Windrunners had just suffered a single, profound casualty himself. Chapter 11, Passion and Courage. Bentley serves Lady Leshwi in Kholinar. Bentley is known as the Last Listener, Envoy Form Regal, the voice of Lady Leshwi, and Secret Radiant who fears discovery and cannot practice the full extent of her powers because it could draw secrets friend. Bentley's job is to express Leshwi's desires to others. Bentley helps Shuman become the new assistant Stormsetter and learns that Leshwi was unable to kill Kaladin while she was away. However, she learns that he managed to kill Lezian, the pursuer, the new fused Kaladin encountered. Leshwi fears she will not get to face Kaladin again. After Leshwi departs again, Bentley holds a secret meeting with her friends. She intends to counteract the indoctrination of the fused and help the singers cast off the traditions of those who had enslaved them. That's on 157. Shuman wonders when they will attack the fused. Bentley explains, "We are not a rebellion. We are a group of objectors who do not like the choices we've been offered. Fused oppression or human tyranny, the god of hatred or the supposedly honorable god who abandoned us to slavery. We accept neither. We are the listeners. We will cast off everything, including our very forms if we must, to find freedom. Once we have enough members, we will leave the city and travel someplace where no one will bother us. We will remain neutral in the conflicts between humans and fused. Our only goal is to find a place where we can thrive on our own, our society, our government, our rules," on 159. Their discussion is interrupted by Leshwi's sudden arrival. She says, "Gather yourself, Last Listener. Something is happening, something dangerous. I fear the war is about to take a distinctly different turn." That's on 161. Chapter 12, A Way to Help. As soon as Kaladin returns to his quarters, he breaks down. After speaking to Syl, Adolin arrives to take Kaladin out, so he doesn't have to be alone. Adolin takes Kaladin to his favorite winehouse, Jez's Duty, where they meet Vale. She tells him about ELA, and he tells her about his mission to his hometown. Radiant tells Kaladin of the personas that have half-formed. Adolin and Vale try to find someone for Kaladin to date now that Lyn has broken up with him. After Vale leaves the table, Kaladin tells Adolin he was relieved of active duty. Adolin wants to help Kaladin and Shallan get better. He knows she's struggling. Rock informs Kaladin that he's going home with Song and his younger children. He's going to seek justice from his people for lifting the bow and saving Kaladin's life. Kaladin gives Rock his blessing. They say their farewells. Rock knows they will not meet again in this lifetime. Chapter 13, Another Hunt. Shallan receives a message which reads, "The deal is set and arranged. The Spren will come." That's on 179. It unnerves her so much that she burns it before going to visit her brothers. She is discomforted by the memories she continues to ignore and the knowledge that Mraize has befriended her brothers. He is serving as a guardsman with Balat, a threat. He could take away what he had given whenever he wanted. After Mraize departs, Shallan goes to meet him in the garden. Mraize commends her for severely weakening, if not destroying, the Sons of Honor. He confirms that one of his operatives killed Elaine. Mraize doubts he should trust Shallan. Not all of her is committed to the Ghostbloods. She won't get the tattoo. Shallan says she can't join them fully until she knows their goals and motivations. Mraize explains its power. Radiant realizes he wanted to get to Urithiru before Yasna because he knew the Oath Gates would offer easy access to Shadesmar. He wants to control commerce and travel to these other places. That's on 187. The catch is investiture, a bind to a specific land, which makes it difficult to move. It becomes heavier the farther you move it away. Radiant explains they don't want another job, but not all the personas agree. Shallan informs them that Sha Nat agreed to your terms and is sending one of her Spren to the tower, where it will investigate your members for a possible bond, on 188. It wasn't exactly what he wanted, but Mraize accepts. He explains that the Sons of Honor have been stamped out because they don't have anyone close to Dalinar. They simply managed to intercept some communications from one of our agents who is close to Dalinar, on 189. He insinuates that the agent who killed ELA is one of Shallan's Lightweavers and insists that Master Thydakar wishes only to secure a method for gathering and transporting Stormlight, on 189. Reveals that the Sons of Honor were attacked and ELA was killed for their connection to Gavilar, who had been testing the movement of light between worlds prior to his death. They could not risk the discovery of Gavilar's secrets. Mraize gives Shallan a mission: make her way to lasting integrity and find Restaurus, a former leader of the Sons of Honor who is perhaps the only living person who knows the extent of what Gavilar had been doing. When she locates him, Mraize knows that she will know what to do with him. Mraize promises to reward Shallan with all of the answers she's looking for upon her successful return from the hunt. He will hold nothing back. After receiving her answers, she will be free to go if she wishes. Chapter 14, Voice. A new group of awakened fused spirits had set Leshwi off, made her uneasy. Bentley attends a meeting with a conclave of the most important singers at the palace. The 9, leaders of the fused, are told of the flying ship and loss of the suppressor. Lezian, whom Kaladin killed, announces that he will pursue him. Leshwi informs Bentley that millennia ago, Lezian was the first fused to be killed by a human. To avoid the shame of such death, upon returning to life, Lezian ignored all orders and rational arguments and went into battle seeking only the man who had killed him. He was successful, and his tradition was born. Anytime he is killed, Lezian ignores everything else until he has claimed the life of the one who killed him. 7,000 years, and he's never failed. That's on 199. The others encourage him, but Leshwi does not think much of him, and claims prior privilege to Kaladin's life, since she had been killed by him before Lezian. The 9 accept, enraging Lezian, who does not want his tradition to be broken. Bentley realizes Leshwi is trying to protect Kaladin. Reboniel, Lady of Wishes, a former member of the 9 for many centuries, whom Leshwi thought both mad and was meant to remain asleep, declares that they should seize the tower from the humans. It is an ideal time since they don't yet have mastery over their powers. She intends to do this by suppressing the powers of the Radiants inside their own tower. The device preventing us from attacking them there can be inverted. That's on 203. Reboniel explains that they will incorporate Taravangian to help with their plan, so they can begin walking down a path she insists will lead to the end of the war. The 9 accept Reboniel's proposal. Leshwi apologizes to Reboniel for trying to block her proposal, who wishes to end the war because the humans imprisoned and unmade in a fabrial, and fears it is only a matter of time before they discover that the fuse can be imprisoned in a gemstone, by offering to attend her and lend her staff to assist with Reboniel's enterprise. Reboniel accepts. Bentley is to report to Leshwi in secret because Leshwi doesn't trust Reboniel and wants to prevent the catastrophe she fears from occurring. After sharing her hopes, Leshwi tells Bentley that the only path to independence is by helping the fuse defeat the humans. Bentley spots Reboniel and Lezian conspiring together and wonders whether or not a human could train her. Chapter 15, The Light and the Music. Dalinar announces Kaladin's retirement to the command staff. Sigzil was promoted to Company Lord and would take over the Windrunner's daily administrative tasks as well as recruitment. Scar was promoted to Company Second and would both oversee and lead the Windrunner's missions. Elaine explained why the Parshendi wanted gemstones. A mixture of gemstone light and music could help plants grow. He's helping on the farms. Kaladin informs Rain that he found him an honor spren. Elaine doesn't want to bond with it. He wants to wait for a spren who wants to bond with him and will take him for what he is, as opposed to one who was forced to bond with him. Kaladin visits Zahel, who is on laundry detail. After fighting him amongst the clotheslines, Zahel informs Kaladin that he shouldn't join the Ardents because he loves fighting too much. He'd find training others in the sword and spear unsatisfying. Zahel explains that he's a type 2 invested entity. Cut off a bit of divinity and leave it alone. Eventually it becomes alive. And if you let a man die with 2 invested a soul, or invest him right as he's dying, he'll leave behind a shadow you can nail back onto a body. His own, if you're feeling charitable. Once done, you have this. Type 2 invested entity, dead man walking. That's on 223. He explains that Zeth and the Heralds are the same way, while Syl is a Type 1 invested entity, a a power that came alive on its own. Sahel explains that the fused are like him and are so strong that in order to be permanently defeated, Kaladin will have to find a way to disrupt their souls. You can't just rip them apart, you need a weapon so strong it unravels the soul. That's on 224. Sahel warns Kaladin, who considers finding a way to coexist with the fused, to be wary. The longer one of us exists, the more like a spren we become, consumed by a singular purpose. Our minds bound and chained by our intent. We're spren masquerading as men. That's why she takes our memories. She knows we aren't the actual people who died, but something else given a corpse to inhabit. That's on 224. Sahel's voice trails off. He never explains who she is. Chapter 16, An Unknown Song. Navani wonders how Gavilar had obtained Voidlight years before the Everstorm's coming. She visits Szeth, who has been imprisoned. They speak of the night he killed Gavilar. Szeth explains that he was given a dark sphere by Gavilar as he lay dying. He was also asked to deliver a message to Dalinar, which he had done a month prior. Szeth claims Gavilar did not speak of the strange sphere he had been given, which had been passed on to Navani for study. Navani departs and speaks with an Ardent. She discovers that both pressure and temperature rise before a storm in Urithiru because it is bracing itself. It had the ability to adapt and regulate things such as temperature, pressure, and humidity. Navani longs to make the city fully functional to improve living standards and ease of living. She thinks about how they were unwilling to remove Taravangian from the coalition despite his crimes, sending Szeth against the Azish emperors, because they had more dangerous enemies to think about, Odium's servants. Navani shows Dalinar's dark sphere, which warps air around it, to Talna, an engineer, who shows it to her friend Nem as well. Navani reluctantly hands it over for further study and looks to some notes she had taken about Voidlight in the sphere. They state that R'lain had claimed Gavilar had given Eshonai a Voidlight sphere long before the Everstorm arrived. Of Gavilar's strange sphere, R'lain had said, "I don't know what that is, Brightness, but it feels painful. Voidlight is dangerously inviting, like if I touched it, my body would drink it in eagerly. That thing is different. It has a song I've never heard, and it vibrates wrong against my soul." That's on 234. Chapter 17, A Proposal. The Mink meets with Wit, Shallan, and the Colons. Dalinar requests the Mink's help retaking Alethkar in exchange for assistance freeing the Mink's people. The Mink thinks attacking Alethkar would be a mistake because Taravangian isn't trustworthy, and the enemy has a strong hold in the area. The potential for a two-front war is too great, and won't go well for the allied forces. The Mink suggests consolidating and attacking enemy weak points instead. He suggests reclaiming Amul and pushing the Singers out of Makabak. After the Mink leaves, Yasna discusses her proposal with Navani and Dalinar. The proposal is to free every Alethi slave. Navani and Dalinar are against it. They feel it would cause too much chaos. After speaking with Ash, Navani and Dalinar discover that Braze is a planet, that the Oath Pact is broken, that Ash's father had been killed a year ago. It is implied that his death destroyed the Oath Pact since he was the one who forged it in order to trap the Voidbringers, that it is possible Dalinar will be able to repair or replicate the Oath Pact, and that the Shin, who have practiced with surge binding, would know. Unfortunately, the Shin don't want anything to do with Dalinar, his people, or his coalition. Yasna asserts that they need Makabak to be stable because they will have to deal with the Shin eventually, and find out what they know about bondsmiths. Yasna intends to lead the war effort if they push into Amul. Chapter 18, Surgeon. The fourth bridge arrives in Urithiru. Kaladin shows his parents around, where the people of Hearthstone will be staying. Kaladin and Syl show Kaladin's parents the rooms they set up for them, which include a nursery for the baby and a surgery room. Kaladin tells his parents he's leaving the military. Kaladin is going to continue his training and become a surgeon. Chapter 19, Garnets. After speaking to Rushu, a young Ardent, Navani discovers that the Suppression Fabrial manifests a Spren and Shadesmar as Soulcasters do. But on this side, there is no sign of that Spren in the gemstones. The Spren that runs the suppression device has been corrupted. Very similar to Renarin's Spren. The Spren refused to talk to us, but didn't seem as insensate as the ones in Soulcasters. This reinforces Navani's theory that ancient Fabrials, things like the Pumps, the Oathgates, and the Soulcasters, somehow imprison their Spren in the cognitive realm. That's on 260. More research is to be done into a gemstone pillar filled with garnets and the suppression fabrial to see if the device's effects can be reversed. Navani attends a meeting of monarchs and speaks to Taravangian, who terrifies her. He defends his crimes, which he asserts were done to protect mankind in their future. If humankind survives the new storm, it will be because of the actions I took. I stand by them. That's on 267. Navani and the rest of the coalition are surprised when Taravangian supports their plan to retake Amul. but it is unanimously decided that they will try to retake the area and to send an expedition into Shadesmar. The expedition is meant to repair relations with the Honorspren, who feel their trust was betrayed during the Recreance. The envoy will include individuals such as Godeki, Shallan, and Adolin. Shallan and Adolin will be leading the envoy. The Coalition hopes it will solve an issue they are facing, the fact that there aren't enough Windrunners. After the meeting, Dalinar and Navani discuss their unease surrounding Taravangian and what he must be planning. They felt he was too quick to offer troops to retake Amul during the meeting. Fearing that Taravangian must be planning a trap for them, Dalinar instructs Navani to stay behind while he and Yasna go off to battle. End of Part 1. Interludes. I-1. Sylphrena. Syl wants to help Kaladin. During a storm, she asks her father to help her understand Kaladin by allowing her to feel the darkness he feels. By understanding the darkness, she feels as though she will both be able to know and help him better. The Stormfather is not able to do so. Afterward, she speaks to Dalinar, who gives her some advice she feels helps. I-2. Sha-Not. Sha-Not keeps secrets, even from Odium. She sends one of her children to meet with Mraize and his people about a possible bond. Another two are sent to distract Odium, who will try to unmake the child. Sha-Not meets with Odium. Her lie is a claim that her children were sent to do his bidding, to corrupt the humans with lies and to watch them as well. Odium didn't know for certain that she was working to undermine him, that she had rescued Shallan and her companions in Kholinar a year prior, but if she was caught in a lie, he would unmake her, but in so doing, he'd lose a useful tool. Sha-Not was working against him because she wants more freedom and to become a god. Sha-Not is instructed to watch Taravangian. Odium suspects she helped Shallan and was watching to be sure she didn't contact other Radiants. Sha-Not plans her next steps. She knows Taravangian is a weapon. I-3. Into the Fire. Taravangian informs his friends that it is time to disband the diagram. It has fulfilled its purpose. They have protected Kharbranth by making a deal with the enemy. Later that day, Taravangian would leave for Azir with Dalinar and Yasna. Soon afterward, Taravangian's armies, acting on Odium's orders, would betray their allies and switch sides. It was a death sentence for Taravangian, who would be left surrounded by his enemies. That's on 291. Taravangian gives Adrotagia a piece of paper to give his daughter, who will soon be queen of Kharbranth. He instructs Adrotagia to guide his daughter and have her disavow him. After saying his goodbyes to his friends, Taravangian's friends leave him and he burns his copy of the diagram. And now for the review of Part 1.
I have decided that I'm going to join Elaine for the review. I am Jeremy, and we're going to talk about our thoughts on Part 1. And we're going to be doing this for all the parts. So Elaine, do you want to start off giving your thoughts on the first part?
Sure. Part 1 really sets the stage for the rest of the novel. It makes it clear that there are repercussions for the occurrences in the previous novel. For example, we see that very heavily with Kaladin. He is no longer allowed to be a part of the military because of how he is emotionally. He is trying to reconcile with his father, who hasn't appreciated that he has been a part of the military, and he's really struggling to find himself and find his place in society now that he is not allowed to fight. He feels worthless. And Syl is worried about him, and the people around him are worried about him. We also see the introduction of new ideas and missions or goals for the rest of the series.
I definitely think that the characters were less insufferable than they were in the last book. In the last book, the characters like Navani were impossible to get through the chapters of. I found them insanely boring. Kaladin even wasn't that great in the last book. And in this one, there's a down period where he's all depressed and whatnot, but I don't think it was as bad and as droning on as the last book was. I feel like Part 1 did a decent job of setting up the intrigue of the book and laying out the things that we should be excited for going forward, especially the scene with Kaladin and Zahel, because that scene where he's sparring with him in the laundry is one of the first concrete things that we get discussing the connections between the Stormlight books and some of Brandon Sanderson's other books, and it was really exciting to see that.
I think I preferred that scene more from a visually aesthetic standpoint, in the sense that I created this very beautiful picture in my head of how they were fighting amongst the laundry. And the thing that really intrigued me was the world building that was happening in this first section. I am happy to see the introduction of a new type of fused, a new type of entity that the good guys, if you will, have to fight against. I like that Venli is trying to counteract everything that the Fused are doing because she doesn't agree with what they have to say. And we can see conflicts within her group even now. People who just want to fight, and she's like, no, that's not what we're about. We just want to be free over in our corner and not be bothered with everybody and live our lives. And things like that. The thing that I don't like is Navani. Navani is by far my least favorite character, and there isn't a lot of it at this stage, but she does a decent amount of research in this novel, and we start to see hints of it, and that's what really makes this one drag for me. So when she starts to have all these major roles and all this stuff revolve around her, there's a part of my soul that dies. I do like also that it's been made clear that Taravangian is going to betray everybody. I think because of how he's acted in previous novels, you could get a sense that this is how he was going to behave, but the clarity was a nice and interesting touch, because usually you want to keep secrets in literature to keep people engaged, but he just flat out came and said, this is the plan and this is what's happening.
Yeah, this is more of a we know what's going to happen, we're waiting for it to happen to the characters. I think Navani is better in this book than she was in the last book, and there is definitely a lull, I think, in the middle of the book, which we haven't gotten to yet, where her research stuff is a little bit dull, but a lot of the world building and the science behind this world is done through her chapters, so her chapters are very important. And I think my biggest dread in this part was finding out that Shallan and Adolin were going to go into Shadesmar, because I hated the Shadesmar sections in the last book. Absolutely hated them. So I was worried that this was going to turn into that again, but I'm pleasantly surprised on how it went, and we'll discuss that when we get there. But in the moment, in this part, that was something that was worrying me and going through my head at the time. So overall, you think the book's off to a good start?
I think it's definitely much stronger of a start than Oathbringer, but that's not saying much, because I think out of the 4 novels we have currently, the consensus is Oathbringer is the weakest one, and it dragged, and I know several people who just gave up on it because it was too much nonsense and not enough substance.
Yes, I think the world building in this one was very organic in comparison to Oathbringer, where Oathbringer was an entire book of world building, basically.
Chapter 20, The Unseen Court. Shallan oversees the training of her Lightweavers, the Unseen Court. She realizes that Mraize wants something out of Restares, a secret she wants to both discover and use to her advantage. In preparation of her upcoming mission, Shallan tries to figure out whom the spy amongst them is, Vale arguing that the most suspicious should be brought along on the mission so that they can be watched, Radiant arguing against it. Eventually, Shallan decides to bring Ishna, Vatha, and Stargyle, one of the newest recruits, to Shadesmar with her. That puts Red in charge while they're away. Shallan had chosen 3 out of the 4 most suspicious recruits she had to bring along, breaking the compact. Radiant suddenly changes her stance, it's settled, and Vale is determined to discover the spy's identity and use the information against Mraize. They need to finish preparing. Upon returning to her room, Vale discovers a gift from Mraize, a metal cube and a note. It reads, "Span reeds do not work between realms, but this will. Be very careful with it. It has a value beyond that of some kingdoms. Do not open it, or you risk destroying it. Once on your mission, and in a secluded place, hold the cube and call my name. I will speak to you through it. Good hunting, little knife," on 304. Vale wonders how she is going to hide it from Adolin. Chapter 21, The Seething Knot. Adolin begins preparing for his mission. He discovers that Beryl will be replacing Stargyle on the trip because his wife is ill and he wants to remain with her. Adolin thinks about how Shallan was released from Yasna's wardship and isn't the best at soul casting, how he had never murdered anyone innocent, like his father had burned his mother to death, creating a seething knot inside him. Adolin realizes his father wants him to become a Radiant. It's part of the reason why he's going on the trip. Adolin and the rest of the travelers head into Shadesmar. He feels like a little boy after speaking to his father about his beliefs and what Dalinar thinks of him. Chapter 22, No Use Talking. The envoy begins making its way through Shadesmar. Adolin is told there is no point in talking to Maya, a Deadeyes, by the Truth Watcher's Mistbren, who feels Maya cannot understand him. Adolin is convinced Maya can. Adolin reviews the plan with Shallan, which was to present the Honor-Spren with gifts along with written requests to begin relations. Nothing too pushy. An essay written by Yasna, another written by Dalinar, with Queen Fen's advisement, and a third from the Azish Imperial Court. Adolin was to request admittance to the Honor-Spren fortress, stay a few days to get them used to the idea of talking to humans, then leave with a promise that they'd speak more in the future. That's on 329. Syl doesn't think it will work. She doubts he'll even be admitted to their fortress. The travelers secure a barge to take them to the southern bank. The trip should take roughly 2 weeks. Adolin vows to do his part. He intends to give the Spren his father's letters and more. Find a way to persuade them to help his way, whatever that was. Shallan realizes that someone had gone through her things and used the cube because it had been moved. She concludes that the spy is amongst them and using the cube to communicate with Mraize. Chapter 23, Binding Wounds. Kaladin's new role has allowed him to be not sad. Dalinar's armies begin departing for Azir. It hurts Kaladin to see his friends leave. Kaladin feels alone. Teft announces that he isn't going with the army. He stepped down. There's too much wrong with his brain. That's on 339. Kaladin is upset with him at first, but soon thanks Teft and accepts him as his new surgeon's assistant. Chapter 24, Full of Awe. Shallan is upset by how Vale violated the compact. She doesn't want to help find the spy right now despite the others' urging, but they won't let her retreat and hide. From ELA's book, the group had discovered that the Ghostbloods were obsessed with a specific spren named Ba-Ado Mishrum, one of the Unmade. It had been this spren who had taken over for Odium following the final desolation. She had granted the singers forms of power. By capturing Ba-Ado Mishrum, locking her in a gemstone, humankind had stolen the minds of the singers in ancient times. Radiant was increasingly certain Mraize was hunting the gemstone that held Ba-Ado Mishrum. That's on 343. Shallan wonders if Mraize's desire to transport Stormlight off-world and to find Ba-Ado Mishrum are related. Adolin and Shallan catch up. He's worried about the mission because of what Syl told him. Shallan informs Adolin she robbed Yasna. He finds it amusing. The Mist Spren, dreaming though awake, informs them that if they wish to learn more about Ba-Ado Mishrum, they should ask the Heralds. I have heard several were there for her binding. Elan, Kolek, find them. Ask them on 349. Chapter 25, Devotary of Mercy. Teft and Kaladin find Cressa, a refugee's missing uncle, Norrell, in the Devotary of Mercy, where those with mental ailments are cared for. They're deplored by how the patients are treated and the conditions they find them in. Kaladin decides to take Norrell, who has been suicidal, into his care and warns that he will be back for more patients. He wants to try new treatments, which he hopes will be able to help them. Chapter 26, A Little Espionage. After tipping her trunk, Shallan and her personas confirm that the cube couldn't have shifted faces unless someone had removed it from the luggage. Vale determines that they're going to try 2 different methods of finding the spy. The first is to catch them in a lie or a past misdeed, then push them until they grow uncomfortable and admit to us more than they intended. If this method doesn't work, we'll try something else. Something that takes longer but is more likely to work. We will find a way to feed each suspect a different tidbit of false information, a tidbit they will in turn feed to Mraize. Depending on which piece of information is leaked, we'll know who did the leaking and identify our spy. That's on 364. Shallan and her personas set their plan in motion. Chapter 27, Banners. Navani considers the nature and meaning of banners as Dalinar's armies continue to go off to war. Navani sees Yasna, Dalinar, and Little Gav off. They had taken precautions against Taravangian's trap. Sabarial is sent to put the war camps under their control. Navani begins overseeing Urithuru's maintenance. They had discovered a room that had been sealed off with a stone model of the tower inside. Valalar is going to inspect the model for hidden secrets. Navani discovers that for the first time in weeks, the mysterious figure who was angry about Fabrials was attempting to contact her via Spanreed. Chapter 28, Heresies. The mysterious writer complains that Navani has not obeyed. You must stop your experiments with Fabrials. I made it explicitly clear that you needed to stop. You have not. You have only increased your heresies. That's on 388. A group of ardents and scholars who had been studying the decay on the Spanreed realize that it's almost non-existent, indicating that the writer is near, within the tower's walls. The writer goes on to explain that Navani's actions are heresy because Spren are meant to be free. By capturing them, you trap nature itself. Can a storm survive if placed in a prison? Can a flower bloom with no sunlight? This is what you do. Your religion is incomplete. That's on 388. Then goes on to say that the truth is not evident because you are human. Humans cannot be trusted. You do not know how to keep promises, and promises are what make the world function. We make the world function. You must release your captured Spren. You must, on 389. The group realizes that they are speaking to a Spren. Navani accidentally kicks the Spanreed over the edge of the plateau. She wants to make sure the ruby breaks, and its broken nature is made clear. Navani thinks she knows who the Spren is. She wants to make sure that it and its agent, the spy who likely hid the Spanreed ruby for Navani to find in the first place, know of the lost Spanreed to see how they react to the news. Chapter 29, A Cage Without Bars. The barge reaches land. Shallan and a small team go ashore to scout the town. Eventually, they return and Shallan announces that it's safe for everyone to go into town. Shallan decides to stay on the barge while everyone else goes into town so she can be alone. She realizes that the cube has been moved for the second time before contacting Mraize. While in town, Adolin and Maya find a new Deadeyes, one who had been afflicted recently. Godeki arrives to tell Adolin that he thinks he'll want to see the humans. Chapter 30, The Betrayal. Shallan thinks she might have held a cube when she'd summoned a Shardblade and killed her mother. She gives Mraize her report. She says that they have been watched by Odd Spren. Mraize thinks they were corrupted by Sha Nat. He thinks they must bind her to us, a spren of odium willing to betray him, an ancient creature with equally ancient knowledge. I give you the secondary mission. Watch for those spren closely and make contact if you can on 406. Vale agrees, and when Mraize mentions Glory Spren, she knows Beryl is the spy. The humans are Tukari, apparently traitors, who had somehow managed to cross into Shadesmar. Adolin wonders how. The Tukari, always wreathed in shadow, refuse to speak to Adolin and Godeki. Shallan tells Pattern Beryl is the spy. Vale wonders if they found out too easily. Pattern expresses his worry over Shallan's current state. Adolin speaks to Nodum, the captain of the ship he and company sailed on the last time they were in Shadesmar. Nodum thinks Adolin's diplomatic mission is insane, the main reason being the humans' betrayal of Os, which led to mass genocides. Nodum admits he was removed from duty for allowing the ancient daughter to go. He spent 5 months in prison and has been exiled from lasting integrity. He hopes to dissuade Adolin from his course. Adolin is more determined than ever to get the Honorspren to listen and prove himself useful. Chapter 31, Daughter of Traitors. Raboniel, Venli, and their team march toward Ur-Thuru. Raboniel thinks Venli an odd choice by Leshwi, since she is the daughter of traitors. Venli realizes that Raboniel knows she is a spy for Leshwi. Raboniel reveals that they serve odium for the rewards he will grant them. Chapter 32 of 3 Minds. Adolin realizes the Tukari caravan had been following them since they left the port town weeks earlier. Shallan wonders how to handle the knowledge that Beryl is the spy. Vale still has her doubts Beryl is the spy. Adolin wonders if they should change their approach with the Honorspren but can't come up with any good ideas. Vale informs Adolin that Radiant and I are coping mechanisms that, for the most part, work. But something deeper has started to manifest. Shallan is worried that the person you see in her is a lie, that the person you love is a lie. And it's not only you, Pattern, Dalinar, Yasna, Navani. She worries that they all don't know the real her, because of things that happened to her and more. Some of the things she was forced to do. She's beginning to think that Shallan is the fake one, the false identity. That there is a monster deep inside her that is her real self. She fears it's inevitable that the truth will come out, and everyone will leave her when it does. That's on 427. Adolin begins to understand and expresses his desire to help. Chapter 33, Understanding. Kaladin releases 6 men from the sanitarium who had similar symptoms. He begins rehabilitating them by having them speak to one another, people who can understand, etc. Chapter 34, A Flame Never Extinguished. Adolin holds counsel with the Radiants. They don't like any of his proposals on how to appeal to the Honorspren. Vale continues to doubt Beryl is the spy. Radiant is starting to agree. The Tukari continue to follow the travelers but won't speak to any of their messengers. Adolin fears he is going to fail in his mission. Vale realizes they need to leave the cube unguarded in a non-suspicious way so that they can confirm the spy's identity. Adolin admits to Shallan that he can't tolerate being around his father anymore. Even though he's become the man Adolin always wanted him to be, they've grown apart. Chapter 35, The Strength of a Soldier. The Tukari appear to be giving up on following the travelers. Adolin realizes the truth. Adolin prepares the travelers for a fight. It appears the Tukari had been following Notum, who had been traveling in the same direction as they were until recently. Adolin arrives on the scene first, with Maya and Gallant, to find Notum and his attendants bound. Notum was being tortured. Adolin decides to buy some time, since his soldiers are still several minutes out. Adolin is wounded by a spear thrust on his right side while fighting the Tukari. Maya and Gallant come to his rescue. As a team, they manage to frighten the Tukari Adolin hadn't killed off and rescue Notum. Adolin's soldiers arrive soon after. Chapter 36, The Price of Honor. Notum and his attendants can't figure out why Notum was attacked. Adolin's gut wound is tended to. Adolin decides to take Notum to lasting integrity with them to help ensure his safety. Shallan begins to doubt Beryl is a spy because she can't handle the sight of the corpses. Pattern assures Radiant and Vale that nothing unusual had happened at camp while they were away, but Shallan is certain the cube had been touched. They begin to wonder if they should suspect Pattern. Vale lays a trap for Pattern and realizes that he was lying to her. As they approach lasting integrity, a contingent of Honorspren ride out to meet them. Vale vows to get to the bottom of everything and keep Shallan safe. The Honorspren rip up Adolin's letters and try to turn him away. He will not go. He demands a trial to prove his worth. To stand trial for his ancestors, the Honorspren agree. A few of the travelers will inform Dalinar of what happened, while a few stay behind to care for Notum and wait to hear from Adolin. Adolin, Vale, Pattern, Maya, and Gallant enter the Spren city. Adolin is seized and bound upon entering the city. Adolin refuses to return to his father empty-handed. Chapter 37, Silence from the Dead. Navani's soldiers capture a man who had tried to replace the lost Banreed Fabrial for the Phantom Spren. Venli and company reach Ur-Thuru during an Everstorm. The singers begin to carry out their plan. Tef informs Kaladin that no one has seen Debid for 3 days. Kaladin had introduced Debid to the men he had been treating since he was suffering from severe battle shock. Bentley and company invade Uruthuru. Bentley is discomfited by her first kill. The group begins to make its way up toward the tower. They hope the dead silence will go unnoticed. Chapter 38, Rhythm of the Terrors. Navani investigates an explosion that killed Nem and Talna and destroyed their laboratory. She assumes Zeth's sphere was destroyed. Navani asks Rushu to catalog the destroyed room's contents. Navani wonders if the explosion is tied to the mysterious communication she had received. Bentley and company make it to the basement chamber. They approach a crystal monolith. Raboniel rests a hand on it and speaks to the sibling. She promises the sibling won't awake as herself. Raboniel begins to corrupt the pillar and fully activate the tower's defenses in a way that mutes the radiance as opposed to the fused. Bentley hopes there won't be any more killing. Teft and Kaladin speak to Elaine, who admits to having seen Debid yesterday. Teft, Elaine, and Syl urge Kaladin to join his treatment program. He agrees to join the next meeting. Kaladin begins to feel as though he's finally starting to put himself back together. The tower breaks, an alarm sounds. The singers engage the humans. Voidlight moves from Raboniel into the pillar, infusing a small portion. The effort seems to exhaust Raboniel, but the deed was done. Raboniel announces, "The tower is not fully corrupted, but I have achieved my initial goal. The tower's defenses have been activated and inverted to our favor. The Radiants will be unable to fight. Go, give the signal to the Shanaim. Seize the city on 487. Chapter 39, Invasion. Teft collapses. Kaladin thinks it may be a stroke. Kaladin tries to lash Teft to make him lighter while he carries him to help. It doesn't work. Red informs Navani that her prisoner is Debid. He's desperate for her to contact the Spren. Navani receives a message which says, "Full human, we are under attack. The enemy is already inside the tower. Quickly! You must do exactly as I say or we are all doomed. I am the sibling. I am the Spren of this tower. The enemy, they are doing something to me. This is bad. You need to infuse." That's on 491. The sibling is cut off as Red collapses. Kaladin realizes his powers are inhibited, that he's experiencing things that remind him of the strange fabrial the Fuse had used on him in Hearthstone. As Kaladin and Elaine carry Teft toward Lyran's clinic, they pass more fallen radiants. Eventually, they discover that Syl feels sleepy, the Fused are invading Uruthuru, radiants are falling left and right, and span reads don't work. Navani begins to handle the chaos with the help of runners. She discovers that Debid communicated with the sibling through the veins of garnet on the walls. Lyran returns to the clinic and informs Kaladin that their people are safe. Syl knows something is wrong with her bond to Kaladin. She can't travel farther than a floor away from him without growing distant and forgetful. She can normally travel several miles away from him before she faces any obstacles. Kaladin fears Uruthuru has already lost and knows they need to find a way to contact Yasna and Dalinar. Chapter 40, In for All. Navani discovers all of the Radiants have collapsed and that the enemy holds the Oath Gates, although other fabrials aren't working properly. Navani orders an assault to try and recapture the Pillar Heart. She hopes to find a way to wake the Radiants. Navani speaks to the sibling through the garnets. She explains what the Lady of Pains has done and that the negative effects could be reversed from the pillar. Navani wants to help the sibling from being altered further. The sibling thinks this may be possible with a vast amount of Stormlight, and a method of protection the sibling's last bondsmith put in place. Chapter 41, The Most Dangerous. The pursuer turns into a ribbon of red light and goes in search of Kaladin to exact his revenge. Kaladin is the only one he has permission to kill. The others are to be left alive. Only those who resist are to be killed. The fallen Radiants are to be gathered and brought to Raboniel, who vows to end the war forever. Bentley realizes that Raboniel is more interested in the fabrials the humans have come up with than anything else. Raboniel expresses that their war is endless because humans cannot hold or exploit that which they create, but we cannot stretch far enough to come up with anything new. If we truly want an end, it will take a partnership. That's on 512. Navani begins to set her plan to help the sibling and restore the Radiants into motion. Kaladin delivers supplies to the refugees and people of Hearthstone, who now inhabit an occupied floor of the tower. Chapter 42, Armor and Teeth. Navani infuses a topaz set into the wall with a tuning fork trick she learned from a Thalen artifabrian. Her actions reveal a hidden door to a circular chamber with a pedestal at its heart. Elaine decides to go to the enemy. He feels it may be the safest option for him since an occupation is coming. Elaine hopes it will be a temporary farewell. He intends to become a spy and to find a way to help from the inside. Elaine departs, leaving Kaladin behind. Navani and her team begin to infuse the large sapphire on the pedestal to create a barrier that will prevent humans, the unmade, and singers from reaching the sibling. The sibling urges her to hurry because the Lady of Pains will infuse my entire heart, the pillar, in the proper order using her void light. In so doing, she would corrupt me and leave me. Leave me as one of the unmade. You must hurry. Navani, they have activated the Oath Gate again. Fresh enemy troops have arrived on 526. Navani learns that Moash is the individual working the Oath Gate and that the Lady of Pains has stopped what she was doing. The human soldiers, led by Teofil, nearly make it to the basement, drawing Raboniel's attention, but the tides are turned against them when the pursuer joins the fight. The sibling informs Navani that her men are dead and that the Lady of Pains has returned to destroy her. Navani's team manages to erect the barrier. The sibling informs Navani that she could be corrupted through the sapphire they had infused, so it will need to be destroyed. This will weaken the shield. Navani realizes that she will have to surrender and hope that the barrier will last until her husband could arrive to save them, or for her to discover another way of rescuing the Radiants. Navani orders the destruction of the sapphire, entire fabrial, glass globe, and maps of the tower. Navani prepares to surrender. Raboniel senses Stormlight in the system. She informs Venli that the sibling, the tower, Uruthru, is the child of honor and cultivation, created to fight Odium. The place runs on the sibling's light, a mixture of the essences of its parents. Stormlight alone shouldn't be able to work the tower's core systems. Stormlight, to the sibling, is incomplete, like a key missing several of its teeth on 529. Raboniel is trying to break the lock when the shield arises, keeping her from her work. Raboniel learns that Navani has been captured and wishes to meet her. Navani surrenders to Raboniel. The terms include turning over the Radiants and all people being of equal status despite their eye color. Raboniel wishes to hire Navani to work on fabrial projects. Navani says she'll think about it. She has lost her throne. Chapter 43, Men and Monsters. Kaladin and his family discover that Navani surrendered. He feels as though the war is over. Kaladin wonders why he's the only Radiant who hadn't fallen asleep. He notices Teft is almost awake, a windrunner of the same oath, and wonders if there's a connection. Some of the singers come to collect the fallen Radiants. Kaladin refuses to let them take Teft and gets into a fight with a Regal. Kaladin kills the Regal and lets his companion Warform go. Lirin is angered by his son's actions and refuses to go into hiding with Kaladin, refuses to let the family go with him. Lirin vows to find a way to get everyone out of Kaladin's mess. He sees his son as a monster. Kaladin responds, "I've taken oaths too, father. I'm sorry I'm not the man you wanted me to be, but if I were a monster, I would never have let that other soldier go." That's on 546. Kaladin departs with Teft slung over his shoulder. End of Part 2. Interludes. I-4. Vyre. Vyre realizes the only chain that still holds him is Kaladin. He feels the chain can only be broken if Kaladin acknowledged that Vyre was right. Odium visits Vyre in a vision. He knows Kaladin will be a problem for him. Odium wishes to claim Kaladin as he has claimed Vyre and seeks Vyre's help. Odium learns that Kaladin can be hurt by isolating him and making him fear. The pair plan to show Kaladin visions to bring him to the brink before finding a way to make him leap from the ledge. I-5. Lift. Lift informs Wendell that she asked the Night Watcher not to change. Lift doesn't want to change or grow up because the last time things felt right was when she was with her mother, who is now deceased. When she was her little girl, Wendell and Lift noticed the raid on Uruthru, the change in their feelings, and Lift's powers. Eventually, Lift and Wendell run into a tall man with scarred features, who looks forward to hunting her. Lift starts running. I-6. A boon and a curse. Taravangian considers his work with the diagram and both what he has and has not accomplished. There is a part of him that wishes he could have done more, done better. Odium visits Taravangian and informs him it's time to give the order for his men to betray the coalition. Taravangian knows Odium is planning a war for the heavens with humans on the front lines. He had wanted Dalinar, but could not turn him, which gives Taravangian hope. He manages to trick Odium into showing him the future. Again, there are sections ruined by Renarin. No one is capable of seeing Renarin's future. Since he's close to Renarin, Taravangian realizes that Odium can't see his future right now either. Odium announces that he will miss Taravangian. Taravangian realizes he is showing off. Odium is lonely, could be made to fear. Although he is a powerful god, his mind was human. Taravangian looks farther and realizes Odium fears Seth and his sword. Taravangian gives the order and is arrested, but decides not to give up because he knows a powerful secret. And now I want to take a little bit of time to review Part 2 of Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War from the Stormlight Archives. It's Volume 4. I think Part 2 is really an expansion of the stage that was set in Part 1. It's a continuation of those thoughts. It's diving a little deeper. And we can see this in a bunch of different ways. First, we see that the rift that has been driven between Lirin and Kaladin, his son, has widened. At first, Kaladin is a soldier, and his father has never liked that. He's wanted Kaladin to use his hands for good, for the betterment of other people, as a surgeon. But Kaladin had turned to war and to killing, and that drove a rift between them. And then things start to shift when Kaladin is forced out of the war, forced out of his military position, and forced to find a new way for himself, a new path, and he chooses to go back to his training as a surgeon. And then when the tower is breached and war comes to him and he fights, that final wedge is driven between them when Kaladin refuses to let the fused take Teft, the enemy take Teft, and he kills one of them, and his father refuses to go with him into hiding.
Speaking on the dynamic between Kaladin and his family, it's probably my least favorite part of the book. I don't think it comes off as very natural because his father comes off as very stubborn to the point where it's almost not something that a normal human being would do, because it's obvious that Kaladin's trying, and despite what his father wants him to do and wants him to be, that's not who he is, and he makes decisions that are detrimental to himself, his family, to Kaladin, because he's just stubborn. And I don't really like the dynamic between them. I understand why it's there, because it has to be a portion of Kaladin's struggle, like his internal struggle, but I really could just do without his father in general as a character most of the time. I will say that part 2 did a good job of moving me away from my fears of the Shadesmar plotline, because I was worried that it was going to be kind of like the last book, and I hated Shadesmar in the last book. But the interesting dynamic with Shallan trying to figure out the spy and the trial that was going to be happening that gets teased towards the end of part 2 made me realize that this was going to be more interesting than just kind of aimlessly wandering from point to point like it was in the last book. And even that slower-ish chapter where Adolin agrees to do the trial is immediately followed up by the invasion of Urithiru, which is a really good chapter, and you start moving forward into that like lowest point for the main characters where they've kind of lost everything. They're in a position where they have no power, and it's a really strong follow-up to some chapters that were a little bit slower.
There's definitely a lot of tension in part 2. Part 1 definitely set the stage, and like I said, this really expanded on it. Now we have the good guys, if you will, divided. We have a group of people in Urithiru like Navani. We have Yasna off with Gav and Dalinar to fight a war where Taravangian, it has been teased, is turning on them, as was expected. And then we have Adolin and Shallan and a group of other people in Shadesmar. So there's really no core group, if you will, no communication between everybody. Everyone is divided, and on top of that, everyone is facing some seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Adolin was just captured by the honor spread, and he now has to face a trial. And I don't know if he fully understands the implications of what that means.
I definitely don't think in this moment he understands the implications of it. I think it was a kind of a reckless decision that he made because he's kind of wrapped up in, living up to his father's expectations and his own expectations for himself. And I definitely feel like it came off as reckless, but I think that's very consistent with his character and where his character is at this point.
He's not the smart sibling. He's the fighty, pointy sword, stabby sibling. And then, of course, we have Navani back in the tower, who is now a captive. Kaladin's off in hiding. He, as I mentioned previously, is no longer on speaking terms with his family. He's just stuck with an unconscious Tef in Syl, who is not functioning the way she would normally be functioning. And then we don't really know what's going on with Dalinar and Yasna. We know that Taravangian has turned on them. They have ridden off to war, but we don't see the repercussions of that action at this point in the novel. And we know that there's going to be a lot of tension because it's teased now. We know that the span reeds are no longer working in Urithiru because of the attack that was made on the tower, and communication is going to continue to break down and make everyone feel increasingly divided and presumably weaker and more stressed than they might normally when they can communicate with each other and help each other and understand what the others are going through.
Yeah, this part does a good job of laying some seeds for important moments later on, like the dynamic between Navani and the sibling, which you at this point can probably assume where it's going to go, and I know in the moment I assumed where it was going to go and ended up being right, but it definitely is an interesting dynamic. And you also get the seeds of the situation between Navani and Raboniel, who ends up being a really interesting character, and the dynamic between the two of them I think is one of the stronger dynamics between two characters in all of the books so far. I like a lot of their discussions. I like a lot of the things that they learn and the way that you get world building from the conversations between them that are going to happen in the next part. and going forward into the book. You also get the seeds of the ending with Taravangian, which ends up leading to one of the more depressing moments / chapters later on in the book. And, we'll discuss that when it happens. But he gets this moment of hope and kind of elation at learning what he learns in this chapter. And that turns into something later on. And it's a moment that goes really high and then later on gets really deflated. And I think it hits really hard because of how they set it up and how much they focused on building Taravangian as a character.
I think he's definitely one of the more interesting characters in the series because he makes it clear that he's going to do a certain thing, but it also seems like he has a plan at the back of his mind that isn't being presented to us at the same time. And that's something I've always appreciated about his character. And the other thing I find interesting is that people know they shouldn't trust him and then they do it anyway and they're like, oh, we should have known. And it's like, well, you did. You didn't do anything about it, sillies.
Well, it's kind of like they were in a position where they didn't really have any choice to not help him because of the war situation that they're in and his position within his, segment of the world. And you get more from him in terms of what you were talking about, like the thing that he's kind of doing behind the scenes. You get more of that in this book than you got in the last book. I feel like he was not quite as deep in the last book because you didn't get more of his end game, like what he was actually trying to accomplish besides the short term of saving his people specifically and betraying the others so he could save his people specifically. I also will say that in the Shadesmar plotline, I was very excited to see the Maya thread continue because I was waiting for that to culminate in the last book and it never happened because they spent a decent amount of time on it. He had a lot of one-on-one chapters where he was, training in front of her or he was trying to communicate with her, and I was waiting for it to happen in the last book and it didn't happen. And I was glad that it didn't just get dropped and that it ended up being a plot line that continued when he returned to Shadesmar. And I was just waiting, like, I know something's going to happen. They're building towards something. And I was just waiting for it to happen. And that was really exciting for me because it was something that kind of carried over from the last book. One of the bright spots from the last book when I didn't feel like there was a lot of them.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about that book right now. We're talking about this book right now.
It's very true.
And this book is better. I like the stage that is being set. I like all the tension that's arisen. I've liked, to an extent, how the characters are reaching lows so that they can develop and grow as people. But at the same time, I remember as I was reading it, it felt like a bit much. I was like, oh, we're back to the depressed Kaladin chapter. Darn it.
I will say the depressed Kaladin and Kaladin in altered mind state is not as bad in this book as it was in the last book. I feel like Kaladin was borderline insufferable in the last book, and it made me hate him as a character. This one, I think he was a lot better, mostly because there was enough going on where I felt like we didn't have to wallow in it. I felt like in the last book, I know we're not talking about the last book, but I feel like in the last book, there wasn't enough happening plot-wise to make you be okay with the fact that you were dealing with your main character just being a crappy character. And in this one, every chapter that goes on, there's something happening, there's important things being learned, there's plot that's happening, there's character moments that are happening. So you're not just sitting there wallowing in the fact that you don't like any of the characters and you don't like anything that's going on.
I would agree with most of that. I do think that there is a part of me, though, that wishes it wasn't such a major focus, because we're also getting a lot of Shallan and her multiple personalities or personas, if you will. We're getting Adolin's self-doubt, his hatred for his father, his resentment, and Navani's, to an extent, we haven't quite gotten there fully yet, but quest to really figure out her own purpose and stand on her own feet as opposed to being associated with other people, which is something that was hinted at in the prologue.
I will say the Shallan stuff started to get on my nerves, where she was doing the whole withdrawing into herself thing, and I don't remember, there was a term that they used for it, and they were constantly using that term, and she was just constantly withdrawn, and they were trying kind of like coaxed her out, the other personalities and whatnot. And that was kind of getting on my nerves. I'm looking at it from a hindsight perspective that I really like where it ends up. The last couple of chapters before that whole plot line culminates are really good. And I think the culmination and how it manifests is also really good. So I can look at it and go, oh, it was a, really good through line, but in the moment I was kind of getting tired of it.
Gotta take the good with the bad, Jer.
That's true. So, but I think sticking the landing can make you, forgive a lot of things. I feel like, again, talking about the last book didn't stick the landing in almost any plot line.
We don't mention the last book, Jeremy. We've spoken about this.
I feel like Dalinar was the only one who got decent payoff in the last book, but everybody else kind of got shafted. So everything that you were kind of having to put up with, you never got a good culmination, so it didn't pay off. In this one, I feel like everybody kind of pays off. So regardless of the things that bother you in the moment, I think it's, it ends up in a good place.
Part 3, Songs of Home. Chapter 44, Tinder Waiting for the Spark. Kaladin senses his life crumbling as he searches for a place to hide. He soon realizes that the pursuer is after him and is receiving help from other singers. They are laying a trap for him. Eventually, a faint, violet light leads Kaladin to safety. He puts Tef down and rests. Chapter 45, A Bold Heart, A Keen and Crafty Mind. 9 years ago. Eshonai scouts the perimeter of a forest near to where her family lives. She intends to make a map that will show how large the forest is. While out exploring, she encounters humans. Like her sister, Venli feels frustrated and dissatisfied by her people's goal of winning back a city, reclaiming the rightful seat. Venli wants something more. Although an apprentice keeper of songs, Venli enjoys experimenting with Spren and longs to discover the lost forms of her people. Most specifically, she is trying to find Warform. It had been several generations since anyone had held this form. Venli is about to receive the blessing of the elders when the warning drums sound. Venli's announcement is overshadowed by her sister's actions, Eshonai's discovery. Chapter 46, The Weight of the Tower, Present Day. Navani informs Raboniel that she will organize her scholars and continue the research under the Feud's observation. Navani explains how her flying machine works to Raboniel and learns that it is sometimes difficult to persuade Spren to appear as devices in their realm. That void Spren are not naturally self-sacrificing from her. Navani concludes that soulcasters didn't hold Spren because they were Spren. That's on 593. Raboniel explains that she thinks the war can be ended with shared information and the singers in power. Navani checks on her scholars and discovers who was lost in the attack. She informs them that they will be cooperating. Rushu informs Navani she didn't find anything in the destroyed room. Scholars are put back to work. Navani is trying to figure out how to get them all out of their current predicament. Kaladin has a nightmare about War and his friends, Moash. He awakens to regret his decision to rescue Teft. He decides to do some scouting, with Syl to find supplies. Chapter 47, A Cage Forged of Spirits. Dalinar's forces fight the traitors and their allies. He believes they will soon win. Dalinar receives word of what has happened in Ur-Thru. He sends word back of what is happening in the battle, of Taravangian's betrayal. The Mink believes the enemy's efforts to block them from the Oath Gates, and the battle is a distraction. Dalinar and the Mink take precautions since Dalinar is also convinced something is wrong. Nolan, herald and leader of the Skybreakers, attacks Dalinar, whom he feels is not worthy of being a bondsmith, because his cause is not righteous. Dalinar touches him at the Stormfather's command and begins to see flashes of Nail's memories. Dalinar sees the Oath Pact, the thing that bound them together and made them capable of holding the enemy in damnation, a cage forged of their spirits. The Stormfather said in his mind, it was broken, even before Jezreel's death. They shattered it by what they did long ago. No, only one line of it is completely broken. The rest are there, but weak, impotent. Dalinar pointed to one line, bright and powerful, except one, still vibrant. That's on 609. Nail flees. The Stormfather isn't sure if Dalinar can reforge the Oath Pact, or how. Dalinar sees how the heralds suffer for what they did. Dalinar realizes he needs to both understand his abilities and find a way to use them to end the war. Reforge the Oath Pact, or find another way to bind Odium, permanently. Chapter 48, Scent of Death, Scent of Life. 9 years ago. Eshonai spends a lot of time with the humans learning their language. Eventually, she takes them to the Shattered Plains. Gavilar, his brother, and company see a chasm fiend. Gavilar is interested in the listeners. When he returns, he hopes to find Eshonai's people living in one of the cities on the plain's edge. He also wants to hear from the Keepers of Songs upon his return. Chapter 49, Soul of Discovery, Present Day. Navani puts her scholars back to work. the sibling informs her that Raboniel is trying to break through the shield. Navani has 4 tasks to complete: maintain her ground, which meant the shield couldn't be destroyed, inform Dalinar of what had transpired, determine how the enemy had negated radiant powers, and turn the power upon the singers and/or mount a counterattack with the awakened radiance. The sibling explains that the shield is an extrapolation of the surge of soul casting. It solidifies the air in a region by persuading it that it is glass. For the shield to be maintained, the system needs to be fed by external sources of stormlight. Raboniel might realize this, especially if she researches the remnants of the node you use to activate the shield. There are other nodes like that one, with crystals connected directly to my heart. There were 4. You destroyed 1. If she finds one of the other 3, she could use it to corrupt me from the outside. That's on 620. Destroying the nodes would weaken the shield and eventually destroy it. The sibling explained she could not activate her defenses during the attack because of the binding of the Unmade, which cost the singers their forms. I lost the rhythm of my light that day. The tower stopped working. My father, Honor, should have been able to help me, but he was losing his mind, and he soon died. That was on 621. The fused is still corrupting the sibling. The sibling informs Navani that 2 Radiants are awake: Lift and Kaladin. Lift because she is capable of using light differently than others. Kaladin, perhaps because of his closeness to Honor, the surge of adhesion. Navani asks if she can contact Kaladin. While out scouting, Kaladin and Syl discover that the enemy is attempting to make it appear as though Ur-Thru had not been taken over. There are figures in blue uniforms guarding the Oath Gates, for example. Kaladin secures some stormlight and other supplies. Navani contacts him through a crystal vein. The pair update one another. Navani instructs Kaladin to find out how the enemy is operating the Oath Gates and/or other fabrials. Navani tells Kaladin about the shield and the nodes. They plan to connect again the following day. Chapter 50, Queen. 2 days have passed since Taravangian's traitors were defeated. Kharbranth is now led by Taravangian's daughter, Savrahilidem, who had disavowed her father and declared neutrality, but offered aid to both sides of the war. The monarchs decide to secure the west in an effort to eventually recover Alethkar. The Mink agrees to help as long as his kingdom is liberated afterward. Dalinar wants to learn how to use his powers, become something more, in order to bring the war to an end. He speaks to Yasna about reforging the Oath Pact, so the fused can't be reborn, forcing Odium to negotiate with them. Yasna says she'll think more on it. Wit warns Dalinar to watch the High Princes. Lyn informs Dalinar that Radiants can't get within hundreds of yards of the tower. Dalinar orders another scouting expedition for that night. He wants a report of anything suspicious. Wit and Yasna bait Ruthar, a High Prince who disrespected Yasna and was a voice of discontent, into a duel. After besting him, Yasna forces Ruthar to forfeit his title, which will pass to his eldest son, and begin a new life. Yasna reveals that she plans to enact a law forbidding trial by sword. Renarin informs his father that he's had an episode. They plan to discuss it later. Chapter 51, To Sing Hopeless Songs. Venli and Raboniel discuss Navani's stalling tactics, such as moving boxes of notes and equipment around. Venli discusses her plan to escape with Duel, who informed her that Alava and Ron are making packs of supplies for them. Duel also lets her know that Schumann is attempting to recruit others. Venli asks that Schumann be reassigned to a menial task with minimal social interaction, and reminded that she's not to recruit. Venli begins to tell Timber of the second time the humans came to visit. Chapter 52, A Path Towards Saving, 8.5 years ago. Venli and Eshonai's mother, Jaxlim, begins to forget the songs. She claims to be tired. They live with their people in one of the 10 ancient cities now. Venli finds Eshonai, who tells her that she wants to travel the world with the humans when they return. It had been months since the humans' departure, but Eshonai spots smoke and soon realizes that the humans have returned. Venli is frustrated by the humans. They leave her little time to herself and insist she answer their questions and sing songs over and over again. Venli is worried about her mother and having to become keeper of songs in her place. Venli speaks with Axendweth, a woman who can speak a rhythmless version of the listener tongue. She offers to teach Venli how to obtain a form of power and gives the mistrustful Venli a single, glowing, blood-red gemstone. She instructs Venli to take the gemstone into a storm and break it. Inside, you will find a path toward saving those you love. That's on 656. Chapter 53, Compassion, Present Day. Venli hadn't told her mother or sister about the gemstone because she didn't want her sister to continue to overshadow her. This led Venli to live what she felt was her sister's destiny. She had become radiant and survived. Venli receives reports. She learns that Kaladin is conscious and killed one of their people, that Raboniel's order involving the punishment of anyone harboring radiance, and the radiants themselves to be executed, unless willingly revealed, was being carried out. Venli realizes that Raboniel wants the radiance for something since she is sparing someone decides that she must tell Leshwi about Kaladin. The pursuer already knows. Venli learns that Kaladin escaped and that the pursuer intends to interrogate Kaladin's family and kill them for Kaladin's actions that night. Venli, who views herself as a false radiant, informs Leshwi of what she has learned about Kaladin and his family. As a favor to Venli, Leshwi takes Kaladin's family into her custody. Leshwi instructs her to find a place where we can watch them, then send me a note. I will consider if there is a way to use them to find Stormblessed, and for now, we'll spread a rumor that I have disposed of them. Even if the pursuer finds the truth though, they should be safe for the time being. That's on 663. Leshwi warns Venli that she shouldn't allow others to see her compassion for humans, because the compassion will be misconstrued. Leshwi knows she has to find Kaladin in order to fight him again. Chapter 54. The Future Become Dust. Dalinar comforts Gav, who fears his father died because of him and feels his mother was evil. Renarin is conflicted about telling his father what he saw. He feels the visions are bad and from odium. Eventually, Renarin gives in and summons the vision. In the vision, Dalinar wears white shard plate pierced by a black arrow. He is fighting an enemy like the sun. He controls and dominates everything, and although your figure raises a sword high, it's facing the wrong direction. You're fighting, but not him. I think I understand the meaning. You want a deal. You want a contest of champions, but you're going to keep fighting and fighting distractions. Because why would the enemy agree to a contest that he can theoretically lose? That's on 668 to 669. Dalinar informs his son that he's been thinking about reforging the Oath Pact and making the enemy fear. Renarin informs his father that his visions interfere with Odium's ability. Because I can see possibilities of the future, my knowledge changes what I will do. Therefore, his ability to see my future is obscured. Anyone close to me is difficult for him to read. That's on 670. Renarin tells Dalinar of the other Spren Sha-Anat has touched. Dalinar is reluctant to accept them. Bliss knows they need more like them. Renarin thinks he knows someone who will be the perfect choice. Chapter 55. Kinship with the Open Sky. Dabeed is guided to Kaladin by the line of crystal. He bears broth. Kaladin leaves Teft in Dabeed's care while he runs an errand for Navani. Kaladin is too slow to get to the Oath Gate, but he notices that the Oath Gate glowed the wrong color when a transfer was made. Having had Syl spy on some enemy scouts who were watching both the Oath Gate and the sky during his descent of the tower, Kaladin realizes that they were communicating with the Oath Gate operators via span reed. Kaladin has Syl follow the scouts. He intends to steal their span reed. Chapter 56. Nodes. Venli visits the room with the tower model where roughly 50 fallen radiants were being kept. Venli speaks to Duel. They continue to plan their escape and acknowledge that the Windrunners seem closest to waking. Venli wants Duel to try and wake a Windrunner. She knows they'll need a distraction to aid in their escape. Duel thinks a surgeon may help with the plan and to tend to the fallen radiants. Venli thinks Kaladin's father may be a good fit. During a meeting with a group of Deepest Ones, Venli discovers that there was no invisible Spren in the tower, and the secret Spren were useless when it came to finding Fabrials because the whole tower is a Fabrial. That meant both she and the Radiants could use their powers unnoticed. Venli also learns that they are looking for the nodes that created the shield, and have not had any luck yet, but feel as though at least one node must be somewhere where Stormlight could renew it, naturally. Azish, Duel's wife, informs Venli that they have found another listener, like her. Chapter 57. Child of Odium. 8.5 years ago. Eshonai enjoys the company of the human visitors and knows they are leaving soon. She wishes they stay longer. Eshonai speaks with Dalinar and expresses her interest in seeing where they live and having the humans visit them more often. Dalinar warns her to be careful since the attention of his people could be dangerous. He promises that they will meet again. Tired of living in her sister's shadow, Venli steps out into a storm with the gemstone she had been given. Venli breaks the gemstone, freeing a Spren who agrees to live inside her and help her accomplish incredible things. The Spren intends to scout out things on Roshar before they truly set to work. There is a part of Eshonai that wishes Venli wasn't around because she dislikes how she complains and her jealous nature. When Venli returns from the storm, Eshonai learns that Venli had not achieved war form and that her sister is struggling with her rhythms, and seems more confident than before. Chapter 58. Span Reeds. Present day. Syl and Kaladin follow the scouts. They discover that they dropped off their span reed in a span reed hub. After Syl causes a distraction, Kaladin seeks past the guards to the span reed hub. With the help of some rope, a brush, and a reverse lashing, Kaladin steals a leather case filled with void light span reeds. As Syl and Kaladin begin to make their way away, they notice a blinking garnet light. Kaladin speaks with a sibling who informs them that she needs his help because the enemy has found the node open to the air. She needs his protection. Kaladin knows he needs a better weapon and to move quickly. Chapter 59. The Lattice of a Growing Crystal. Kaladin steals a spear from a group of guards. The sibling begins to guide him with her light. Kaladin sneaks and fights his way through the tower to the siblings' node, where he finds Raboniel and the pursuer. It appears a trap had been laid for him. Kaladin and the pursuer get into a fight. Then, Kaladin forces the pursuer to chase him before trapping him in a hidden room. Afterward, Kaladin returns to the node and destroys it. He knows he could not have defended it on his own. Raboniel stabs Kaladin and learns that his healing powers are lethargic. She wants to know more about his limitations. Raboniel doesn't kill him and instructs Kaladin to depart. Kaladin flees. Chapter 60, A Sigh. It's the day after the destruction of the node. Venli visits Elaine, who had been imprisoned for being an Asai, or human sympathizer. He had betrayed his people. He had been sent to spy on the humans and had become friends with the humans. The pair catch each other up. Elaine had been sent to the bridge crews. The others of their kind had been turned into fused by odium, while Venli had been preserved to tell stories and inspire the freed singers. Venli tells him that she intends to form a new group of listeners. Elaine wants to defeat odium and insists that Venli get him out of prison. He wants to be taken to Asina. He has something useful to show her and Venli if she proves helpful. Venli agrees to try and get him out. Venli finds Raboniel in the Blackthorn's rooms with a group of fused who are busy cataloging his belongings. Raboniel is speaking to a scarred man who wishes to strike a deal for the use of the Oath Gates. He gives Raboniel an advance on future payments and a gift. A captured edge dancer who is fueled by lifelight as opposed to Stormlight. Venli tells Raboniel about Elaine. She demands that he be released into her care as compensation for her service to the fused. Raboniel agrees, warning Venli she will be punished if he acts out. Venli retreats to speak her next oath about freedom. She wishes to free those who have been bound. Her words are not accepted. She realizes it's because she didn't do anything to help the young edge dancer. She realizes she needs to change to progress as a Radiant and respect her powers. Chapter 61, Oil and Water. Kaladin reports to Navani. His job is to continue to buy her time with which to work and reverse what has been done to the tower. Raboniel's further corruption of the sibling has weakened Kaladin further. Kaladin explains that he managed to steal some working span reeds. Syl studied them and realizes their spren have been corrupted. The rubies work on Voidlight now, probably because of the spren. Kaladin knows they need to get word to Dalinar about what is going on. Kaladin is instructed to keep an eye out for Lift as well. Navani intends to think through things more on her own before they speak again to try and resolve various problems. Navani is tired of simply stalling. She wants to figure out how to turn the tides and knows part of that involves getting the tower to regulate itself and raise its defenses properly. Things it has not done since around the time of the Recreants. Navani asks the junior engineer, Tomar, to sneak a device that will help Kaladin get up and down the tower quickly in a map out of their confines so that Stormblessed can retrieve them. Tomar agrees to try. Raboniel confronts Navani about how her scholars aren't making much progress because they're repeating work. Raboniel informs her that Navani will work alone going forward and give written instruction to her scholars twice a day. Raboniel will vet them. This is to curb deceit and force progress. Raboniel informs Navani that the shield is a soul casting. Raboniel shows Navani a tower light, a mixture of Stormlight and Lifelight. Raboniel wonders if they can mix Voidlight and Stormlight too. Raboniel agrees to give Navani scholars gems that will work to power fabrials within the tower as proof of good faith. Navani is instructed to experiment with the tower light. Once Raboniel leaves her, Navani speaks to the sibling and asks to know where the remaining nodes are so her people can keep the enemy from locating them. The sibling will only speak to Navani about it once she has plans in place to deflect the enemy's attention. Navani agrees. Chapter 62, Keeper of Forms 8 years ago. Venli shows the Elder's friend she trapped in gemstones. She learned how from the humans. They intend to use them to adopt forms more easily and take on new forms as well. Eshonai is making regular expeditions and has learned that the Human King wished to formalize relations with their kind. The Elders wonder if they should try and present a united front and form a government like that of the humans. Eshonai wishes to try and unite the other families with them by showing them how much there is in the world. The Elders say they will consider her proposal. She is dismissed. Eshonai speaks to her mother, whose mind is clearly going. Jaxlum knows Venli must learn the songs. Venli returns to their home and announces that the Elders have decided to try it and are seeking volunteers to take on the new forms. Jaxlum informs her she needs to practice to take over as Keeper of Songs, but relents when she learns that the new forms may help her mind. Jaxlum decides to try the new form and thinks her daughter may become something new, the Honorable Keeper of Forms. Chapter 63, Practice, Present Day. Syl wakes Kaladin from his nightmares. He discovers that Dabeed has left some supplies while he was sleeping. Syl tells Kaladin she asked Dalinar to make her feel as humans do. They agree to help each other through the dark times. Dabeed delivers the personal lift to Kaladin. During their meeting, Navani tells Kaladin about the device and how it works. She also updates Kaladin on her plans and progress. Kaladin agrees to speak with her again after he has tested the device. Kaladin begins to practice with the device. He crashes several times and breaks his hand, forcing him to use Stormlight to heal. Chapter Chapter 64, Personal Reminder. Yasna fights alongside her men in a battle taking place in the Drunmu Basin in Amul. She wants to experience how war feels. Yasna slaughters the enemy until she grows numb. Afterward, Wit tends to her and reminds her to use what she has. Explains that he thinks traditional battle formations may soon come to an end. After the battle, the Mink informs Yasna that they broke the core of the enemy's strength. Wit informs Yasna that he had failed her. One of the Sleepless had spied on them. They assume it knows all their secrets. Due to his fears, Wit decides to tell Yasna about Thydakar, whom Wit says he's met several times, on other planets. The Ghostbloods are not a Rosharan organization, and I don't think you appreciate the danger they present. That's on 761. Chapter 65, Hypothesis. Navani studies light. Navani's experiments confirm Raboniel's theory that Tower Light is a combination of Stormlight and Lifelight, present proof that the fused desire to mix Stormlight and Voidlight, which she intends to use to end the war, is possible. Navani asks Raboniel about spheres that warp the air around them. Raboniel explains that there are theories about these. Anti-lights, which would cause instantaneous annihilation if the negative light were to combine with its positive. Navani is instructed to continue experimenting. Raboniel informs Navani that if she can find a way to combine Voidlight and Stormlight without destroying them, demonstrating that they are not opposites, she will free Ur through. Navani can't help but wonder why Raboniel wants to prove or disprove whether the two light forms are opposites. Chapter 66, Bearer of Agonies. The Stormfather shows Dalinar that he can see the connections all people have. Dalinar visits Taravangian nearly 2 weeks after his betrayal. Taravangian tells him he did it because he is going to lose. Taravangian states that Cultivation told him so. Taravangian reluctantly admits that even though there was a slim chance they could win, he chose to sell mankind out. Dalinar doesn't agree with his actions. Taravangian could be wrong, asserts that he was, and that he did everything he had done for power. Taravangian denies it. He had allowed himself to be captured so Dalinar wouldn't go after Kharbranth. Dalinar asserts things could have gone differently if Taravangian had sided with them. Taravangian gives Dalinar permission to kill him since he had accomplished what he wanted. Dalinar decides not to kill him so that he can live to see him defeat Odium. Dalinar departs. Seth warns him not to trust Taravangian. Dalinar doesn't. Chapter 67, Song of Stones. Venli informs Timber that she blames herself for her mother's death. Jaxlum had drowned. Venli had put R'lain and Kaladin's family together and tasked them with the care of the fallen Radiants. Venli begins practicing with her powers. Venli connects with the stones, who teach her their song and show her a past she should remember. Dawn Singers working the stone. It makes her feel as though she belongs there. Venli begins to practice shaping the stone. Venli is visited by 3 Spren who wish to bond with her friends. Venli sends them away. Bonding with her friends would be too dangerous. She wants them to remain away until she finds a way out of their current predicament. Venli thinks she may be able to use her powers to aid in her and her friends' escape. Chapter 68, One Family, 8 years ago. Eshonai leads her mother into a storm for her transformation. Eshonai absorbs the light from the gemstone her mother had been carrying and transforms. Eshonai embraces the change. Eshonai and a group of others discover that they have taken on a warrior's form. After the storm, an attack arrives on their doorstep. Venli urges her sister to talk to Sherfell, their family's shard bearer. Eshonai does not want to use the shards against other listeners. Venli replies that they must be prepared to use the weapons because the humans will turn on them eventually. Eshonai and those who had taken the new form visit Sherfell. There is a disagreement over who should take the shards. Eshonai decides that Sherfell should keep them since the others aren't ready. She asks that he stand with them. Sherfell doesn't want to use the blade to fight other listeners. She insists he will not have to, for the day will sweep in a new beginning. Eshonai and company approach the battle. She announces that they have discovered Warform and invites their terrified enemies to join them. They are reluctant to. Eshonai makes it clear that she intends to unify the other families into a single nation in order to better face the humans. She also makes it clear that her family will not fight today, but there will be repercussions if they are attacked. After her speech, the group departs to train and be admired. Chapter 69, Pure Tones of Roshar, Present Day. Navani continues her studies and discovers the pure tones of Roshar, 3 notes correlating to the 3 ancient gods with the power to prompt a reaction in the god's corresponding light. Navani has no luck combining Stormlight and Voidlight. Navani speaks with the sibling, who explains Tower Light is her light, the one she can form. That the defenses no longer work because I don't have the light for them. I lost most of my strength when I lost the ability to hear the 2 pure tones of Roshar. I can make only a tiny amount of light, enough to power a few of the tower's basic fabrials. That's on 795. Navani is confused. She had thought there were 3 tones. The sibling explains that she is mistaken. There are 2 tones, one for each of the siblings' parents. She claims Odium's tone is false. Navani wonders if part of the reason the sibling lost her abilities was because Odium's tone became a pure tone when Odium became a true god. They need to find a way to restore the sibling's light and remove the void light from her. Navani is working on it. Navani returns to her experiments. She tries to mix life light with the other lights and fails. She knows what she is working on will determine who wins the war and tries to plan around it. She decides to create fabrial weapons as a defense. She disguised them as failed experiments. Navani speaks to the sibling. The sibling explains that the lights don't mix. They come together as one. That's on 798. The sibling informs her that she can sense Kaladin, that the Edge Dancer is surrounded by Ralkalest, which is why she is invisible, and she can see a Regal who can speak all languages. That Raboniel is also experimenting with light and hasn't gone as far as Navani. Navani asks if the sibling would be open to bonding with the singer in Bridge 4. The sibling states that there wouldn't be a point until her tower light problem is solved, since they won't be able to create the light either. They decide to focus on that problem for now. Navani shares her plans to protect the remaining nodes. They convince the sibling to tell her that one of the remaining nodes is in the well at the heart of Breakaway Market. The sibling wants Kaladin to infuse it with Stormlight to see if the corruption can be counteracted. The sibling refuses to tell her about the final node until she has seen that Navani's plans help. Navani returns to her work, but is interrupted by the sibling's light frantically flashing. The sibling tells her that the enemy has found the node in the well. She's doomed, and Kaladin is too far away to help. Navani insists the sibling contact Kaladin anyway while she figures out a distraction. Chapter 70. Well. Kaladin awakes from a nightmare. Syl informs him of the sibling's plight. Dabeed helps Kaladin prepare to meet the enemy and says his first words to him, life before death, on 804. Navani demands to speak to Raboniel. It becomes clear that the enemy had expected her to try and distract them, and she realizes that Kaladin is in terrible danger. On his way to the well, Kaladin is attacked by the pursuer in the Breakaway Market. Heavenly ones are also incoming. After Kaladin forces the pursuer to retreat, he engages Leshwi while Syl scouts out the node's exact location, so he can be led to it. Kaladin is wounded during the fight and realizes that his Stormlight is responding even more slowly than before. Syl returns and signals that she is ready. Leshwi suggests Kaladin surrender since their fight is no contest. Kaladin refuses to surrender and makes a break for the node where he encounters Raboniel, who cuts him with the dagger. Kaladin breaks the node. While making his escape, Kaladin is trapped as a lid is placed over the well and weighed down. Kaladin begins to panic. He's trapped and without Syl. Kaladin decides to seek the source of the water. He makes his way to a reservoir. He forces himself to keep moving to avoid being found and eventually stumbles into a group of enemy soldiers. They begin chasing him. Kaladin heads for the storm to evade them. Chapter 71. Rider of Storms. Dalinar is concerned about both Navani and Ur-Thru, so he plans to lead a team into Shadesmar, travel to Ur-Thru, and open a perpendicularity, which will allow spies to go through to the tower. He isn't sure the plan will work. Dalinar longs to see what is happening at the tower, so the Stormfather offers to allow Dalinar to ride the storm alongside him. Dalinar accepts. The pair head toward the tower, where Dalinar finds Kaladin wounded, clinging to the outside of the tower. Dalinar speaks to Kaladin and discovers what has become of the tower and its radiance, that Kaladin is fighting. Kaladin falls from the wall, unconscious. Dalinar uses the winds to save Kaladin, placing him on the 8th floor. Dalinar is forced out of the vision, which his scribe had recorded. She hadn't heard the parts where he'd spoken as the storm. Dalinar realizes Taravangian and the army in Amul had been sacrificed to keep him busy as the tower was invaded. Dalinar calls for an emergency meeting of monarchs. The Stormfathers hurt Dalinar pushed against their bond, by taking a second look at Ur-Thru, etc. He states that Dalinar's powers won't work in Ur-Thru. He needs more experience. Dalinar is frustrated. His training is moving too slowly. The Stormfather can't help him. Only Honor could have trained Dalinar properly. The pair realize there is another bondsmith. Dalinar speaks to the herald, Shalash, who confirms that Ishi, creator of the Oath Pact, is a bondsmith. Dalinar knows he would understand what I can learn to do. Then he needs to find a way to speak to the God Priest, then convince him to help me rescue Ur-Thru on 825. Chapter 72. Outmatched. Navani waits, nervous and knowing that she has been both outmatched and defeated. Raboniel comes to visit. Raboniel reveals that she had always listened in on Navani's conversations with the sibling. Either she did it or another fused. Navani realizes she provided the enemy with the location of the 3rd node. Raboniel tries to soothe her by blaming the naive sibling. When I touched the pillar, I knew the sibling was awake, but pretending to be dead. So I let the ruse continue and I listened. I couldn't know that decision would bear fruit on 827. Raboniel won't admit how she did it and insists Navani return to her studies and help end the war instead of fight her. Raboniel admits they didn't kill Kaladin, who isn't healing from his wound because the sibling's transformation is almost finished. that he headed into the storm. Raboniel departs. Navani prays for Kaladin. She feels like a failure. End of Part 3. Interludes. I-7. Szeth. Szeth is on guard duty, watching over Dalinar and Gavinor, whose laughter frightens him. Szeth is visited by a High Spren who refers to him as his acolyte. The High Spren agrees to accompany Szeth on his crusade to judge what is true. The Spren states that Szeth may have to fight and kill those who have broken their own laws, that to progress as a Skybreaker, you will need to become the law. To reach your ultimate potential, you must know the truth yourself rather than relying on the crutch presented by the Third Ideal. That's on 834. Szeth is to continue his duty, but know it must eventually be abandoned for something greater. Szeth returns to his duty and finds Dalinar speaking to a woman about Taravangian's requests. Szeth discovers that Taravangian requested an Oath Stone. For years, Szeth had obeyed the law of the Oath Stone. The centuries-old tradition among his people dictated the way to treat someone who was truthless, like him, since his warnings that the enemy would soon return were rejected by his people, leading to both his exile and truthless status. An object, no longer a man, something to own. That's on 835. Szeth wonders why Taravangian wants an Oath Stone and what he is planning. Szeth knows he needs to stop Taravangian before he killed Dalinar. I-8. Chiri Chiri. Chiri Chiri, a Kremling, overhears a meeting between Ryzen and another soft one. She learns of the sleepless, who are all around them and not human. Chiri Chiri hears a warning, one of the rhythms of Roshar. The soft one acknowledges that what Risen told them puts Risen in more danger, but Risen needed to tell someone. The old soft one says his knowledge doesn't extend into the god's dealings, and his self-indulgences nearly ended both the life and career of his most promising apprentice. The old soft one states that they will help Risen bear their burden. Risen states they must tell no one. The unnamed one says they will think on what they learned to figure out what advice to give. Mentions dawn shards, then departs. Chiri Chiri tries to speak, does a little, shocking Risen. I-9. The Sword. Taravangian wants to meet with Szeth, alone. His smartest self had instructed him not to speak to Dalinar. When a visitor is announced, Taravangian assumes his planted seed had borne fruit. Taravangian is surprised to learn that Renarin had come to visit. Renarin claims Taravangian is lost in darkness, but not alone. Tells Taravangian if he sees anything that will help him come to a decision, he will inform him. Renarin departs. Szeth speaks to Taravangian while disguised as a guard and asks why he requested an Oath Stone. States that he will not follow Taravangian's orders. Taravangian asks if he brought the sword because the sword is something we didn't anticipate. It was nowhere in the diagram, but Odium fears it. Do you understand? He fears it. I think it might be able to harm him. We attack him with it. 842. Szeth reasserts that he will not serve him and refuses to be manipulated by him. Taravangian informs him his father is dead and continues, I believe his ability to see us here is limited. Therefore, we may talk freely. I doubt you can harm Odium directly unless you are in one of his visions. You must get into one of those visions. Can you do this? That's an 842. Taravangian begs Szeth for his help. When Szeth turns to leave, Taravangian instructs him to give Dalinar the sword. Dalinar is taken to Odium's vision sometimes. It should travel with him. Do you understand? Odium thinks the sword is in Uruthuru. He doesn't realize you're here. He can't see it because of Renarin. That's on 842. Szeth states that he doesn't understand Taravangian's attempts to manipulate him and refuses to help. Szeth departs. Taravangian weeps. Now that I've taken the time to summarize Part 3 of Rhythm of War, I want to take some time to give it a review with my bestest buddy Jeremy.
Hello.
I think Part 3 really highlights the plight of the humans and their allies. It shows how much communication has broken down, how everyone is divided in their own little part of the world with their own little pocket of people, and there's no connection for them to really support each other because they simply cannot communicate, and everyone is struggling with something or other.
Yes, you get a lot of restrictions placed on the characters because of where they are, where they're located, and the systems that they've come to rely on, especially since moving to Uruthuru, are no longer something that they have access to. I do like that in this part we get a little bit of like a training montage kind of thing, which I feel like we haven't gotten in a while, with Kaladin trying to learn how to use the Fabrial tool that Navani provided for him. It reminded me of early on when he was trying to use his powers, and I think Brandon Sanderson does a good job of explaining the nitty-gritty on how systems work and powers work, especially going back to things like Mistborn, and it was nice seeing that again.
I think the only thing that was difficult with this section is that there was so much new information presented with the different forms of light and the different types of fabrials and how they all function, and a bit more of an exploration of Renarin's powers than I feel like we've gotten. We don't really see much of him. That it was kind of a lot to take in on top of just how horribly screwed the human race is in this moment. They can't communicate. The Radiants, which really are their first line of defense, arguably, can't use their powers. They're all asleep. The Fused have taken over their stronghold. Taravangian's group has turned on them, and we've lost a lot of people. And I don't think necessarily that the information is misplaced. I think we started to need to delve into things a little more heavily, especially at this point in the series. But I think it was a lot to get at once, and that's what made this section difficult. Not only was it emotionally heavy in a way that the novel hasn't necessarily always been, or the series hasn't necessarily always been all at once, but you had to take in a lot.
Yeah, I think they had to deliver a lot of information all at once because they didn't want to spread out Navani and Raboniel's kind of back and forth more than they needed to, because if you didn't kind of condense it into this part, then you would have had to stretch out the whole story to kind of make that plot line go along with the timeline that it has to go along, because everything's basically happening as the different chapters are happening. Like, it seems like you're kind of jumping back and forth, but it's roughly around the same time period with tiny little fluctuations in time. And in order to kind of get all of that information dumped out in this part, you even had to skip the Shadesmar plot. They didn't even go to the Shadesmar plot at all. And I think that was kind of refreshing because we didn't have something that was completely disconnected from the Urithiru plotline. And that also left room for us to start exploring into Eshonai and Venli's backstory, which will eventually culminate in information that we kind of need to put everything together and how things got to the way that they are.
I think the only issue I have with dividing a group of people that we're following more heavily up and not mentioning some of them for a while is it kind of strikes you when they do show up again. It's like, oh, we haven't seen you in a bit. And then you kind of start to forget what was happening to them when you get to the point where they actually reappear.
I think it was structured fairly well, though, with the Shadesmar plot, because you had the last culmination of that story being the decision to go forward with the trial. So the fact that it kind of reached a peak and then kind of sat there where it didn't get touched for a while, we're getting a reintroduction back into that story when they come back in, because we kind of hit a natural pausing point for it.
Yeah, I think that was the best decision that Sanderson could have made if he was going to go about writing the novel this way, which clearly he did. He chose to stop that plot for a little bit to focus on other things. And if he had started the trial, let's say, I think it would have been a little less natural and a little harder for readers to pick back up on. So I'm happy he did it the way he did. I will say, though, now that I've read all 4 books that are currently out, and we're now a little more than halfway through this one, that I wish they would focus a little more on Renarin. I feel like he's like the neglected son. I think Yasna and Shallan were more of a focus early on, and we don't see as much of Yasna now, but Renarin was someone who has never been a focus at all, and I think it's kind of interesting, especially because his powers are so unique in comparison to everybody else. You can see shards of the future, possibilities of the future, but a part of me also feels like they're not focusing on it because his understanding of the world and Taravangian's are so similar, but they go about their approach of using the information that they have, as limited as it is, in very different ways.
I do think that you're right in the fact that they're kind of comparing that character perspective between the two of Taravangian and Renarin. And once Taravangian's perspective isn't as much of a focus, I think we'll shift more to Renarin. I think right now, if we shifted too much on Renarin, it would almost be one of those situations where he's like, could potentially know too much information if we're in his head too often. It's like in the early Game of Thrones books when they stayed out of certain characters' heads, because if you ever went into like Littlefinger's head, if we had POV chapters for him, we'd know too much information. So I feel like having a like future sight kind of character, we already kind of have one with the diagram and Taravangian. Having another one probably gives us a little too much foresight on what's going to happen. And that transitions fairly well into I-9, the sword, which was the moment that I alluded to in our last review of part 2. And it's that moment at the end where Szeth leaves and Taravangian weeps. And that was a very like frustrating and kind of dour moment for the reader because you're getting a lot into Taravangian's head in this book, and you're getting a lot of his justifications and his reasonings for doing the things that he's doing. And he has these moments of, you know, the smart self and then his like dull or dumb. I don't remember what he calls himself. There's like the smart self and then the dumb self. And he has these moments where he's kind of struggling to hold on to the information he has when he's smart. And he puts a good effort forth in this situation, trying to explain himself. He comes out and says everything that he needs to say. He doesn't like tiptoe around information or anything like that. And he's burned too many bridges, and Szeth just doesn't believe him. And in that moment, you're like, he's telling you the truth. We want Szeth to believe him, but we also understand why he doesn't. And there's this kind of moment as a reader where you're like, oh crap, like he has important information, but he's not able to pass it on and not able to get people to do what he wants because of the bridges that he's already burned. So I think it's a really good moment for that character because we've been building that character little by little over this book and into the previous book.
It almost makes me question whether or not he truly wanted to betray everybody. Like, he's convinced that mankind is doomed, that man is going to fail, that Dalinar is going to lose, and there's no turning away from that. But in these tiny little moments, it seems like he's almost trying to redeem himself. He's like, well, actually, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm actually not wrong, but I might be wrong, so I might as well suggest that maybe I can be wrong. And it's kind of interesting. It almost makes you question everything he's saying to you. Like, we know as readers that what he has just said to Szeth is true, but it becomes easier to question whether or not the other things he believes about their current situation are true.
Yeah, because I mean, we do get that conversation between him and Dalinar in the last set of like the last Taravangian chapter. I don't know if it was the previous one or the one prior to that, but where he talks to Dalinar and he explains to him, is like, I knew you were going to lose. That's why I did what I did, even though there was a chance that you would win. So he's going based on the information that he feels like he has, and he is very stuck to that information that he feels like he has from the diagram. And I don't think as a person he morally agrees with the decisions that he's making. I just feel like he thinks he's making the best decision for everybody involved, especially his people specifically. And it's like that Doctor Strange moment where he's looking into the future and he finds the one outcome that they could potentially win, and he's like, this is the best way for us to salvage something out of this, so that's what I'm going to do. But he's also trying to, potentially win the war and beat Odium as a whole. So he has good in him. You're seeing that.
And I think it's interesting that he holds onto that thread, the larger thread, arguably, of negativity that they are going to use. Because I feel like a lot of characters, and yes, they're predominantly heroes, and I wouldn't necessarily describe Taravangian as one, when they look at those odds, it's like a Han Solo moment where they're like, oh, never tell me the odds. Like, there's going to be a way to win. I'm going to prevail in the end. And Taravangian is largely convinced that that's just not going to happen. And it's so refreshing to have a character like this who's just so convinced that they're going to fail and tries to make the best out of a losing situation, if you will, because we see the opposite so frequently. And It makes for such a complex character, which I think is why I'm drawn to him so much. There's so many layers to this character, and he progresses and complicates the plot in ways that aren't always clear as you're reading through until the very end of the novel.
Yeah, I think Sanderson builds him very organically over the time that he's been in the story, and you identify with him more than you identify with most of the characters because he has a realistic outlook. He doesn't have the outlook of, like you're saying, a hero who's always like, we're gonna find something, we're gonna win in the end, it doesn't matter how the odds are stacked against us. He's practical and he's pragmatic, and he's approaching it from a perspective of someone that is like, I want to protect my people. This is the best way I feel like I can do that. And you also get moments, because you're jumping back and forth between the smart side and the dumb side, where this is not like a scholar or a tactical genius in those moments when he's dumb, because he comes off as a normal person, because he is trying to interpret information that is, it came from him when he was smart, but it might as well be coming from another person because it's information that he doesn't understand or have the recollection of. So we get to approach that information from a layman's kind of perspective. And speaking of different perspectives, I feel like we run the gamut between the different extremes, where you have kind of down and dour perspectives like Szeth or Kaladin at moments and Shallan. And then you have ones on the other side that are all triumphant in Dalinar's brighter moments and the sort of triumphant moments that you get from Navani at times, because I feel like Navani is in her element now. I don't think she was great as a leader. Honestly, as a leader of the people of Urithiru and essentially the Radiants, that whole faction, I don't think she was in her element, and I don't think she was making the best decisions. But now she's back to being a researcher and a scholar, which is where her passions lie. This is the thing that she wants to do. And honestly, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to her as a character, was getting shoved in this room and just figuring things out and researching and experimenting, because even though she's in this dour situation, she seems almost triumphant in the moments where she does figure things out. And I know you're saying that we're getting a lot of information dumped on us, but I think it's interesting. And I think, and having known where it ends up, the way that the information gets dripped out to us leads to a culmination that makes sense. And I think every little piece makes sense as it goes along. And I think that just speaks to the talent at world building that Sanderson has.
I have to say, I don't enjoy Navani as a character. I don't enjoy the work she did and the nitty gritty detail that Sanderson went into in describing her work. But I would say it's realistic. Like, she comes up with a theory, she tests it, it's wrong. She comes up with a new theory, she tests it again, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right, and she keeps adjusting. So there's a natural progression to how the information is revealed to us. But I would say that at times it was a little frustrating when we learn a thing, we're convinced, okay, this is the thing, and then before we know it, it's not actually the thing, and then we have to relearn information, because it can get a little confusing when you're told this, but then actually no, it's not this, it's this.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that, but I think it comes from the fact that the information is being delivered to us by the characters who are organically figuring it out as they go along.
Right.
So they have an understanding on how it works, and then they realize that that's not how it works. And they're in a situation where they're going up against enemies that have a better understanding of what's going on than they do, but not necessarily more complete of an understanding, because Raboniel has a lot of information, and I really started to like Raboniel as a character because I feel like she's really complex, because she has ways of manipulating the situation, but she seems genuine in her goals. And the fact that she's very open with the information that she gives out, understanding that she can't get to where she wants to get to without Navani's help. So she's coming at it as an organic and a open discussion with her, and she's not guarding any information. Like, she could have kept going and not telling Navani that she could overhear the siblings' conversation. That's something she easily could have kept to her chest and maybe gained more information out of it later, but she tells Navani about it because it's an open dialogue between them, and it's only through that open dialogue that we end up getting the revelations that we end up getting to.
I mean, yes, but I also think, because of the timing of everything, it was kind of obvious. You know, Navani has this conversation with a sibling, and she finds out where the node is, tells Kaladin, or finds out where the node is, and then has to tell Kaladin because Raboniel found out, and then immediately an attack is made on this node.
Yes, it seems like that more when you're going through the summary, I feel like, than it does in the moment, because there's a lot of stuff that takes place in between. There's a lot of talking that takes place in between. So it doesn't seem like an immediate pieces together when you're, reading it in the moment. But yes, it does seem like that made sense. But she also was actively looking for them. So it's not like she wouldn't have eventually found it. Most likely she found the other ones. So it's not like she wasn't going to find it eventually. It was just trying to get there first.
Yes, but if, let's say, this conversation happened and then a week later the attack happened, it wouldn't seem to have such a clear connection. Because even if she hadn't been told, I think Navani would have been like, it's kind of weird. I just had the conversation with a sibling about where this node was, and, it seems like 5 minutes later it got attacked. Because she has such an inquisitive mind and is so interested in research, I think she would have started to really question things. And that might have been an interesting path to go down, further limitation of communication because of fear that, someone was listening in, but it might have been a little too much.
I think it was just an extra restraint that you didn't need to put on the situation because there's already so much stacked against it. There's just how many obstacles do you need to put in the way, because it already seems like there's a lot of obstacles. But the groundwork is laid in pretty much every aspect. Every character's story has the groundwork being laid where you can kind of think as a reader, like, I could see how they could potentially use this to get out of this, even if I can't put it together entirely yet. Because we definitely don't have enough information to understand where it's going to go with, the pure tones and void light, life light, all that kind of things, what the end goal is. We don't have enough information yet, but it's starting to get there. So overall, I think this part did a good job of organically building the story, though at times it was a lot of information. I'm glad that they got a lot of the background information for Venli and Eshonai and a lot of the nitty-gritty information out of the way in this part, while we also weren't focusing on Shadesmar, so we could move forward and not have to get info dumped as much. So I was willing to take this part in the middle of the book, the dead center of the book, to just kind of take a step back, do some world building, lay the groundwork so we can move forward and have plot going forward, especially knowing that we're going to go back to Shadesmar going forward, and we don't want more info dumping kind of bogging that down when we're already splitting our attention to essentially another dimension.
And I'm going to jump right back into things with Part 4, A Knowledge, the Summary. Chapter 73. Which master to follow? 8 years ago. Venli plots with Ulam. She wants nimble form soon. Eshonai had taken the credit for everything, and she and her companions had taken strides toward unity. Ulam explains that they need to use the new storm to pull more Voidspren over from Shadesmar. Ulam explains that her people aren't ready to accept the new forms of power, that they need to learn how to fight properly in order to face the humans or be enslaved. Ulam explains how her people lost in the old days. We couldn't break the last herald, and the humans found some way to pin the whole Oath Pact on him. So we got stuck on Braze. Eventually, the Unmade decided to start a war without us. That turned out to be exceedingly stupid. In the past, Odium granted forms of power, but Ba'ado Mishram thought she could do it. Ended up handing out forms of power as easily as Hughes to give to each other titles. Connected herself to the entire singer species. Became a little god. Too little. Everyone relied way too much on an oversized Spren. Trouble is, Spren can get stuck in gemstones. And the humans figured this out. End results? Ba'ado Mishram got a really cramped prison and everyone's souls got seriously messed up. It will take something big to restore the minds of the singers around the world. So we're going to prime the pump with your people. Get them into storm form and pull the big storm over from Shadesmar. Odium thinks it will work. That's on 847 to 848. Ulam promises Venli will be rewarded when the return occurs. States that they need to prepare her people to take on the new forms before summoning Odium storms, after which point everything will resolve itself. Venli visits her mother, who is struggling since she keeps getting everything wrong. Venli tries to comfort her as she thinks on how she wants more and plots with Ulam, who insists she will be worshipped when she brings more forms to her people. Venli states her ancestors' primary teachings were not to allow their gods to rule over them again, not to adopt forms of power, and never to serve Odium. Ulam says not to serve him, but to contend with him from a place of power, since she had something he requires. Venli knows war with the humans is coming and that her people will be enslaved if they lose. She has to choose between their gods and enslavement, not their gods or freedom. Ulam asks her how she wishes to proceed. She asks that he help prove the humans will destroy her people. Jaxlum cries because she can't remember a song. Venli asks that Ulam have his agents living amongst the humans influence those at the palace. Get the Alethi to invite us to visit. Their king spoke of it before he left. He's considering it already. We must bring our people there, then show them how powerful the humans are. We must overwhelm my people with our own insignificance. That's on 850. Venli comforts her mother as she asserts she must make her people afraid in order to get them to listen to them. Ulam agrees to her plan. Chapter 74, A Symbol, Present Day. Venli blames herself for what happened with Ulam. She wants to try and make up for it. The Fused had spread rumors about Kaladin, including that he had been killed. Raboniel, busy with her research, had paved the way for the pursuer to lead the tower. His troops create tension and treat the humans cruelly. Relaine and Venli head to the Radiant Infirmary, where Relaine reveals a box filled with map cases he had retrieved from the Queen's information vault. He hopes they will help undermine the occupation and help Kaladin remain hidden. Relaine gives Venli a map of the tunnel complex under the tower. She thinks it may help them escape. Venli speaks to Liren, who claims to resist by controlling his situation and working with those who have power over him so he and his loved ones won't be hurt. 6 workers come bearing water for the Radiants. Liren notices that some of them have Shash glyphs painted on their foreheads. Bentley realizes it gives them hope. Lyran fears it will get them killed. They may follow in his son's footsteps, provoking a massacre. Bentley thinks there is a chance, but also thinks it may help to keep them going. Serve as a symbol they can trust when they can't trust their own hearts, on 856. Lyran isn't convinced and returns to his patients. Chapter 75, The Middle Step. Adolin had been incarcerated for weeks. Godecki had been allowed to enter lasting integrity to heal Adolin before being sent away. However, Adolin was given permission to communicate with his fellows via letter. Some of the team remained behind to await word of his trial, while others had gone back to share what had happened with Dalinar. A group of Deadeyes had gathered on the coast outside the city. Adolin respects the Honorsbrand for taking many of the Deadeyes in and tending to them. Adolin is allowed to visit Maya daily to do their exercises together. The Deadeyes' behavior is strange. They should be wandering, not congregating on the coast. Val, Adolin's primary jailer for excursions, thinks it may be because they can sense what is happening in the keep with Adolin's impending trial. Finally, Val announces that it's time to begin the day's legal training, that the High Judge will soon return to begin the trial. Shallan had become extremely reclusive since they discovered Pattern had been lying to them. When she emerges, Formless comes with her. Vale and Radiant had been looking for Restaras within the lockdown city but hadn't had much luck. There is only a single individual left to investigate on the list of humans living within the fortress they had been given by the Honorsbrand. 16. They wait for him to emerge from his home to get a better look at him. Radiant asks Pattern why he bonded Shallan despite his fear that she'd kill him. He explains that it was so they would be complete and capable of facing the enemy, that he needed to try despite the risk because even if he died, it may be the step the other cryptics needed to keep going. Pattern admits that he has lied to them before, has been spying on them, and using the cube. Pattern tries to introduce her to another Spren. Shallan emerges, enraged. She locks Radiant away. Shallan refuses to have anything to do with Pattern, whom she calls a traitor who betrayed her trust. 16 emerges from his home. Shallan stalks him and grabs him by the shoulder. She soon realizes he is not Restaras, for the man is Shin and not Alethi. Shallan releases him. 16 flees. Pattern wants to explain what he has been up to. Shallan refuses to hear what he has to say. She just wants to move on. Shallan announces that they must report to Mraize, whose intel was incorrect. Restaras is not in lasting integrity. Chapter 76, Harmony. The sibling won't speak to Navani, who is sorry for what happened. Raboniel visits Navani and reasserts that she wishes to end the war. Navani calls for a declaration of peace. Raboniel won't. She claims humans and singers were designed to fight one another, like how Stormlight and Voidlight don't mix. But if Navani can prove the opposite, Raboniel's theories fall apart. Raboniel claims Navani can still beat her. Humans have outsmarted the fused before. Navani explains that she has hit a roadblock. She needs an emulsifier to combine the light forms, which she thinks may be related to sound. Raboniel explains that the tones issued by Navani's tuning forks are the same as the tones issued by a sphere, only the sphere's tone has a rhythm to it. Each light has a rhythm. Honor's is stately, Cultivation's is stark and staccato but builds, and Odium's is chaos, but with a certain strange logic to it. The longer you listen, the more sense it makes. That's on 872. Raboniel informs Navani that Tower Light has two tones, a harmonic mixture of cultivation and honor, and a harmonic rhythm. Navani wants to know why light responds to tones, why there's a rhythm that makes plants grow. Raboniel has heard that the lights respond to sound because it is reminiscent of the voice of the shards commanding them to obey. That's on 873. Navani conducts another of her experiments and asks Raboniel, if you could imagine a rhythm that mixed Stormlight and Voidlight, what would it be like? On 873. Raboniel can't picture it. The pair sing the tones of Odium and Honor in harmony, allowing them to infuse a diamond with a vibrant black-blue light. Raboniel admits that the two lights did not destroy each other. She was wrong. That their rhythm is known as the rhythm of war. Navani asks why Raboniel would have preferred if the two lights destroyed each other. Raboniel explains that Honor was killed using some process we do not yet understand. I assume from things I have been told that some opposite was used to tear his power apart. I thought if I could discover this opposite light, then we would have power over the gods themselves. Would that not be the power to end a war? That's on 877. Navani realizes what Gavilar had been doing and wanted. He had been looking for a way to kill a god. Navani realizes something Raboniel doesn't. There's an opposite to Voidlight, the light Gavilar had given to Zeth, who in turn had given it to her. She wonders both why and how. Raboniel takes the infused gemstone they had created. Raboniel admits she thought for certain it was something about the nature of Odium's power contrasting Honor's power that led to the destruction. I was wrong, and you have proven exceedingly helpful in leading me to this proof. Now I must abandon this line of reasoning and focus on my actual duty, the securing of the tower. That's on 877. Raboniel had lied. She would not be upholding their bargain and leaving the tower now that they had discovered the new light. Boniel says Navani can continue her research or obtain another job in the tower. She admits she is in Navani's debt, where Boniel departs. Chapter 77, The Proper Legality, 7.5 years ago. Venli is at the palace in Kolinar with her people, who are going to sign a treaty with the humans. Venli is busy sneaking into forbidden portions of the palace and questioning her plans. Couldn't it lead to war, and why was Ulam so eager? Venli had been asked to retrieve a bag of gemstone Ulam's agent had left in the palace. She knows her sneaking about puts the treaty at risk. At the meeting point, the pair discover a ciphered note that states Axendweth had been discovered. There was another like her in the palace, an agent who served another, and turned the king against her. She had decided to depart. Ulam decides to leave, alarming Venli. Ulam states that they lack a plan. Their people aren't intimidated by the humans. They're enjoying themselves and curious, which concerns her because Venli can clearly see the humans as a threat. Ulam departs. Venli eventually departs as well and is soon spotted, captured, and brought before an older soldier. Venli is to stay with them until the treaty has been signed. If anything goes wrong, they will speak again. Ulam reappears and announces they have a problem. There are heralds at the feast. Nail, who recognizes Ulam, arrives and takes Venli into his care. Nail wants to know how many Voidspren have returned, raves that he has not been vigilant enough, explains that he has legal jurisdiction here to act on behalf of the king. I cannot, however, take specific action against him. Tonight, I found reason to have him killed, but it will take me months of planning to achieve the proper legality. Fortunately, I have read your treaty. There is a provision allowing one party to legally break it and attack the other, should they have proof the other is conspiring against them. I know for a fact that Gavilar is planning to use this provision to assault your people in the near future. I give you this knowledge, sworn by a herald of the Almighty. You have proof that he is conspiring against you, and may act. The man who can help you is a slave for sale in the market. The slave you want is the sole Shin man among the crowd. This Shin man bears Jezreel's blade, and he is expertly trained in its employ. That's on 887. If she commits a crime, Nail will deem her innocent. Nail departs. Ulam asks if Venli thinks her people will be desperate enough to listen if they were to start a war. Venli is uncomfortable with the idea. She had only wanted to prepare her people for the possibility. Ulam wants to go ahead with Venli's original plan. He uses the information Nail had given them and Venli's ambitions to manipulate Venli into agreeing to strike first, so the humans fight back, and the listeners become desperate enough to take the forms or face destruction. Venli wants to see her people restored to power. She is willing to pay the price. She asks what she must do. Chapter 78, The High Judge, Present Day. Shallan tries to forget about the cryptic deadeye she had seen. Pattern explains that he had been talking to Wit through the cube because he was worried about her. Wit warned him that he had been spied upon by the Ghostbloods, and that someone had heard their conversations, which was why Mraize knew so much. This means none of Shallan's friends are traitors. There is no spy, save for Pattern himself. Pattern agrees not to keep anything else from her. Shallan can't help but wonder who killed ELA though, even though Pattern's admission addressed many of her concerns. Shallan reports to Mraize about her inability to locate Rastaras and wonders if there is a way to confirm what Pattern had told her. Their conversation is cut off when she hears people shouting. Adolin's tutor, an Inkspren named Blended, who served as the official Inkspren emissary to Lasting Integrity, informs him that he is not ready to face his trial, which has been set for 3 days from now. The trial which would let the Honorspren pin the sins of the ancient Radiance on him and condemn him as a traitor and murderer. That's on 894. Blended suggests that they motion for a trial by witness. Adolin agrees. They review his general trial strategy, which is to persuade them that I cannot be held accountable for the actions of the ancient Radiance, that they cannot shun me or my father because of things done by ancient humans. In order to accomplish this, I will prove my character. I will prove that the modern Radiants are unconnected to the old orders. And I will prove that our actions in the face of the current crisis are proof of the honor men display. That's on 897. Blended outlines each phase of the trial and makes it clear she doesn't think his chances are good. I will give you the best chance I can, but please understand. Spren, all Spren, fear you with good reason. In order to prove you wrong, they need only prove that bonding men is a risk. That past failings of men justify wariness. That's on 898. The pair go to see if the High Judge has returned, so Adolin can make his petition. They discover that he has drawn quite a crowd and is human. Vale is surprised the High Judge appears to be human, appears to be Rastaras. Vale speaks to Lysyntia, the Honorspren who had shown her around when she first arrived in the fortress, and discovers that the High Judge is Clock, Herald of the Almighty. Vale is shocked she had been sent to find and possibly kill a herald. Chapter 79, Open Wound. Elaine is the subject of ridicule and bullied by both humans and the singers in Urithiru. He knows he is being watched by a voidspren, bonded to a Kremling. Elaine delivers fresh sheets and pillows to the Radiant Infirmary. He's baffled by the humans wearing the Shash glyph. Many of the humans who had worn it had been beaten by the Pursuer and his soldiers, until Raboniel had overturned the order. Fused guards were now posted in the infirmary. Kaladin's parents assume they have been recognized. Elaine suggests helping them escape. Liren thinks Leshwi's protection is enough to keep them safe. Elaine and his Zenith think that if Kaladin had maps of the tower, he'd be safer. Neither Elaine nor the people of the tower believed the rumors that Kaladin had been killed. Dabeed enters the infirmary. The sight of him opens an old wound within Elaine. He and Dabeed were the only Bridge 4 members who hadn't gained Windrunner abilities. Dabeed speaks to Elaine. He asks him for help because Kaladin has fallen asleep and won't wake. Dabeed fears Kaladin is dying. Chapter 80, The Dog and the Dragon. Kaladin is caught in a stormy nightmare where the wind hates him, he is without Syl, etc. When all hope seems lost, Wit rescues him and explains that Odium has isolated him in a vision, although he isn't sure how. Wit warns Kaladin that he will have to go back out into the storm eventually and that things will get worse. Kaladin fears he is not strong enough to face it. He admits he is close to giving up and asks for a story as they eat rock stew. The story of the Lightweaver, Wit, tells Kaladin is known as the Dog and the Dragon, in which a dog admires a dragon he had seen and starts a quest to become one. The dog learns new things like how to farm on its quest, but fails to become a dragon. However, it saves one of the farmer's children. Kaladin is dissatisfied by the story. He feels as though it has the wrong ending. By looking up at the dragon and by trying to become better, he outgrew the other dogs. He achieved something truly special. That's on 919. Kaladin begins to think the story is about him. He said he wasn't good enough. You think I have impossible goals, and I'm intentionally ignoring the things I've accomplished, on 920. Wit denies it, stating that any meaning is for you to assign Kaladin. That's on 920. Kaladin feels stronger and learns the real ending. The dog realizes that he has it better than he thought, better than the dragon. Wit explains that life will have its up and downs, but things will get better for him eventually. Then, Wit drops his shield and releases Kaladin back into the storm. The nightmare vision so Odium won't notice him and destroy him. Chapter 81, Trapped. 7 years ago. Eshonai retakes war form and considers how her people had fled Alethkar. Food, Eshonai's friend, fears things won't go well. The humans were retaliating. Eshonai and a group of her people had voted to have Gavilar killed because he was going to bring their ancient gods back. Now, all the listeners needed to do was hold out, face being trapped in the center of the plains. There was no escape. Eventually, they knew they'd have to fight the humans. Eshonai vows to fight them fiercely so that her people may remain free. Venli speaks to her friends about accepting Voidspren into their gem hearts to help guide them. Venli needs her friends' help, bringing additional Spren over from Shadesmar. Then they're going to get everyone to take forms of power and rule the Spren as opposed to the other way around. She acknowledges that Eshonai and her followers cast them into war, so they all have to take the step that will allow them to save their people. Chapter 82, Knife, present day. Radiant contacts Mraize. She is frustrated he withheld information about Restaris' identity. Mraize thinks Gavilar may have known, but doubts any of the other Sons of Honor knew he is a herald, one of the beings they wanted to restore to Roshar. She isn't sure what to do now that their target has been located. Vale emerges and states that because she is not being trained and has been lied to, she can't see a point in continuing with their arrangement. The reward is of little interest now. She questions what else Mraize has withheld and if her actions go against the best interests of both herself and her loved ones. She asks why Mraize is so interested in Kolek and what she's really doing in the fortress. Vale finally opens a cube and finds a dagger. Mraize wants her to stab Kolek with the dagger, which will collect his soul, trap his essence within the gemstone on its grip. Mraize wants to communicate with Kolek while he is trapped. Apparently, Thydakar has an affliction he thinks Kolek may be able to help him with. Vale doesn't think it's good enough. Mraize calls Kolek a monster. He, along with the other 8, abandoned their oath pact and stranded Telenalat, the bearer of agonies, alone in damnation, to withstand torture for thousands of years. The enemy has returned, but have the heralds come to help? No. At best they hide. At worst, their madness leads them to hasten the world's destruction. Kolek wants to escape his duties. He worked with Gavilar knowing full well that doing so would cause the return of the Fused and the end of our peace, because he hoped to find a way to escape this world. A way to abandon us, as he had already abandoned his oaths and his friends. He possesses knowledge essential to our fight against the invaders. However, he will not share it willingly. He hides himself away in the world's most remote fortress and tries to pretend there is no war, that he is not culpable. He is. The only way to make him do his duty is to bring him back by force. And the best and easiest way to do that is to trap his soul. That's on 930. Vale says she can't do it because he's Adolin's judge and his disappearance would arouse suspicion. The reason she had been sent becomes clear. She could take Collect's place, vindicate Adolin, and force the Honorspren to join the war. Shallan realizes they'd have to make the switch on the final day of the trial to reduce the act and learn more about him. Mraize insists that Collect's delivery, sending Honorspren to their world to bond humans, could save millions of people. Vale has her doubts about their ability to imitate Collect. Mraize says that the Herald's behavior is so erratic, it'll be fine. Shallan says it doesn't feel right. To sway her, Mraize revises their deal. If she does as she had been told, he will make them a full Ghostblood, which will provide her with knowledge and a say in the Ghostblood's actions. He insists she do what needs to be done. Save your husband, your kingdom, and your world all at once. Become the knife on 931. Adolin discovers the High Judge's identity. When Adolin approaches Collect, he learns that Adolin has come to ask for the Honorspren's aid in the war and to stand trial for the Recreants. Collect thinks the war can't be won. The best thing is to escape, since the world belongs to Odium now. That's on 932. Adolin petitions for a trial by witness. Collect accepts. The trial is to begin the day after tomorrow in a large public forum. Collect makes it clear the trial is a sham before departing. Adolin doesn't think much of him. Blended takes Adolin away to prepare him for his trial. Chapter 83, The Games of Men and Singers. Venli learns from the stones that this place was once known as that a spren resided there that was not deceased, as Raboniel had said, that the tower had been shaped from a mountain. Venli practices with the stone, with her powers, and remembers her past. Venli meets with Leshwi and informs her the pursuer has located Kaladin's parents, that fused guards have been posted in the infirmary. Leshwi tells her to watch for other signs, that she is enough to keep them safe. Venli asks why she is spying on Raboniel. Leshwi replies, "We watch because we are frightened." To Raboniel, the games of men and singers are petty things, but so are their lives. We watch her, Venli, because we want a world to remain when she is finished with her plots. That's on 937. Venli heads to the infirmary to check up on everyone. She discovers that Rlain and Liren are fighting. Kaladin had survived his ordeal and was in a coma, dying. Rlain and Dabeed refuse to take Liren to him unless he promises not to give both Kaladin and Teft to the invaders. Liren insists Kaladin will die. Hesina decides she'll tend to Kaladin in her husband's place. Liren protests. If Kaladin is bleeding internally, he will require a surgery. Liren agrees to help, but insists Kaladin will need to be brought into the infirmary if he's in a coma. He'll need long-term care. Dabeed says he'd rather die than be brought to the infirmary. Timber is excited. Venli mentions that she knows of an edge dancer whose powers work, one they could rescue. Venli, Dabeed, and Rlain rescue the edge dancer with the help of Venli's powers. The Bridge 4 members lead the edge dancer to Kaladin so she can heal him. It still isn't time for Venli to say the words. She'll know when. Chapter 84, Scholar. Something had always gotten in the way of Navani becoming a scholar, but now she was free to explore. Although she considers a different path for herself, she has too many questions, such as how one would go about creating Voidlight's opposite. She begins constructing weapons and traps, experimenting and creating more Warlight with Raboniel. They cannot create it without one another's help. Raboniel visits Navani and gives her a dagger with the ability to collect a Herald's soul. Raboniel admits she wanted to capture those noted to be within the tower, but they had departed with Dalinar. Raboniel explains that they've used the metal, Racium, to drain radiance of their Stormlight for quite some time. It conducts investiture, drawing it from a source and pulling it inward. We used it to fill gemstones. That's on 948. Later they learned they could use it to capture both Spren and Heralds. Navani wonders if the information could be used to recover Jezereza Alin. Raboniel says she'll put their souls somewhere safe, so they can't be released again once captured. Navani explains she wanted the metal because it may be a better method of conducting Voidlight and Stormlight. Navani realizes the tower's defenses had collapsed. Navani's only hope was to create a weapon with the ability to kill a god. Raboniel tells Navani to write down her findings and continue her experiments. Chapter 85, Dabeed. Dabeed had always been different. He was 6 when he started talking, etc. His speech informed people of his difference, so he just stopped doing it. After his mother perished, others had grown meaner to him. Dabeed had wound up running bridges after he was wrongly blamed for impregnating the wife of his Light Eye's master. He'd nearly been trampled to death by a horse used by one of the soldiers in Sidious' army and taken on battle shock. Kaladin had really helped him overcome certain obstacles in his life. Dabeed leads Rlain up the tower, where they meet Lift. Dabeed leads them the rest of the way. They find Kaladin thrashing on the floor. Lift heals Kaladin. Dabeed informs Verlaine that he never spoke before because he didn't want anyone to know he was different. Dabeed claims his condition will be fixed when he bonds a Spren. Becoming a Radiant will heal me, because my brain isn't supposed to be like this. I was hurt after I was born. The tower said so. That's on 955. Teft wakes up. Lift had healed him. She has the power to wake the Radiants. Verlaine and Lift begin to fill Teft and each other in. Lift has been in a cage. Her Spren has disappeared. The tower has been occupied and Lift didn't know about it, etc. Kaladin stirs. He's finally awake. Dabeed had returned the favor and pulled Kaladin out of damnation. Chapter 86, The Song of Mornings, 1.5 years ago. The singers are at war with the humans. Venli is certain she made the right decision. Venli wants her people to break in the hopes that they'll be more willing to adopt a new form of power, Stormform. Venli's goal is about more than protecting her people now. She wants true freedom as well. Venli speaks to Denshil, a farmer, who is helping her gather small gem heart pieces from the gem hearts their warriors win during their raids. The remainder of the gem heart is put to work in the fields. Denshil says he has saved several hundred gemstones. Venli wants more. He thinks she is crazy but agrees to help. Venli speaks to Ulam next. He thinks they are close to being ready to bring the storm Spren across from Shazemar to capture them. The storm is nearly upon them. Venli makes Ulam promise he'll serve her when the storm comes, but they have to bring the Spren over first and persuade the others to take the forms. Venli isn't worried, although Ulam appears to have some doubts about their ability to make their plan work. Eshonai appears in the shards of the former Shardbearer. She leads Venli to their mother, who had become disoriented and injured her head. She isn't sure how. Venli and Eshonai decide to get their mother a servant to watch over her. Eshonai apologizes for bringing their people to war because of the sphere Gavilar had given her, which contained a dark power, and his desire to return their gods. Venli thinks they may want to explore that option. Eshonai chastises her. The sisters make peace over the Song of Mornings. Eshonai thanks Venli for all she does and has done. Eshonai asks if Venli could find her another form, which would increase her communication skills and allow her to act diplomatically. She wants to speak to Dalinar and explain things. Venli agrees to try. Eshonai hopes to talk to Venli better too, in that form. Venli admits to doing things Eshonai wouldn't like. She knows her sister will tell her it's wrong, and she'll be right. It's part of the reason Venli dislikes Eshonai so much. Eshonai had already fallen asleep. That evening, Venli heads into a storm to hunt Stormspren for the first time. Chapter 87, Trial by Witness, present day. Adolin's trial begins. Many have gathered to watch. Amuna, a Spren who tends to the Deadeyes within the city, is the first to speak against Adolin. She speaks of how 2,000 honor Spren were alive at the time of the betrayal, and only one survived, Syl. She claims that modern humans can't be trustworthy because they pillage, etc. Adolin tries to defend his stance by mentioning how his father bonded the Stormfather. Kelek thinks it's a good point. Amuna makes it clear she does not think their kind should join the war. Blended is called to the stand next, so a Spren who is not an honor Spren would have a chance to weigh in on this proceeding. That's on 969. Blended argues that men cannot be trusted and Spren should not bond them anymore since it's unnatural. Adolin argues that's not true because Spren and sky eels bond to fly, for example. Blended mentions that the High Spren have considered joining the enemy. Adolin is not pleased. They serve Odium, who is evil. Blended closes with the statement that no more of their kind will die if they do not bond, an easy solution. Nodum, once captain of the ship, Honor's Path, is the third and final witness called to the stand against Adolin. It appears that Nodum's peers offered to end his exile in exchange for a false testimony against Adolin. Nodum can't go through with it and causes a commotion when he says, "Honor is not dead so long as he lives in the hearts of men." That's on 972. He is removed from the forum along with anyone who speaks the words. There is definitely some underlying tension amongst the Spren. Adolin speaks to Kelek after day one. He thinks the day went well for him because one witness couldn't refute the point he had made about Dalinar, etc. Kelek states the Spren deserve better than Adolin or himself. He refuses to order them to fight. To do so would be to abandon what little honor I have left. That's on 974. Adolin feels the trial isn't as hopeless as it seems if he can convince some of the honor Spren to join the fight, even if he loses the trial. Kelek responds with the fact that a lot of Spren are thinking about joining Odium's side and that if the honor Spren join him, many other Spren types would as well. You came here to recruit, but I suspect you will end up tipping these finely balanced scales and not in the direction you desire. That's on 974. After comforting Adolin about the trial and what he learned of the Spren's minds, Shallan falls out of a tree and pretends to be seriously hurt. Pattern sells the lie, saying she'll die if she can't get Stormlight to heal. Shallan is brought to a building containing lots of Stormlight-filled gems by Lysyntia and some others. Vale swaps one of her dun emeralds for a glowing one. Vale thanks Lysyntia for saving her. The Spren has to fill out some paperwork as Vale makes off with their prize. Chapter 88, Falling Star, a year and a half ago. Venli returns home. She has finally captured a Stormspren. She knows Stormform is near. Eshonai worries it could destroy their people. Venli counters they are already being destroyed. Eshonai heads into the storm and asks the Rider of Storms what he wants with her people. There is no answer. She claims everything she has done was to ensure the listeners remain their own people. Before she can return home, she encounters a chasm fiend and a spren made of white fire. While the chasm fiend eventually departs, the spren follows Eshonai home. Chapter 89, Voice of Lights, Present Day. Navani continues her experiments. Raboniel informs her that one travels to other worlds through Shadesmar. Raboniel tells Navani she doesn't have to use titles with her anymore. Navani's discoveries have made them equals. Navani's latest experiment fails to make anti-void light. Raboniel admits the deepest ones are close to locating the final node. She reasserts that she's tired of the war and wants it to end. Navani asks if she'd actually kill Odium to end it. Raboniel's response suggests that she would not. Admits she is trying to unmake the sibling. Navani wants to find another path. She suggests joining forces, a treaty. Raboniel says no. She feels the best way to end the war is with her people in control of the tower, barring a discovery made between them. She vows to unmake the sibling. Navani is saddened by her response. Raboniel decides to give her something, a performance involving herself and a pair of singers, in which they play Honor and Odium's tones. After the performance, Raboniel awards Navani with the title Voice of Lights. She bows to Navani. Raboniel departs. Navani realizes the title means nothing since she, her people, and the tower remained in their current predicament. Navani realizes she has been working as hard as she had to prove herself to Raboniel, but realizes that was pointless too since it didn't lead to peace. She knows it will be hard to find harmony. Navani reaches out to the sibling who is quite weak. She explains that Raboniel is unmaking her. The sibling is afraid to die, thinks Elaine would have made a good bond. She can't do anything with the barrier in place. The sibling's words haunt Navani, who longs to do something. She realizes that the music the enemy had produced had caused the sand on her desk, used during her work, to vibrate and create patterns. Navani realizes Stormlight and Voidlight are vibrations too, and in vibration, she'd find their opposites. That's on 989. Chapter 90, One Chance. Adolin realizes the stands have been filled with those predisposed against him. He knows that he must use this time to speak to prove that humankind was worth fighting for. As he speaks, he is quickly interrupted by a spren who asks if he knew Dalinar had come close to killing the Stormfather. Adolin doesn't answer and continues speaking. He is interrupted again. He does not know what happened with the Stormfather and Dalinar. Adolin tries to speak to how mankind is banding together to face the enemy. He's attacked again and again with angry questions and comments, such as the fact that Kaladin nearly killed his spren. Adolin is about to swear no modern Radiants have killed their spren but trails off. Adolin realizes that the spren don't care what he has to say. They had planned to ambush him all along. He cries, "You say spren don't lie, that spren are not changeable like men? Next time you try to pretend that is true, remember this day. Remember how you lied when you said, I'd have a fair trial. Remember how you treated the man who came to you in good faith." That's on 994. He challenges the spren. They are like humans and can't all be the same. Amuna leads the new Deadeye's cryptic, who was killed only a few years prior, into the trial. She claims it is proof of human lies, that modern Radiants can't be trusted. The trial continues to dissolve. Adolin realizes he has lost the crowd. He is assaulted by more questions. Adolin departs in shame. He had known it would be rigged, but had wanted to believe otherwise. Shallan and Adolin lie together after the trial. Adolin begins to think the trial was a stupid idea. He fears imprisonment. Shallan promises to break him out. Adolin wonders if it's right to try and get the spren to fight. Not everyone is made for war, and he can't promise them they'll survive. Adolin wishes he could get through to them, turn things around on the final day of the trial. He wishes he could have been smarter, so he could have won. He wishes he knew what to do. Vale and Radiant vote against Shallan to fulfill Mraze's plan and kill Kalek. Adolin wishes he could discover who murdered the cryptic. He knows that appearance was what ruined his chances. Formless awakens and says, "This trial is not ruined. You know, the more I contemplate it, the more I think maybe this trial wasn't such a bad idea. The High Judge is one of the heralds. Maybe he'll end up surprising you." That's on 998. Chapter 91, Worth Saving. Teft is glad he hadn't gone back to Moss. He and Kaladin are recovering from their ordeal. Kaladin had lost Syl. Fendarana, Teft's spren, thinks Syl may have simply lost herself through separation. Since Kaladin's surge binding works, their bond is still intact. Fendarana feels as though he'll be fine if he returns to where he first lost Syl. Teft needs to be tended to by Lift periodically, or he slips back into a coma. As Teft learns more about what's going on in the tower, a part of him wishes he hadn't been awoken. Elaine returns, noting there's no news from Navani, that she's been isolated for over 2 weeks. He asks what they should do since they don't know where the last node is and no one can reach the sibling. Kaladin wonders if they should keep fighting, if his father is right, what people will do if they continue fighting. Tef explains how he got his father killed. 45 years ago, a group known as the Envisagers had visited his hometown, Talinar. They had brought both his parents under their wing and done horrible things to try and become Radiants. Tef was appalled and went to the City Lord when he was 8, thinking he'd run the worst of them out of Talinar. He was wrong. His mother was already dead, but his father was executed despite him being of the 6th Nan. Eventually, Tef joined the military to get away from it all. Tef realizes he was able to save Kaladin by giving him Stormlight when he was dying because of his parents' actions and teachings. He feels as though they won in the end. Tef knows they can't see the future like Renarin. They have to do what we think is best, and be fine with that. It's all man can do. That's on 1003. Tef feels as though they need to rescue the Radiants. Lif knows she can wake them, but the group, which also includes Dabeed, can't figure out the rest of the details of the rescue. Kaladin decides that they're going to wait. If we have to, we will break in and rescue the Radiants. But first, we need to recover, we need to plan, and we need to find a way to contact the Queen. I'd like her input. That's on 1004. Elaine agrees to try and see the Queen by passing as a servant. The group agrees not to do anything rash while they wait. Teft realizes his friend was right. He was worth saving. Chapter 92, A Gift. Venli acts as Raboniel's voice as reports are brought in. Efforts to find Kaladin are to be redoubled. Afterward, Venli admits to hating herself for betraying her people. She admits to being confused and ashamed. She knew what she had wanted once, but then all those she loved had died because of her actions. Venli asks why they fight when the cost is so high. Raboniel explains it's for the comfort of those who come after them. She does not respond to Venli's questions about whether he will let them sing to peace. Raboniel claims that Venli has served her well despite her allegiance to Leshwi. She claims to like Leshwi since she feels as though she both remembers and feels why they fight, even though Leshwi doesn't like her. Leshwi makes Raboniel feel as though Leshwi would be a good ruler once they win. Raboniel pays Venli for her services, offers a gift, since the sibling will soon be unmade and then Raboniel will be forced onto other tasks. Venli is being dismissed. The gift is a writ of authority and a report from a scout flying over the Shattered Plains. Upon closer inspection, it appears the group we assumed were Natan migrants are instead Parshendi, a group of a few thousand, with a large number of children. That's on 1009. Venli admits that some of her kind left before the Everstorm. They included rebels who didn't wish to take on new forms, children, and the aged. They fled into the chasms and had been assumed killed by the storms and the floods they caused. Venli departs without giving Raboniel a proper farewell. Chapter 93, Strong Enough. Shallan no longer exists. Formless has taken over, but for some reason, Vale can still talk, and she knows Formless isn't a new persona because of her drawing skills. Formless wonders how to remove herself from her current life. Pattern doesn't want her to go through with the plan to capture the High Judge. Formless, the best of Shallan's selves, light weaves into Lacyntia and departs. Pattern tells her what Wit had told him to say, that he trusts and loves her, and she deserves both. Formless sends him away. She knows it is time to become the woman she'd been building toward ever since she left her home to steal from Yasna, join the Ghostbloods. That's on 1013. Radiant admits to killing ELA. She poisoned her so Shallan wouldn't have to do it, to protect her and prevent what was currently happening. Formless breaks into the High Judge's home. Vale explains that she knows why Shallan is doing this. She has assigned herself a new name, so she can block out the pain, running. If she becomes the darkness she feels inside, there will be no going back and she can leave everyone she loves behind before they leave her. Formless feels as though she can't be Shallan because she's weak. She strangled her father and stabbed her mother with her blade. Vale tells her she can bear the pain. Shallan doubts it. Vale announces it's time for her to leave. Formless had vanished. Shallan takes her memories back from Vale. They include meeting a cryptic as a child who became her companion. A cryptic who wasn't Pattern. Shallan realizes that Vale is the blankness upon my memories, the part of me that looks away, the part of my mind that protects me from my past. That's on 1016. Vale knows she's Shallan's Vale. The pain hurts. Shallan doesn't feel as though she can bear it and longs to become formless again. She's encouraged by Radiant as well. Shallan realizes she killed her first friend by breaking her oaths. Vale apologizes for the pain. She did what she could, but protected Shallan for too long. Shallan bears the pain and the weight of her memories. Vale fades. Shallan thanks her for her service. She had done well. Vale disappears. Shallan realizes her first pattern was here, a deadeye she needed to find. Kalek emerges from his study. He had expected someone to come kill him. Shallan says she won't go through with it. She wants to share information instead. about the people who had sent her, the Ghostbloods. Although first, Kalek must reconsider his judgment of her husband. Licinti and several other Spren barge in and accuse Shallan of trying to influence the trial's course, of colluding with the judge. Although Kalek defends her, Seeker, the prosecutor on the first day of the trial, says Kalek has experienced another bout of weakness and needs to be sequestered for his own good. Chapter 94, Sacrifice. Adolin appears for the last day of his trial. The forum is crowded. Adolin discovers that Kalek is indisposed because Shallan had visited him and tried to influence the trial's course. Shallan is being held and Kalek is suffering from his time as a herald. Seeker explains that he will replace Kalek as High Judge. Adolin wonders how he can reach the crowd as the trial continues. Maya is called as the final witness. She is clearly terrified and grows agitated as Seeker speaks for her, claiming she is in pain for what was done to her, that she condemned Adolin, etc. Adolin wants her to be released. Since she is thrashing and crying out, Seeker had made his point. Adolin is ignored. Adolin begins to feel Maya's pain and anger. Adolin lends Maya some of his strength. She looks right at him and speaks, "We chose!" That's on 1025. She goes on to explain that her sacrifice cannot be taken away. It was hers, not yours, his or that of the crowd. Adolin realizes the Spren knew what would happen to them if their Radiants broke their oaths. The Radiants did not murder their Spren, they decided, together. All this time, everyone assumed you were victims. We didn't accept that you were partners with the Radiants. That's on 1025. Maya agrees, the Spren had chosen. Adolin sets Maya down on a bench so she can recover from her ordeal. The audience begins to depart until only Blended remains. Even though the words were never spoken, Adolin had won. Adolin will not forget Blended testified against him. She admits she suggested Maya be used as a witness. Adolin is angry, but Blended reminds him the other Spren acted on their own. Blended admits to wanting to discover if what he had said was true, that Maya had spoken and they were friends. Blended knows there is a bond between Adolin and Maya and has found the truth. However, Adolin isn't radiant. Blended knows she must return to her kind and inform them of what happened, because Maya's testimony revealed that thousands of Spren chose death over the continuation of the Radiance. They believed that surge binding would be the end of the world, that the solution was to bring an end to the Radiance rapidly, with a high cost in lives. Adolin asked Maya if they had known what would happen if the Spren and their Radiance knew they would become Deadeyes. Maya claims they did not, admits they did it to save them from something worse. Adolin wonders what it could mean. Blended believes it means they've gotten a lot wrong, claims Adolin passed the test for Maya's loyalty. Blended claims easy answers no longer are, but if Deadeyes can begin to return. This is grand news, important news. I will convey this to my people. I do not know if making new Radiants is a good idea, but I must admit that your ancestors were not traitors. Something did frighten them enormously, to cause humans and Spren to destroy their bonds. And if the Spren did not know they would die, then pieces of this puzzle are still missing. The questions are more complicated and more dangerous than we ever knew. That's on 1027-28. Blended departs. Maya follows Adolin, who needs to find Shallan and return to the Oathgate so they can report on what had happened. He isn't sure what the Honor Spren will do, but knows the Radiant relationship will never be quite the same again. Chapter 95, What She Truly Was 14 months ago. The humans and listeners fought in the rain. The listeners were singing a song of summoning. The Everstorm was coming, and the listeners had storm form now. Venli is spared by a human soldier when she pleads for her life. She knows the storm will save her people by destroying the humans and raising her kind who still lived. Venli notices Eshonai fighting another shard-bearer along the ridge of the chasm. Venli watches as Eshonai is pushed off the edge of the chasm. She thinks her sister will survive, feels nothing. Venli decides she will go and find Eshonai later. Venli sees a force that loves killing, that craves death. She can feel it building. She knows something is coming, something terrible. She knows the new storm is here. Venli feels exposed. Knows that if the storm sees her, it will end her. Venli seeks shelter from the storm and realizes several things about herself, such as that she wasn't powerful, that she was a coward who cares nothing for her people, only herself. Chapter 96, 1,000 Lies, Present Day. Elaine finds Venli crying in the infirmary over a map of the Shattered Plains he had stolen. Venli tells him of what she had learned from Raboniel, that they are not the last of their kind, that Thud, some of Eshonai's friends, and more had separated and been allowed to escape by Eshonai. Elaine tells her that Kaladin and Teft are awake and that they are going to try and wake the other Radiants. Elaine wants her help. Venli says she can only make things worse. Venli tells him her story. Elaine calls her a monster and blames her for what is happening. Venli announces that she needs to find the others. She plans to use her writ to transfer to Kholinar and go on a scouting mission to the Shattered Plains with the Heavenly Ones. Elaine fears it will lead the enemy to the last of their people. He fears Raboniel wants Venli to take this course of action, that Raboniel knows Venli intends to go to them, that Venli is playing into Raboniel's hands. Venli feels she has to do something. Elaine agrees, but at a later time. Saving the Radiants should come first. Bentley refuses to help Elaine save the Radiance. She needs to see if the map is true. Elaine is upset and calls her a traitor before departing. Bentley knows it's time for her to go. Bentley speaks to her friends Dull and Mazish, announces that it's time for them to go through with their plan and leave. She doesn't tell them everything as they begin to plan their escape, wonders when Raboniel will tell the Fused about the others of her kind. Bentley instructs her friends to gather the others, tells them about the plan to rescue the Radiance. She wants to depart during the chaos caused by the rescue attempt. Although she doubts she will find redemption amongst her kind, she feels the need to try and reach them because her mother might still be alive, living amongst them. Bentley feels her mother is the only one who might still love her, despite everything she had done. Chapter 97, Freedom. Navani searches fervishly for the opposite of void light. While examining sound theory, she discovers that a wave could be negated and its opposite created, and presented in a way that nullified the original, canceling it out. They called it destructive interference. Strangely, the theory said that a sound and its opposite sounded exactly the same. That's on 1040. Navani is confused by this and soon learns that humans are capable of singing the proper tones, of hearing Roshar's music. Eventually, she gets her experiment to work. Upon further study, Navani discovers that the tone required intent in order to be formed and that she had definitely discovered void light's opposite tone. She wonders how she can create its light. Raboniel comes to visit. Although Navani tries to hide it, Raboniel discovers that Navani had unearthed a tone that forces void light out of a sphere. Navani realizes intent isn't as vital as she had thought. Raboniel remarks that Navani's work is dangerous. She could feel the void light contained within her gem heart respond to the tone. Raboniel realizes Navani is keeping what she's learning from her and threatens to rip the room apart to find Navani's notes. Navani reluctantly gives them to her. With the help of a vacuum, Navani creates a gemstone filled with void light's opposite. She hands it to Raboniel, who screams and drops it. She describes its tone as wrong, a vibration that should not be. Raboniel knows its existence changes the world. Navani is given permission to go for a walk. She grabs her notebook, The Rhythm of War, on the way out. There is an explosion. It didn't kill Raboniel as Navani had expected. When Navani asks what had happened, Raboniel admits to putting the diamond in the dagger she had given Navani that could both channel and move light. Raboniel wanted to mix void light with its opposite and realizes she had acted stupidly. Raboniel heals herself with void light and asks that Navani create another anti-void light gemstone. Navani does. Raboniel places the gemstone in a second herald-killing dagger. She stabs her daughter, whose mind had left her long ago, with it, killing her permanently. No more rebirth, no more returns. Free at last, my baby, free. That's on 1049. Navani realizes this was why Raboniel sought anti-void light, to show her daughter mercy. Raboniel admits she had lied. They are not capable of producing enough anti-void light to hurt Odium. Navani lets Raboniel grieve. Raboniel intends to confirm the death of her daughter was permanent by communicating with the souls left on Braze. They will have achieved their goal. Esu, Raboniel's daughter, is to be cremated. Servants begin to gather Navani's things. Raboniel takes her notebook. She promises to have a copy made for the former queen. Raboniel admits to needing to reconstruct Navani's work. She needs to create both a new plate and tone for Stormlight. Navani's upset. She defends her choice to try and keep things from Raboniel. I will end the war. That is the promise I will keep, for today we have discovered the means. Finally, a way to make certain that the Radiants can no longer fight. They function as Fused do, you see. If we kill the human, another Radiant will be born. The fight becomes eternal, both sides immortal. Today we end that. I have preserved the Radiants in the tower for a reason. Anti-Stormlight will need subjects for testing. Today is a momentous day. Today is the day we discovered a way to destroy Radiant Spren. I will let you know the results of the test. That's on 1050 to 51. End of part 4. Interludes. I-10. Hasina. Hasina studies one of the maps of Elaine stole. She is searching for her father, Tomat. Liren assumes he's still alive. Hasina admits she wants her husband to appreciate Kaladin, to stop blaming himself for Tian's death. He felt as though he had caused it by defying Roshone. Hasina urges Liren to change his behavior so he won't lose Kaladin too. Liren reminds her that Kaladin has told him several times that he is no longer his son. Hasina is frustrated by Liren's stubbornness and behavior. She refuses to let her husband continue to pretend that Kaladin isn't their son. Liren counters his child wouldn't commit murder in his surgery room. Hasina counters that their son is the best person they could have fighting for them because he has been conditioned to care. Hasina shows Liren the infirmary, the humans caring for the Radiants, with shash glyphs painted on their foreheads. Liren sees a group of fools resisting. He feels as though they will be crushed like he had been. Hasina takes Liren to speak to Norrell, one of the refugees from Hearthstone, who had been sent to the Ardents on suicide watch. Norrell explains that he wears the glyph because Kaladin inspires him to get up, to continue fighting despite his pain and battle shock. Hasina explains that she wants her husband to talk to the others in the room about why they displayed the glyph on their foreheads and really see them. Hasina leaves her husband in favor of her maps. I-11, Aiden. Aiden, the 13-year-old son of a potter, wants to become a windrunner. He feels as though Spren wanted people to be brave, and by being brave, he could bond one. He feels as though his father is brave because he tends to the Radiance regularly and goes out every night to do something in secret. Aiden hopes that counts in his favor with Spren. As he heads to work with his father, he notices a lot of soldiers and wonders if there had been a disturbance in the atrium. He hopes he has not missed Kaladin's reappearance. Aiden and his father eventually arrive to work at Master Liganor's shop. Aiden begins work in Krem. His father wants Aiden to practice his plates. Aiden feels as though there isn't a point. He won't need to know how to make plates once he can take to the air. His father counters that he'll need to be able to do something until he becomes a windrunner, and that he should never underestimate the value of a job well done. You want a Spren to notice you? Take pride in every job you do. Men who make sloppy plates will be sloppy fighting fused. That's on 1062. Aiden wonders how his father knows. Master Liganor arrives and mentions that something is taking place in the atrium. He intends to close up shop. The shop is closed, and Aiden's father departs. He reluctantly brings Aiden with him to go watch over the Radiance. Aiden gets the sense that he'd pick up a spear and earn his Spren that day. I-12, Vulnerable. Taravangian knows he failed to recruit Szeth and knows Dalinar would only respond to the right words. Taravangian delays reaching out to Dalinar. Taravangian realizes that he needs to come up with a daring plan. He considers Nightblood, the sword no one had anticipated. Remembers part of a report he had received. The sword feeds on the essence that makes up all things. It will draw out Stormlight eagerly, feasting. But if there is no Stormlight, it will feed on one's own soul. That's on 1065. He acknowledges that Odium can be tricked and seems to have a core self. Taravangian wonders if he can make his plans work if he can get Szeth and Odium in the same place. Taravangian is visited by Shah Nat. He admits that his current state is because of the Night Watcher. The Unmade responds that it wasn't her, but the other one, the god. She touched three that I know, the child, the general, and you. The old magic, the Night Watcher. I begin to wonder if it was all a cover, these many centuries, a way for her to secretly bring in people she wanted to touch. She has been playing a far more subtle game than Odium realized. That's on 1066. Taravangian admits why he went to her, to obtain the ability to stop what was coming. He admits he doesn't know if he can stop it, if it can even be stopped, if Odium can be stopped. The Unmade admits she isn't sure. The power behind him is strong, but his mind is exposed. The mind and the power seek different goals. This leaves him not weak, but vulnerable, as on 1066. Taravangian feels Odium is playing with him, feels as though the Unmade speaks as though she desires Odium's fall. Taravangian asks the Unmade to lure Odium to him at the proper time. She agrees to help by giving Taravangian gemstones, which contain 2 of her children. She knows this will draw Odium's gaze. The Unmade wishes him luck before disappearing. Now that I've taken the time to summarize Part 4 of Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War, the 4th novel in the Stormlight Archive, I want to take some time to talk about it, give it a little review. This section of the novel continues to focus primarily on the plight of the humans and their allies during the war. We see more of a focus on the Shadesmar plot and Adolin's trial. We also see Venli trying to break away from the Fused and meet up with her people, the remnants of those that she left behind, and feels like she doomed. Even though she doesn't feel like she can redeem themselves, or rather herself in their eyes, she wants to be with them again and see if her mother is alive. And I think there's something beautiful in the way Venli is portrayed here. I remember not really enjoying her chapters as much as I had in the other books. But I think looking back on it now, I like how she's starting to realize that she's made mistakes, that she is not as selfless as she wants to appear, that she has longed to step out from behind Eshonai's shadow, to make a name for herself, to find power, and that everything she was doing wasn't for the benefit of her people. Yeah, sure, some of the things she was doing might benefit them in the long run, but really she wanted to do these things for herself. I like that we're getting to see a lot of growth in our characters as they overcome some sort of emotional trial. But I remember I didn't really enjoy it as much going through, although I can see the benefit of this growth.
This part is probably the slowest part of the book in terms of like actual action taking place. It is a lot of information and a lot of talking being kind of thrown out there, but we can kind of see now why the Shadesmar plot line needed to be left out of the last part, because it would have concluded too early if they had put it in the last part, because the trial only lasts through this one part. We get the culmination of Shallan's story, at least up to this point where, she fully turns into formless, and then she gets her memories back, and we get to find out about her breaking her oath prior to the things that she remembered. And I think that this was dripped out in a fairly well-paced manner where we were curious about it, but it wasn't being shoved in our faces as the thing we were supposed to be caring about, but it was there constantly in the background. And then when we got the answer, I think it culminated very well in a really cool moment. That was a really cool chapter. We get the moment with Maya where she speaks out in the trial, which is something I had been waiting for since last book, knowing that eventually she would, form a full bond with Adolin, not in the radiant sense, which I would imagine will probably be coming at some point, but the fact that she speaks out and kind of regains some of her true self, because that was definitely a plot that they were focusing on with Adolin in Shadesmar in the last book, because honestly, he didn't really have a lot to do in the last book when he was in Shadesmar. We see Navani finally getting to accomplish the task that she was setting out to accomplish, and finding out that it ends up leading to the potential creation of a very dangerous weapon against her own people, against the Radiant specifically, and the Spren. And this is both a triumphant and a dour moment for the character, because she accomplished this thing that she was trying to accomplish, and that leads to elation, but then realizing that it's now out of her hands and she's essentially delivered a very powerful potential weapon into the hands of her enemies. And the stage has been set for what's going to happen in the last part, where we're going to get, the big, fight moments, action moments, and we get to resolve this story that's been building this whole time.
Yes, I think the poop has finally hit the fan, so to speak, and things have definitely culminated. I think the interesting thing about Shallan at this point is she realized she's been using these personas to protect herself, and Vale was really the shield from her memories. But it's been a while, so I might be wrong. I think that her history has been hinted at in the previous novels over and over again, that she had a hand in both her parents' deaths, but the details have slowly been building, so we get more of a distinct picture each time she calls back those memories, each time she takes the time to think about them. And I think this is the first time, perhaps, that it has been made distinctly clear that she is bonded to a Spren before that isn't Pattern. I think it was hinted at previously, but now it's very clear, and it seems like that same Spren is the one that Adolin met in Shadesmar during their current travels, the one that was brought out during the trial.
Yeah, that information has been thrown out there and alluded to, but this is like our confirmation that that's actually the case. And I like how Taravangian gets left off in this part where he's trying to figure out his next steps, and now he is in communication with Shah-Anat, who has kind of been in the background throughout the whole story, and dribbling things out there and touching the plot here and there, but never being a driving force. And we also get more talk about the Night Watcher, who also has had a hand in a lot of things that ended up leading to the plot being where they are, and learning more about the Night Watcher and the things that come from visiting the Night Watcher. And another mention again of Nightblood. Nightblood is the big tying force between the Stormlight Archive and the other Cosmere books, because Nightblood is originally from Warbreaker, which is a standalone, not standalone book by Sanderson, and it getting brought into this book series was something that I was really interested in because I thought it was really cool in that book. And you're getting a lot of tie-ins between specifically Warbreaker and the Stormlight Archives. They're seemingly the most tied together when it comes to the concepts that are getting talked about. And I like that. I like the whole Cosmere concept of tying things together.
I also just like the sword in general. I'm pretty sure that we're referring to Zeth's sword here, and it has a very distinct kind of quirky little personality that I appreciate. The other thing that really interested me about these chapters was that we got this little thread dropped when Maya spoke at the trial, that the Spren had chosen to destroy their bonds and destroy themselves because it was a better fate than something else. And we don't know what that fate is. We don't know what was more terrifying than essentially death to force them to make this decision. And I think as humans, which are often inclined in our cultures to fear death and to fear the end and that unknown of what death is, trying to imagine what this can possibly be is very difficult and almost unnatural to try and call up. It's very hard to imagine something worse than that fate. And there's a part of me that fears that whatever it turns out to be won't live up to our expectations of it. Like, this is the most terrible thing imaginable for most people, and now you're saying there's something worse than that. What can that possibly be?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to stick the landing. It always is. But given that we're only halfway or so through the intended length of the series, I think the series is supposed to be 7 books. There's a lot of time to build towards the culmination that'll be the eventual end of the series. But I also feel like we're almost at kind of how bad things can be. So for us to have multiple more books of building and building and building towards an end, it kind of makes me wonder like where we're going to go, considering we're already essentially fighting a god.
I guess we're just gonna have to wait to find out, Jer.
Yup.
Part 5, Knowing a Home of Songs Called Our Burden. Chapter 98, An Unwholesome Shade. Dalinar moves through a battlefield after his people's victory. He realizes he is a soldier who had lost his desire to kill. The minx speaks to him, acknowledges that the War of Amul is over now. Unless the enemy pours resources into his troops, which he feels would be wasteful, Dalinar and his armies will secure Amul within the month. The Mink reminds Dalinar of his promise before departing. They will secure the tower, then Alethkar, then Herdaz. Dalinar realizes that if they can't retake the tower, everything fell apart. The loss of the tower was a major setback when it came to reaching Dalinar's true goal, frightening Odium enough that he'd be willing to make a deal. Sigil and Stargyle, a Lightweaver, come to make a report with a few other Windrunners. Stargyle creates a lightweaving of Ishar's troops. They don't appear very disciplined to Dalinar, although they had been quite successful in battle. Dalinar notices their ruler, Ishar, an older Shin man. Szeth is transfixed by the sight of the herald, Ishar, most often. The heralds were all depicted as Alethi men and women. The light weaving fades. Dalinar realizes they found Ishar and that he's waiting for him. Dalinar instructs them to do another scouting mission before reporting to him. Dalinar wants to speak with Yasna. He intends to meet with Ishar and discover what he knows. Chapter 99, Not Bound. Yasna speaks to Wit, her partner, whom she doesn't trust, about how to defeat Odium. Wit suggests aiming for a draw. He had drafted a contract regarding Dalinar's contest with Odium. Should Dalinar prove victorious, Odium is to retreat to damnation for 1,000 years. But if Odium should prove victorious, he must remain within their system, but gets to do as he wishes with Roshar. All monarchs will submit to him, as will the Radiants who serve Dalinar. Wit thinks it's for the best because they'd be limiting their losses by containing Odium in the Rosharan system despite the contest's outcome. Yasna is uncomfortable with the weight afforded the contest by the contract. Wit thinks it's best to ensure the enemy can't utterly lose in order to win. Waiting another 1,000 years to try again won't upset the enemy. Wit asserts that Odium can be beaten. He thinks he's smarter than he actually is, and spent too much time trying to convince Dalinar to be his champion. Odium bet too much on the Blackthorn, and must be searching for a new champion who can replace him and legitimately win the war. A contest won't just be about who can stab the hardest, but about the hearts of mortals. He asks if she can trust those she fights with, but claims that with the contract in place and the assurance that Odium can't break free of the system no matter the trial's outcome, Yasna won't have to trust their hearts because he'll be there. Yasna fears Wit's destruction at Odium's hands. He says they will add a clause within the contract naming me as a contractual liaison for honor, whom Dalinar represents. This will protect me from Odium's direct attacks for the life of the contract. He will have to abide by those terms, as they are part of the promise Ray's made by taking up the Shard of Odium. To fail that promise would give others an opening against him, and said failures have killed gods before. Odium knows it, so do this and I can help you openly. As myself. That's on 1081. Yasna wants to know who he truly is, but claims to be someone who wisely turned down the power the others all took, and in so doing gained freedoms they can never have again. I, Yasna, am someone who is not bound. That's on 1081. Yasna knows he is both eternal and older than a Spren. Wit admits to liking her for several reasons, which include her intelligence and paranoia. Chapter 100, Watchers at the Rim. The tower's Spren wakes Kaladin. She's extremely weak. She explains that the enemy found the last node, located in the model of the tower in the infirmary room, and that they plan to kill all the Radiants soon. She also asks that Rlain be sent to her. Kaladin wakes Teft and tells him what is happening. Kaladin admits that they need to try and rescue the Radiants now. Teft is to get Lift ready to wake them. Kaladin is to lure the guards away and distract the pursuer, and Teft is to take care of any guards who don't get out of their way. David arrives and says the sibling spoke to him too, that he's going to meet Elaine, who is upset about something Venli said. Kaladin wants David to tell Elaine about the plan and for the pair of them to tell Navani what's happening before going into hiding. Kaladin intends to escape with the Radiants, retrieve Dalinar, and then return for them. David retreats to carry out the plan. Kaladin tells Teft to escape out the window if something goes wrong. Their current plan was for the Windrunners to use their powers to help them climb down the tower's walls, while another non-Windrunner Radiant was strapped to their backs. Kaladin instructs Teft to escape rather than make a hopeless stand, so he can get word to Dalinar if he feels he cannot help anyone else to escape. Teft tells Kaladin to run if he runs, asserts that the pursuer will be waiting for Kaladin at the node. This is a trap, plain and simple. What the enemy doesn't know is that we don't care about the node. We're trying to free the Radiants. So distract him a little, yes, but then run and let them have their storming fabrial. Give me an oath, lad. We can't do anything more in this tower. We need to reach Dalinar. I'm going to head that way with as many Radiants as I can rescue. You've got my back, right? That's on 1084 to 1085. Kaladin says he always will. I swear it. Get as many of the Radiants out as you can and then run. Once you do, I'll follow. That's on 1085. Chapter 101. Undertext. Dalinar and Yasna meet with Yanagon and Nura. Yasna announces that she feels they don't have much of a chance of recovering Urithiru because fabrials don't work near it, etc. Dalinar suggests an assault through Shadesmar and other strategies, but is shot down by Yasna. Yasna thinks they should be discussing how to support their forces stationed in southern Alethkar against the Vedans, etc. The others don't want to abandon the tower so easily. Dalinar suggests meeting with Ishar and recruiting him. He thinks the Herald may be the secret to saving the tower, despite the letters which they have received from Ishar, which Yasna describes as not encouraging. Dalinar wishes to speak to him personally. Nura suggests capturing Ishar in order to speak with him instead. Dalinar explains that he has put the Mink in command of the army and about the creation of the contract. He feels that until the contract goes through, he has to do something else to help. In this case, sway Ishar to their side and see if he can teach Dalinar how to restore the Oath Pact and rescue the tower. The meeting ends, but it is agreed that Dalinar will go to Ishar. He must prepare for a trip to Tukar. Yanagon asks for word of Lift should Dalinar learn anything of her. Dalinar gives Yasna his completed handwritten version of Oathbringer. He wants Yasna to write the undertext. Commentaries left by a woman beneath the text for future readers. Yasna reluctantly agrees to do it, although it will take her some time. They both know both their actions with Oathbringer will lead to, at the very least, a revision of the old religion. Chapter 102. High Storm Coming. Venli and her friends are online at the Oath Gates. She wonders why Raboniel is manipulating her into finding the listener remnants. The Oath Gates exchanges are put on hold when Vyre runs off. As the high storm approaches, those waiting seek shelter. Venli gives her writ and the map, which would lead the way to the other listeners, to Mazish. She intends to return to the tower and smuggle some of the humans out. Venli tells her friends of her plan to bring the surgeon and his entire family with them and take them to their people in the Shattered Plains. Her friends agree. They think having Kaladin along would be useful. Venli instructs them to wait until the storm passes. If she hasn't returned, they're supposed to use the Oath Gate to get to Kholinar, where she will find them. Venli heads inside to stop R'hllane from going through with his plan. Navani mopes in her office. She knows Raboniel has found the tome that could kill Radiant Spren. Navani prays for guidance. Moash comes to kill her. He feels it's the best way to distract Dalinar. Raboniel won't let him. Moash says he has been ordered by Odium. Raboniel disagrees. He had been ordered to come to her. She needs him to fix one of her problems, Stormblessed. Raboniel instructs Moash to kill him. He says it's not possible. Raboniel gives Moash a dagger and instructs him to kill Kaladin Spren in order to deprive Kaladin of power. Moash asserts he can't kill him, but agrees to ruin Kaladin and keep him from interfering in exchange for Navani. Raboniel agrees as long as he destroys the final node. She feels the pursuer is trying to draw Kaladin out by delaying its destruction. Moash accepts and begins to head out, but is stopped by Navani calling him a monster and traitor. Moash feels no sympathy. He feels she didn't do enough to help innocent people, claims that she has no idea what the day will cost him. Moash bursts a light with Stormlight and flies off. Navani continues to pray. She locates the dagger Raboniel had used to kill her daughter. It maintains a small charge of anti-void light. Kaladin heads toward a trap. He senses still as he nears the breakaway and is reunited with her. Kaladin tells her what is going on. She tells him a high storm is coming, and that she feels sad and cold because of their time apart. Kaladin understands. Kaladin finds the pursuer in the atrium, blocking the way to the infirmary. The pursuer moves in for the kill. Chapter 103, The Legend You Live. Kaladin begins fighting, drawing most of the guards from the infirmary. A storm form remains. Teft manages to render it unconscious as Lift heals him during their fight. Lift and Teft enter the infirmary. Teft seals the door and begins looking for the surgeon when Lift screams. A body had emerged from beneath the sheet, startling her. Moash had used his sharp blade to catch her thighs, ruining her legs. Kaladin engages the pursuer. He knows he only needs to give Teft and Lift enough time to carry out their plan. Kaladin vows to kill the pursuer over and over again, destroying the legend he had crafted around him. Eventually, the pursuer will be known as the Defeated, the creature who could never beat Kaladin. Moash kicks Lift toward the wall. She has been rendered unconscious. Teft notices Kaladin's family has been bound and gagged. He realizes they had stumbled into a trap. Moash engages Teft. Teft is armed with a long knife, and Moash has the assassin's honor blade, the one that had murdered Gavilar. Chapter 104, Full of Hope. Elaine is recognized by a guard while trying to carry out the plan. As a result, he and David are led farther away from their goal as a guard takes them to confirm they're allowed to deliver water to where Navani is. He knows that they will have to find a way to get him out of his current predicament if the sibling wants him. Kaladin taunts the pursuer as they continue to fight. Kaladin calls him the Defeated One, announces that he does not fear the pursuer, etc., loud enough for all of their onlookers to hear. Kaladin raises his knife over the pursuer, causing him to flee into his fourth and final body. Kaladin announces he is death as they prepare to continue fighting. Bentley makes her way to the atrium and realizes she is too late. Rlain and his friends had already begun to carry out their plan. Kaladin is fighting the pursuer. Bentley discovers that she really wants to help but can't do anything about the fight. She had to think about Rlain, the surgeon, and his family. Bentley speaks to Leshwi, who explains that the pursuer has used all of his husks and will need to run and renew himself but won't because the fight is being watched and Kaladin is clearly in control. The human appears strong and immortal, the fused small. Teft notices that Lift is awake. She's dragging herself toward another Radiant. Teft knows he needs to keep Moash's attention. He asks why Moash turned traitor. Moash claims it was peace. Moash kills a resting Radiant, forcing Teft to fight him openly. After taking an injury to his side, Teft tries to surrender and offers to wait for Kaladin. Moash does not accept. Teft realizes he is full of hope. Moash stabs Fenderana with the dagger. She shrinks, her essence burning. Teft is in agony. He collapses near the white spot in the sand Moash had scattered. His friend's remains. Moash is glad he can't feel sorrow anymore. Explains that he resents how eagerly Teft followed Kaladin and Kaladin's love for him. Moash calls himself Silence, the quiet that eventually claims all men. Teft announces Moash can never have what he has, the knowledge that he is loved. Teft dies, filled with hope. He had been stabbed through the neck by Moash's blade. Chapter 105, Children of Passions. The high storm rages. Kaladin tells the pursuer to flee, although he will never stop chasing him. Kaladin hopes the others were given enough time to be freed, but doubts they can escape through the storm. Still knows something is wrong. They should have come this way to escape by now. Kaladin challenges the pursuer to protect his reputation, so he can go see what's going on. With the help of Navani's device, Kaladin sends the pursuer into the window, injuring him. Kaladin commands him to flee. The pursuer obeys, although his title had been lost. The humans begin chanting for Kaladin. Kaladin retrieves the device, notices the infirmary door has opened, but no one is awake. Teft's body drops from above. Kaladin knows he's dead. Moash lands nearby as Kaladin cries over Teft's corpse. Moash instructs those waiting to leave him be. Kaladin has been broken and will prove useless now. Moash suspects Raboniel must have found the final note earlier but delayed mentioning it so she could continue her research. He destroys it. Lift had been bound and gagged and placed beside Kaladin's family. Moash had been forbidden from killing Lift since Odium was interested in her. Moash drags Liren into the atrium and gives him to the pursuer. The Fused is instructed to kill Liren in front of his son should Kaladin regain his senses. The pursuer is instructed not to kill Kaladin despite his wishes. Moash doesn't want him awakening to vengeance. He feels the only hand that can kill Kaladin is Kaladin's own. Moash eyes Kaladin's pain, but feels nothing. Moash is satisfied he has reached his potential, instructs the Fused not to ruin things, and heads off to kill the queen. Navani awaits her chance. She can hear only whimpers from the sibling. Soon, she notices that the shield was down. The final note had been destroyed and the sibling was exposed. Raboniel orders her guards away and enters the room with the crystal pillar, alone. Navani activates one of her pain reel traps before creeping after Raboniel. Navani notices that the sibling's corruption is nearly complete. Raboniel instructs Navani to run with a copy of her notebook and her anti-void light plate. Navani wonders why Raboniel is letting her go. Moash will soon return to kill the queen, but their deal won't be broken if Navani escapes on her own. Navani won't leave the sibling, exposes the dagger. Raboniel suggests Navani run anyway. She can't defeat a fused. Navani offers Raboniel the dagger in exchange for returning to her room to wait together. If Moash wins his fight against Kaladin, she will give in to him, but if Kaladin wins, Raboniel is to leave the sibling. They can discuss as they wait. Raboniel agrees and takes the special dagger. The pair begin to make their way back to Navani's room. Raboniel activates Navani's trap. Chapter 106, 100 Discordant Rhythms. Kaladin feels defeated. He couldn't protect those he loved. He is claimed by a sense of numbness. Raboniel collapses, in pain, dropping the dagger. Navani works through the pain, grabs the dagger, and stabs Raboniel with it. Raboniel doesn't die immediately. The dagger hadn't contained enough light. Raboniel instructs Navani to take the notebook and run before Vyre returns. Raboniel knows she will die. She can no longer hear the rhythms. Her soul is perishing. Again, she instructs Navani to run because the war must end. Navani retrieves her notebook. She realizes it's a way to end the war since it contains the secret to permanently killing the fused in Radiant Spren, that she needs to smuggle it out of the tower. It was only a copy, the original probably having been sent to Kholinar to be given to Singer military leaders. Navani remarks that Raboniel was looking for a way to end the war, but didn't care who won. Raboniel denies it. She wants the Singers to win, but declares that the humans winning is better than an endless war. Again, Raboniel instructs Navani to run. Navani is struck by a throwing knife, next to her right breast. Moash had returned. Navani fears Kaladin is dead. Everyone watches Kaladin, consumed by his grief. Timber urges Venli to show Leshwi what she is. Venli won't. The pursuer feels as though the vigil is stupid and shoves Lirin over to Leshwi. Leshwi frees Lirin, claims the pursuer's legacy is dead because he ran from Kaladin. He is the defeated one. The pursuer denies it and decides to prove himself. Realizing what he intends, Leshwi hands Lirin to another heavenly one and tries to stop the pursuer but fails. The pursuer attacks Kaladin, who howls before driving his enemy into his final body. Stormblessed's eyes glow with a yellowish-red cast as the pursuer orders his soldiers to attack Kaladin and kill the other Radiants. The soldiers shy away from Stormblessed, forcing their master to act alone. Kaladin uses his powers to stick the fuse to the window and then rip the pursuer's head off. Then, he makes his way toward the heavenly one holding his father. The pursuer's men gather around his corpse. He had died to Kaladin twice. They recall their orders. Kaladin was out of reach, but they could kill the slumbering Radiants. Kaladin follows the fused who held his father, and the two had followed her through the tower. Kaladin bests two of them before bursting onto the top of the tower into the storm. The last heavenly one holds his father, so announces she had forgotten the words. As Kaladin nears, the enemy panics and throws Lirin into the storm. Kaladin watches for a moment before jumping after him. Chapter 107, Uniting. Navani moves away from Moash, who comments on how he killed a friend earlier, but felt no pain. He has freed himself in his eyes, become the best version of himself possible. He intends to bring Navani silence next, to make her pay for her past actions. Moash is stopped in his approach by Raboniel's hand on his foot, an attack in which she stabs him repeatedly with the dagger Navani had used on her. It begins draining Moash of Stormlight. Navani realizes Raboniel is trying to buy her time. Navani moves away and calls to the sibling. She hears the rhythm of war. Lyn flies Dalinar toward Ishar. The Stormfather appears beside him and informs him that Tanavast's son has entered the storm for the final time. It's something far worse than Kaladin's escape. Dalinar asks the Stormfather to show him. Kaladin falls through the storm, Syl weeps that she has forgotten the words. Her fingers grip his hand. Kaladin feels sorry for himself. He couldn't save those he had intended to. Kaladin whispers that he is not strong enough as he closes his eyes and lets go of Syl. Dalinar watches Kaladin's descent. He realizes Kaladin had given up. He wonders what they can do, wants to help. The Stormfather insists they can only watch. Dalinar asks the Stormfather to slow time to give Kaladin more time. The pursuer's men turn toward the Radiants. The human onlookers defend them and are slaughtered. Venli asks Leshwi if this could be prevented. Leshwi says she needs Raboniel's authority in order to do so. Venli argues that Raboniel had wanted the Radiants to be preserved. Leshwi informs her that things had changed. Last night, Raboniel had claimed that she no longer needed them for her tests, after one had been brought to her. The remainder are now a danger and liability, in Leshwi's mind, should they wake. Leshwi doesn't agree with what is happening either. Venli asks if they can do better. Some of the other singers hadn't joined in the slaughter. On Timber's insistence, Venli shows Leshwi what she is by drawing in Stormlight. Venli begins to glow. Leshwi is startled and hums to destruction. She asks Venli what she has done. Kaladin enters the place between moments and speaks to the Stormfather. Kaladin claims to have forgotten the words, asks if they could mean anything if he doesn't feel them. Kaladin asks if he can lie in order to swear an ideal. He claims he has to go, but knows it is a lie. Wonders if the reason why he can't say the words is because it feels like too much. The Stormfather doesn't seem pleased. He asks Kaladin if he would force misery upon Syl again. Kaladin wonders, begins to struggle, then realizes he is too weak. Dalinar realizes the Stormfather's words weren't enough. He wants to give them more time, but the Stormfather says they cannot. Dalinar realizes they are in the place where the Stormfather causes visions to occur. Time sometimes moved in particular ways in visions. Dalinar forges a bond. Dalinar connects and unites him. Chapter 108, Moments. Kaladin has a vision of the day Tien was killed. He had gone to fight with 2 frightened messenger boys so they wouldn't be alone and could have someone to help them feel courageous. The vision fades and Tien is there for Kaladin as he had once been there for the messenger boys. Tien comforts Kaladin and offers him a new perspective. He should think about how lucky both he and Teft were to be able to help one another when Teft was still alive instead of focusing on his inability to protect his old friend. Teft closes with, "If the enemy kills us, he simply dropped us off at a place we were going anyway. We shouldn't hasten it, and it is sad. But see, you can't take our moments, our connection, Kaladin, and those are things that really matter." And by giving him a small wooden horse he had crafted, that's on 1140. Kaladin calls for Syl, reaches for her, pulls her close. Syl is worried she has forgotten the words and can't help. Kaladin says she is helping by being there. The pair re-enter the real world and Kaladin realizes he knows the words, has always known them. Kaladin says, "I accept it, Stormfather. I accept that there will be those I cannot protect," on 1040. Syl gasps. The words had been accepted. Kaladin acknowledges that they could not save Teft or Tien, but they can still save his father. The sky explodes with 1,000 pure lights. Chapter 109, Emulsifier. A bright light floods in through the window. Venli informs Leshwi that she has sworn the first ideal of the Radiance. Leshwi is happy the Spren have come back to them, forgiven them. Leshwi asks Venli to ask Timber about her old Spren friend, Raya. Timber doesn't know her, doesn't think many of the older Spren survived the human betrayal. Venli explains that her Spren has friends who want to try bonding with their kind again. The fighting around them hasn't stopped. Venli isn't sure what to do. She's wavering between 2 different worlds, but Leshwi knows. She tries to put an end to the fighting with her words. When the fighting continues, she joins in, fighting the other singers alongside her troops. The sibling, although weak, shows Navani a vision of where the rhythm is coming from, the singers and humans fighting in the atrium to protect the fallen Radiants. Navani realizes an emulsifier is present, a common purpose. The fused, regals, and humans were fighting to protect the helpless. Before the vision fades, Navani spots Elaine. The sibling acknowledges that he's too far and it's too late. Moash is close to finishing Raboniel off. Navani asks the sibling to bond with her. The sibling refuses. Navani isn't worthy. Dabeed, Elaine, and their guards reach the atrium. The guards flee when they see the fighting. The humans and their allies win. Some troops flee, leaving the injured and dying in their wake. Elaine realizes Leshwi appears to be in charge as he urges Dabeed to help him with the injured. Kaladin had trained them both as field surgeons. Eventually, they gather a group in Hasina to get everyone in order, and Hasina informs Elaine that Kaladin had gone after Lirin. Elaine gets more of the story from the other humans, is led to Teft by some of the men Kaladin had been helping with their trauma. Elaine and Dabeed are saddened by the death. Dabeed informs Elaine that Lift is in the infirmary, unconscious, her legs dead. She can't heal herself. Elaine discovers the humans and singers squabbling. Leshwi wants them to submit so that everything that happened won't be viewed as rebellion. The humans don't want to. Elaine silences everyone and gets them to listen to him since the singers infused acted treasonously and against Odium, and the humans are in danger, and they can't escape without his help. Also, he's from a group of listeners who escaped Odium's control. Elaine discovers that Venli is a Radiant. Elaine explains that the group needs to get going. Odium won't stand for a rebellion among his own, so you singers are going to come with us. We're going to grab the Radiants and we're going to carry them out onto the plateau, or we'll escape via the Oath Gates to the Shattered Plains. That's on 1145. Elaine promises to get the singers infused out of any trouble they may face with the humans. Gather up our wounded, grab those Radiants, and let's get going. Before Raboniel knows there was a rebellion, I want all involved parties, human and singer, out of this tower. Go! That's on 1145. The group sets to work. Venli is amazed Elaine ordered the fused around. Once the group has been gathered, Elaine begins to lead them away and learns that Venli doesn't have a blade to operate the Oathgate like he thought. But they can't stop. They have to keep moving. Chapter 110, Reborn. Kaladin, reborn, pierces the darkness as a lance of light. He is surrounded by happy Windspren, whom he had instructed to find his father. They part the storm. Kaladin nears his father and reaches for him. Navani feels herself worthy and asks the sibling to bond with her. She begins saying the words. The sibling won't. Moash kicks Raboniel away from him. Her body is limp. Navani begins humming. She finds the tone of anti-void light as she presses her hand to the pillar. The song causes some of the darkness surrounding the sibling to retreat, for Moash to ache and halt his approach. The sibling says she can hear the tone of her mother, but not her father. Navani begins to sing honor song. The pillar vibrates as the sibling sings cultivation song, the pure sound of lifelight. They adjust their songs until they are in harmony. The sibling announces that they have sung her song, the rhythm of the tower. They had found their emulsifier, the common ground between humans and Spren. The sibling claims that was why she was created. Moash grabs Navani and prepares to kill her. The sibling accepts Navani's words. Power flows into Navani, who begins to heal as she and the sibling create light. She prepares to face Moash. Lirin is rescued by his son, a shard bearer. Kaladin apologizes to his father. They're both correct, for them. Kaladin finds the Shash glyph Noril had painted on his father's forehead. Lirin apologizes to Kaladin. He should have shown faith in him. Lirin brushes away Kaladin's hair to look at his brands and finds scabs flaking away from Kaladin's skin. The brands had fallen. His skin was like new. After the pair finish making up, Kaladin insists that they need to return to protect the people of Ur-Thuru. Chapter 111, Unchained. Dalinar leaves the Stormfather's vision. He continues on his journey with Szeth, Sigzil, and a band of Windrunners toward Ishar's camp. When they arrive, Sigzil goes to speak with Ishar, the man who had discovered how to travel between worlds, leading humans to Roshar. Firston reports that Ishar doesn't appear sane, claims to be the Almighty, and is waiting for the chance to battle Odium's champion, whom he feels is Dalinar himself. Since he's willing to talk, Dalinar and his group touches down so Dalinar can speak with him. Ishar greets Dalinar as Odium's champion. Dalinar denies the title and asks to be his ally. Ishar doesn't believe Dalinar's lies and denies being Ishar any longer. He is the Herald of Heralds, the sole bearer of the Oath Pact. He wishes to absorb Odium's power and become a god among gods. Dalinar informs him that he spoke to Ash and that Talon is injured. She has requested assistance in restoring him, that Jezrien is dead, Ash's father. Ishar says he was prepared for the lies, the things that prove Dalinar's identity, capturing Ur-Thuru, summoning the Cursed Storm, etc. Ishar thinks the end is near and calls for a fight. Ishar summons the Bondsmith's honor blade. Szeth calls it his father's sword and asks where the herald claimed it, and what he had done with his father. Ishar approaches to attack Dalinar. Elaine and the rebels make their way through the tower, losing some members while gaining others, family members of many of the rebels. Elaine knows they are being watched by the Kremling that harbored a Voidspren. As the band is making its way through the market, Stormform lightning strikes sound, causing the market-goers to flee. Deepest ones in Stormforms approach the company. Leshwi acknowledges she could not have talked everyone out of their current predicament because he knows what had transpired. The singers are humming the rhythm of executions. She knows that those who come weren't sent by Raboniel, but Odium, who wants her to know she will be tormented upon her return to Braze. She intends to stand and fight with the others. Elaine asks Venli if there are Spren like hers who would bond other singers. Venli says yes, but she sent them away for their safety. The timber says Rlain is spoken for. The room grows dark. It begins to shine as crystals grow out of Rlain's feet, like stained glass windows covering the floor. They showed a figure rising in blue glowing shard plate, and a tower coming alight. Keep fighting, a voice said in his head. Salvation will be, Rlain, listener, bridger of minds. I have been sent to you by my mother at the request of Renarin, son of Thorns. I have watched you and seen your worthiness. Speak the words and do not despair. That's on 1156. Sigzil blocks Ishar's attack. Ishar asks Dalinar to fight him. Dalinar won't. He has no weapon and claims it is not yet time for the Battle of Champions. The Windrunners attack Ishar in a wave. He defends himself easily. The Stormfather claims Ishar is an average fighter amongst the heralds. Talon was the best. That Ishar's skill as a duelist is not as great a danger as the fact that he has recovered his honor blade and become a bondsmith unchained. Ishar tethers each of the Windrunners to the ground with glowing rope that drains them of their stormlight and forces it into the earth. Szeth is in shock and of no use. Dalinar forms a perpendicularity, infusing his radiance with stormlight. Ishar doesn't understand how it's possible. Dalinar explains he bonded with the Stormfather. Explains that he needs a teacher and help restoring the radiance in the tower. Ishar thinks the enemy has corrupted the Stormfather. Ishar begins to take Dalinar's bond with the Stormfather and with Odium, a bond he doesn't understand, since Odium thinks Dalinar will fight against him. It pains Dalinar and his Spren. Szeth puts a stop to it with his blade and asks where Ishar got his blade. Szeth collapses the perpendicularity. The Windrunners begin to stir since their bindings had been destroyed. Ishar explains that he did not kill the previous owner of the sword, that it was returned to him since the Shin served the heralds and were merely holding the sword for him. The Stormfather informs Dalinar that Ishar tried to steal their bond. The Windrunners all feel terrible. Szeth knows Ishar is lying. His people had no intention of returning Ishar's sword to him. Ishar denies it. Szeth's father gave the blade and thanked him for letting him die. Szeth charges Ishar. A charge of power is released when their blades meet, which sends both men backward. Ishar drops his blade, and Dalinar notices a chip in it. Ishar opens a perpendicularity. As Dalinar gives the order to depart, Ishar speaks to him. He claims he can see clearly that all bondsmiths have a connection, that his sanity is slipping. His mind is broken, and he isn't sure it can be mended. Perhaps you can restore me for a short time after an ideal is spoken near me. Everyone sees a little more clearly when a radiant touches the spiritual realms. For now, listen well. I have the answer, a way to fix the problems that beset us. Come to me in Shinovar. I can reset the Oath Pact, though I must be sane to do it. I must have help to... The voice stumbled as if warping. To defeat you, champion of Odium. That's 1161. Ishar claims he will fight again and that he cannot be defeated. He is almighty. Dalinar and his men take to the air. Dalinar watches the herald and his men step into the perpendicularity and make their way into Shadesmar. Navani and the sibling can create light together, which can drive Moash back, bring Fabrials to life, etc. However, the sibling is still weak from Raboniel's corruption. Navani realizes she needs to vent the void light in the system so that they can restart the tower's protections, etc. As she sets to work, Navani notices that Kaladin, who had achieved the fourth ideal, is moving toward her in order to rescue her. Navani gets his attention by making lights flash on the walls. Navani informs him that the pillar is secure, and he needs to go to the market to inform their enemies that they should retreat. Kaladin obeys. Navani gets to work. Dalinar and his men linger above Ishar's camp, although the Windrunners feel horrible. The Stormfather explains it was because Ishar connected them to the earth and made them feel as though the stones were part of their bodies. That the powers of bondsmiths are that of creation, once limited by honor but no more. The Stormfather claims to have never liked Ishar, whom he had seen as ambitious. Although Ishar could not take all the blame for Ashen, humankind's first home's destruction, he was the one Odium tricked first into experimentation with the surges. Sigil wants to depart. Dalinar wants to wait a bit longer to see if Ishar returns. Dalinar speaks to Szeth, who wishes to know how Ishar knew about his people. Szeth says he must prepare for his next ideal, a quest in which he returns to his people and faces them. Explains that his people have all but 3 of the honor blades. He must go on his journey alone and prepare. Ishar should not have known. When Ishar doesn't return, Dalinar gives the order to be taken down so they can explore Ishar's tent and see if he left anything of value like notes on the applications of bondsmith powers. Aiden stands with the other humans in the atrium against the fused and their allies. He is rescued by glittering blue shardplate, along with the bead and a few others. Kaladin had returned to protect them. Kaladin bears the siblings' word as lights burst on the walls and ceiling. The ground trembles. The storm form's lightning is extinguished. Deepest ones go limp, trapped in the stone. Heavenly ones fall to the ground, unconscious. The radiants begin to stir, etc. Kaladin announces that the enemy must turn in their weapons to remain unscathed, as long as they promise to tell him that he's going to enjoy hearing what he looked like when he discovered what transpired today. Dalinar and company enter Ishar's tent, which smells with a chemically harsh odor. What they find is something the Stormfather claims is not possible: the corpses of Spren, such as a cryptic. Sigil finds a ledger which he feels contains a list of experiments and notes, such as cryptics and ash spren are impossible to bring over properly with our current knowledge. The process of creating bodies for them results in a physical form that collapses upon itself immediately. It appears their physiology works against the fundamental laws of the physical realm. That's on 1168. The Stormfather instructs Dalinar to leave immediately, so they can warn his children. Dalinar agrees. The group is to grab anything they think may prove useful before meeting him outside. It's time to depart. Moash flees as the tower comes alive. His connection to Odium had been pushed away. He begins to feel pain over his actions, pain he didn't want and had given away. Pain for killing Teft. Moash pushes himself harder. He's desperate to escape the tower. He's afraid, and the light in the tower seems too bright. Everything grows worse. He feels like he is suffocating. Moash makes his way outside and falls from the sky into the snow. The stormlight keeps him alive, but doesn't fully heal him. He had been promised he wouldn't feel any more, but feels. Moash can hear cheers, sounds of joy. Moash realizes he isn't sorry for killing Teft, only for the feelings they caused. He didn't want the pain. Moash knows he should have died, but is found and collected by some heavenly ones, who give him stormlight to heal. Odium's gift returns to Moash, making him breathe easier. The heavenly ones drop him off at a camp with the others who had managed to escape the tower. No matter how much stormlight Moash consumes, however, his eyes will not mend. Moash had gone blind. Chapter 112, Terms. Dalinar and company arrive back at their Amuli war camp just before the storm hits. Dalinar feels defeated. He had not accomplished what he wished. He soon receives news that the tower and oath gates are functioning, etc., and sends word to Navani that he will go to her soon. He also wishes to meet with Yasna and the Prime after the storm. The Stormfather informs Dalinar the sibling is fully awakened. Dalinar had learned she had bonded with Navani. Dalinar is drawn into a vision with Odium, who knows Dalinar was supposed to be his champion. Dalinar realizes that Odium had appeared to him for the first time in a year because Odium had lost Urithiru, and there was a new bondsmith. He had failed again. He also thought Dalinar was working with Ishar. Dalinar uses this to his advantage, and the knowledge that Odium feared those who refused to obey him, and that he may come fully into his power, contributing further to Odium's loss of control of his own plans. Odium brings up their agreement to a contest of champions. They still need to set terms. Dalinar has Odium review the terms he had discussed with Yasna. Odium is angered by what he reads. He realizes it was written by Sephandrius, who has always plagued him. Although he says he won't break his word, Odium explains that their contract will be void, and he will be in Dalinar's power if he does. The opposite would be true if Dalinar broke it, and the restrictions honor placed upon me, chaining me to the Risharan system and preventing me from using my powers on most individuals would be void. But that is not going to happen, and I am not going to break my word, because if I did, it would create a hole in my soul, which would let cultivation kill me. That's on 1174. However, Odium can't agree to the terms because the Everstorm changed things. The fused are free now, etc. He can't agree because he is incapable of doing what is asked of him without destroying himself. Dalinar won't agree, but Odium offers to agree to less. Odium explains that Roshar is a training ground. He needs soldiers for a battle for everything amongst the gods. Odium agrees to everything but containing the fused in Voidspren. In exchange for you giving up one thing you wanted, I will give up one in turn. If I win, I will give up my grand plans for Roshar. I will leave this planet for 1,000 years and abandon all I've worked for here. I give you and the singers freedom to make your own peace. Freedom for you and freedom for me. This is all I ask for my victory. As you represent honor, you can relax his prohibitions on me. No matter what happens in this contest, you never have to worry about me again. All I want is away from this miserable system. That's on 1175. Dalinar wonders who to trust more, Wit or Odium. Realizes he doesn't trust Odium at all. Honor must have died to trap Odium on Roshar for a good reason. Dalinar asks to be returned. Odium wants to make an agreement and to stop delaying. The pair argue back and forth on what they want, and Odium makes it clear that he wants Dalinar to join the Fused if he wins. Eventually, the pair draw up and agree to these terms. A contest of champions to the death. On the 10th day of the month Pala, 10th hour. We each send a willing champion allowed to meet at the top of Urithiru, otherwise unharmed by either side's forces. If I win that contest, you will remain bound to the system, but you will return Alethkar and Herdaz to me, with all of their occupants intact. You will vow to cease hostilities and maintain the peace, not working against my allies or kingdoms in any way. But if I win, I keep everything I've won, including your homeland. I still remain bound to this system, and will still cease hostilities, but I will have your soul to serve me, immortal. That's on 1178. Dalinar agrees to the terms to prevent years of fighting, death, etc., and intends to serve as his own champion. Chapter 113, Emotion. The sibling isn't sure what to make of her bond with Navani. Navani says they will work together in order to forge an acceptable path forward. Navani discovers Raboniel is dying. She was severely injured by Moash, and knows she will return mad if reborn. She asks Navani to kill her with anti-void light, and to make sure she puts an end to it. They sing the Rhythm of War together before Navani kills Raboniel. She feels terrible. Navani apologizes to the sibling for finding the light, which can kill Spren. The sibling accepts it. The recreants ensured consequences became those of the Spren as well. Navani takes the special dagger in her notebook, leaves a note on Raboniel's corpse that it is not to be moved without consulting her, and departs to put the tower back in order. Taravangian awakes stupider than he had ever been, and emotional. He receives a note from Renarin saying he's sorry. It is accompanied by 2 glowing gemstones. Taravangian wonders what he could be sorry for. The high storm arrives and Taravangian fears. He knows what he has done. Realizes that the gems were given to him so he could summon Odium. He fears the end is near. Szeth arrives. Szeth wants to know how long Taravangian has known about his father's death. Taravangian tries to convince him to use the sword. Szeth refuses and breaks the gemstones Taravangian had been given, despite his pleading, releasing strange, transparent windspren that trailed red light. Szeth refuses to be manipulated by Taravangian again, have his hands stained by murder, which Taravangian claims was done to save the world. Szeth claims Taravangian broke him, took advantage of his attempts to maintain his honor. A golden light appears as Szeth prepares to kill Taravangian. Odium appears. He's upset he has lost Dalinar again and is bound by an agreement he does not desire. He wonders how his enemies know how to act against him, accuses Taravangian of betrayal, wonders what the man has done. Taravangian fears he failed, but soon realizes both the sword and Odium are present. Seth stabs Taravangian in the chest. Taravangian is filled with a sense of bravery as he begins to die. Taravangian is pulled into the place between worlds by Odium along with Seth's sword. Taravangian grabs the sword and stabs Odium in the chest with it. It begins to drink the god's essence. Taravangian realizes Seth had killed him and feels angry. Odium cries out, his golden plane shattered. It turns to darkness. The figure that contained Odium's power, the person who controlled it, evaporated, taken by the sword. That alone was so much investiture that Taravangian felt the sword grow dull in his fingers, full, lethargic. As when a hot brand was shoved into a barrel of water, there was an initial hiss, but this power was too vast for the sword to drink. It killed the person holding that power, however, which left a hole, a need, a vacuum. Like a gemstone suddenly without Stormlight, it reached out, and Taravangian felt a distinct connection to it. Passion, hatred. Today, Taravangian was only passion, hatred, fear, anger, shame, awe, bravery. The power loved these things, and it surged around him, enveloping him. His soul vibrated. Take me, the power pled, speaking not with words, but in emotion. You are perfect. I am yours. Taravangian hesitated briefly, then thrust his hands into the well of power, and ascended to godhood, becoming Odium. That's on 1186-7. Chapter 114, Broken Gods. Kaladin transfers Venli and her friends to the Shattered Plains via the Oath Gate. Rlain had become a Truth Watcher. He had bonded a spren named Tumi, the one who had been watching him from the Kremling's heart. He was a misspren of both honor and odium, since he had been touched by Shah Not. Renarin knows. He suggested Rlain and told the Unmade about him. They're kinder in awe of Rlain, whom they refer to as the Bridger of Minds. They are honored. Upon making the transfer to Narak, Leshwe and her allies are welcome to remain. She declines. They do not wish to fight their own and desire a life outside the war with the listeners. Venli knows they'll find their way. Kaladin reminds them of the Queen's promise. Should they and their friends need refuge, they will provide shelter. Venli and the others depart. Rlain tells her to write him when she finds the others. Rlain had chosen to remain behind until Renarin returned, and because he feared that if the humans won the war, they may choose to enslave his kind again. He felt that he needed to keep an eye on them. Rlain intends to visit the listeners and knows the tower is his home. He is both Radiant and Bridge 4. Kaladin invites Rlain to go and send Teft off. Taravangian becomes the power. He begins to understand the Cosmere on a fundamental level. He saw his predecessor's weakness, how he had been enslaved by the power. Taravangian realizes he has two sides, knowledge and understanding, possible futures on the other, fury. In the mortal realm, he is a burnt-out corpse. Raised, Taravangian's predecessor. Szeth wasn't aware because of Nightblood's work. Taravangian realizes they think it's his corpse because Szeth didn't notice Odium's arrival, didn't understand how he had drawn Nightblood to ultimately be consumed by it. Since they thought him dead, Taravangian realizes he was free to both destroy and plan. Taravangian is startled when he becomes aware of a growing power nearby, a godly power. He was not alone. All of Bridge 4, with the exception of Rock, whom Scar and Drehi explained would not be returning, give Teft a king's funeral, soul-casting him to stone. Fenderana was going to be sculpted as well and kept next to him. They would remain in a room with other ancient Radiants who stood as stone sentries. After the funeral and celebration of Teft and his life, Kaladin speaks with Syl. They are both going to miss Teft. Syl was mostly herself now that the tower was back in good working order. Some of the emotions she had experienced, the sorrow, were a result of Raboniel's actions. Kaladin realizes the vision he'd had of Tien had let him let go of a heavy burden, mainly in the shape of shame. Kaladin hugs Teft's statue. He acknowledges that he and Syl need to keep moving forward, which involved choosing a course for his life now that the crisis had been averted. Taravangian grows increasingly capable and is visited by cultivation. He understands now. Cultivation had required someone who could tempt the power as well as someone who would be able to control it. I asked for the capacity to save the world. I thought it was the intelligence, but later wondered if it was the ability to feel. In the end, it was both. You were preparing me for this. Odium's power is the most dangerous of the 16, she said. It ruled Raised, driving him to destroy. It will rule you too, if you let it. They showed you this possibility, I assume, Taravangian said, but this isn't nearly as certain as I imagined it. It shows you things that can happen, but not the hearts of those who act. How did you dare try something like this? How did you know I'd be up to the challenge? I didn't, she said. I couldn't. You were heading this direction. All I could do was hope that if you succeeded, my gift would work. That I had changed you into someone who could bear this power with honor. That's on 1192-3. Taravangian is awed by the power, the knowledge he had, and it could accomplish his goals, such as saving his city and ending the war. The contract could accomplish that. Taravangian knows his predecessor's plans and had some of his knowledge. The Cosmere was in chaos and ruled by fools, broken gods. He realizes there's much to do and that Dalinar had set himself up to lose, that he could defeat him. Cultivation asks Taravangian to come with her so she can teach him about the power, so he can control it and be better than Ray's. He agrees by taking her hand and is happy because he was finally free of his frail body and position, which had always controlled and defined him in his eyes. He could do what he wanted now and was determined to save everyone. Chapter 115, Testament. Shallan had located her first cryptic, whom she'd named Testament. She appears better, as does Maya, which gives Shallan hope that Testament could be repaired. Shallan had told Adolin her secrets about Mraize, the dagger, and cube. Kolek had helped Adolin and Shallan open the cube, which contained a strange friend Wit referred to as a Saiyan. Its name is Allah, and it acted like an abused child. It would not take the freedom it was offered. Radiant remained with Shallan. She would be absorbed like Veil when they discovered the proper path. Shallan realizes Pattern had acted like a newly bonded friend on Yasna's ship because he had been one. She has 2 sharp blades and many questions about her past, about Deadeyes, who had never existed before the Recreants. Shallan contacts Mraize with the cube and tells him what happened to Veil. She thinks of the other world Kolek had told her about, how he wanted to get off Roshar to avoid the world's downfall and Odium torturing the Heralds again. Mraize is displeased. She was a Ghostblood. Shallan says she is not. None of them were, not fully. They are leaving. Mraize asks her not to leave to consider the cost, her brothers, which had been smuggled out of the tower. She thanks him for the Sion, the ability to communicate across realms. Mraize claims Shallan will never find the answers she seeks. She says she has all the things she needs and that her discussions with Kolek have revealed that he thinks the reason Mraize is hunting him is because of Ba Adumishram, the one who gifted the singers forms of power and stole the singers' minds, turning them into Parshmen when she was trapped. Shallan wants to know why Mraize wants the gemstone that contains the Unmade, what he intends to do with it. There is no answer. Shallan announces she will be returning to Earth soon with the Honorspren who have decided to bond with humans. Upon her arrival, she expects to find him and his people gone and vows to find the gemstone before him, threatens him should he get in her way. Mraize warns her this won't end well. She is opposed to the most powerful organization in the Cosmere. Shallan is not afraid and asks Mraize to deliver a message to Thydakar's avatar for her. They're through with his meddling, his influence over her people is no more, and that Wit had a message as well, to deal with his own planet and not make him beat Thydakar up again. Mraize informs Shallan that she is now at war with the Ghostbloods. Shallan replies that he always has been, and she has chosen her side. She breaks contact. Adolin asserts they can handle the Ghostbloods. Although she had gone with the others, Venli approaches the listener camp alone, bows trained on her. Eventually, she is greeted by Thud, who is surprised to see her in her glow as she takes in Stormlight. Thud informs Venli that her mother still lives, but her mind is gone. Venli announces she may have a way to heal her. Thud calls Venli a traitor, doesn't believe her, because she would have had them all killed. She understands, but insists she's trying to be better and asks that he listen. After informing him that she's not sure if the enemy knows of their location, they were found by humans and Raboniel had known before her death. She isn't sure who Raboniel had told. Venli explains their gods have returned, that they are going to have to protect themselves and change to make sure they are left in peace. Venli shows him a spren, explains there are more like her that wish to bond to make their bondmates radiant. Thud is wary because of what transpired the last time Venli came to them with spren. Venli insists this will be different because she has changed and time will prove the truth of her words. Venli asks to be taken to her mother. She's taken. Jaxlum doesn't recognize Venli, and their people are losing their songs without her. No one else who had known them had escaped. Venli releases a light spren, which spins around Jaxlum before seeking her gem heart during a rendition of the Song of Mornings, Jaxlum's favorite. Venli promises to restore the songs to Thud and speaks of those she brought with her. She understands if she is turned aside, but hopes her friends will be considered since the listeners will need allies if they are to survive in the world as it is now. Thud explains they are not alone. Things had changed for them as well as for Venli. They have allied with chasm fiends, which had helped them escape the chasms during the storm. Venli hears a voice, her mother's, asking if it's her. Jaxlum's eyes had focused. They could really see Venli. Venli hears a distant feminine voice within her mind. It says that her words have now been accepted. Chapter 116, Mercy. Kaladin speaks with Dalinar, whom he feels was right to relieve him of duty. He still has a lot of healing to do and wishes to continue his work with people with battle shock. Dalinar gives him permission. Dalinar informs Kaladin of the deal he struck with Odium, that the contest of champions is set for 10 days from now. Dalinar intends to serve as his own champion and knows he needs to master his powers in order to prepare for the contest. Dalinar feels Ishi, the creator of the Oath Pact and original binder of the Fused, can help. Dalinar asks Kaladin to help him retrieve Ishi, help him overcome his madness, so Ishi can in turn aid Dalinar. Kaladin is shocked, but doesn't seem opposed to the idea. Dalinar returns Kaladin's flute to him. He explains that Lift, whom Dalinar believes to be fine, had found it in a merchant's bin in the breakaway. Kaladin asks if she had mentioned the identity of the merchant. The pursuer awakens screaming in rage because he had been killed by Kaladin twice. He finds himself in the dark, with a being who refers to him as the Defeated One. The pursuer realizes it is El, the fused with no title. The pursuer is informed that their new god didn't want to wait for him to be reborn, so he was reborn the old way. The pursuer asks for Voidlight so he can recharge and earn back his legacy, so he can seek revenge on Kaladin and all those he loved. El reveals that the pursuer was summoned quickly to serve as a test subject to see if a Voidlight sphere that warped the air around it, which had been embedded into a knife, really worked. El plunges the knife into the Defeated One, ripping his soul apart. Kaladin is amazed by the positive transformation the tower is undergoing. The air is warm, etc. Kaladin locates the shop Lift had told Dalinar about. He finds some of Bridge 4's old things, like sigils, brush pens, and a mini wooden horse. He and Syl are in awe. Kaladin explains that he had lost the carving in Alethkar before coming to the Shattered Plains. Tien had given it to him the day they were recruited for the military, and it had been taken with his other belongings when he had been enslaved. After paying for it and the other things he wanted, he heads to the tavern to meet with Dabeed, Norrell, and the other battle-shocked people he had rescued. Kaladin had promised Teft that he would join the meetings and take care of himself. Tomorrow, he would accompany Dalinar in his quest to save Ishi. Dalinar speaks to his wife. He feels he should have had more faith in her ability to deal with the tower's problems. Navani says she will introduce Dalinar to the sibling when the sprint is ready. Navani feels as though the deal her husband struck with Odium was a good one, although his sacrifice worries her. Dalinar wonders if he would ever feel ready for the contest, feels something is wrong, has changed. He knows they need to be ready for the coming days. Dalinar lets Navani know second-guessing himself, won't pick Kaladin as his champion, thinks there's something he's missing. He feels he left Odium too much room to continue fighting before the contest. Navani knows they'll figure everything out, how to live in harmony with the singers, etc. After Navani departs, Dalinar speaks with the Stormfather, who admits that Dalinar was wise to provide Kaladin more time, to show mercy. Dalinar thinks it's important for him to learn of mercy. It'll make the Spren more human. The Stormfather doesn't want that, but sees change as a possibility. Dalinar is glad. That's all it takes. The Stormfather says Dalinar is wrong. He understands mercy and has shown it, occasionally. Dalinar is surprised and wonders when. Chapter 117, One Final Gift, 14 months ago. The battle for Narak rages above Eshonai, who is trapped in the chasms. The other listeners were summoning the Everstorm. Eshonai had been defeated by a human shardbearer, but wanted to return to the fight. She begins to make her way back and realizes a high storm is coming. The two storms clash. The chasm floods and Eshonai is forced to fight for her life against the water. She hears the rhythm of war and attunes it and sees a small spren shaped like a shooting star. Eshonai holds on until the water slows, realizes her plate was broken and she was injured. She closes her eyes and awakens in a land filled with light. Eshonai is greeted by the Rider of Storms, who informs her that she was radiant when she died, which allowed her to live for a while without breathing. She will pass into eternity soon. Eshonai feels her life was a failure. She had given her people to the enemy, died alone and defeated, and betrayed her ancestors' gift. The Rider of Storms feels the opposite. She had made the same choice as those who came before her and given away power in the name of freedom. She knows the ancient listeners in a way that few ever have or will. Eshonai thanks him. The Rider of Storms decides to give her one final gift. Eshonai becomes a storm and rides it with him. He knows she had always wanted to know what lay beyond the next hill. Eshonai sees the entire world and realizes the world was the rhythms, begins to see how it all fits together. Afterward, Eshonai fades. She understood the rhythms in a way no one ever could because they had not viewed the world as she had. The Rider of Storms bids her farewell as she passes into the eternities, excited to see what it beheld. Epilogue, Dirty Tricks. Wit meets with Odium. They speak of the contract. Wit is convinced Dalinar bested Odium. Odium vows to destroy Wit. He desires vengeance. Wit senses something odd during the conversation. Odium had never asked his opinion before. He had wanted to know who Wit would choose as his champion. Odium vows to defeat Dalinar and use it as a stepping stone to do whatever he wants. A horribly wrong power slams into Wit. Odium realizes that Wit stores excess memories since he has lived longer than a mortal should. Wit worries about the destruction of the breaths that held his memories. He experiences true terror. Odium doesn't believe it will cause harm. He knows his predecessor's agreements will allow him to. Wit is back in the world. The past is repeating itself, but something feels off. Wit isn't sure what exactly. Wit has another meeting with Odium. After a while he leaves, but Odium's presence remains behind. Wit wonders if something is wrong. He decides not to worry. This was working. The novel ends with the line, "After all, Wit's first face-to-face meeting with Odium in over 1,000 years had gone exactly as he had imagined." That's on 1219. And that concludes Book 4 of the Stormlight Archive. Now that I've taken some time to finish up my summary of Rhythm of War, the fourth novel in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, I want want to take some time to just talk about it. This mass of a novel, this tome that is finally concluded with a whole lot of drama. I think the first thing I'm going to comment about is my sadness over some of the deaths in this novel. There's a part of me that's very happy that Sanderson is one of those authors that just doesn't give a darn and will actually kill off characters, but he always kills off the ones I don't want to die and keeps the ones I don't like around. Like when my boy Rock died, I was a very sad panda, and then he killed Teft. Raboniel was growing on me, and then he didn't kill Navani. I'm still salty. When she bonded with the sibling, I genuinely wanted to throw my book across the room. I probably would have broken something because it is a massive book, but it would have been worth it because Navani makes me want to scream.
I think it's good that Sanderson is willing to kill off characters, and he picks good times to kill them off because they're the times that have the most emotional impact, and they're used to further the story. And in a lot of cases, they're used to further Kaladin because we've had a couple of scenarios now where he advanced to the next level of words based on somebody dying. And I really like the culmination of his story and how we were left wondering what the words were going to be for him to move on to the next stage. And I think there was no other set of words that they could have fell on that would have meant as much to the character as these did, because Tien's death was something that has weighed on him since we first were introduced to the character, and his feeling like a failure and that general like depression and miasma and that feeling of uselessness has kind of floated around him for as long as we've known this character. And for him to finally let that weight go, that weight off his shoulders, allows him to soar, and it works on a thematic and a visual level because it's like him dropping all that weight that's been holding him down, and now he can soar in the sky.
I agree. I like that the deaths have been used to move the plot along, accentuate more poignant moments, to highlight depths of darkness and things like that. I will say that I felt like Rock's death was a bit of a punch in the gut. Like it happened at a time when Kaladin was already struggling with a sense of worthlessness. He had lost his role and his way, and he was trying to figure himself out. And then Rock goes off to die, and he's left with Teft predominantly as his only support. I mean, he has his other friends, but he's not really interacting with them the way he used to because he's not leading the Windrunners anymore. And then at the end of the novel, Teft and Lift get in a bad way. Teft winds up dying, and Kaladin is forced to come to terms finally with the fact that he just can't save anyone, or everyone rather, and he can only save certain people. There are people he can save, and if he doesn't act now, his father is going to go too. And it's enough to make him step up and save his father and also reconcile with his father, which I'm hoping leads to a bit of a cleaner book in the future, because while I understand that Kaladin and his father had different viewpoints and I can respect those different viewpoints and where they're both coming from, Liren was a little bit too selfish and too stubborn. He didn't, as Jeremy has mentioned previously, just allow his family to go into hiding when they really should have gone into hiding because his views were so extreme to the point where they almost seem nonsensical. I mean, there are people in the world like that, but it almost felt like too much and just a little too strange.
It came off as something that was getting in the way of the story. And they even kind of lampshaded it with the interlude that we got with Kaladin's mother and her perspective kind of mirroring the reader's perspective when it comes to how he was acting. So when I got to that interlude, I was kind of vindicated seeing that, oh, it wasn't just me who feels like this about this character. I don't have the level of disdain for Navani as you do. I feel like this was going to be the result from the moment she started communicating with her. I didn't see this going any other way. The sibling was not going to randomly bond with Elaine, even though they kept, floating that out there, because Navani's the one who's been talking to her the whole time. So it makes sense that that would be eventually the culmination.
Well, Dabeed also spoke to her when he was passing the span read.
Yeah, but Navani was constantly talking to her, and it was a through line of the whole book. So if somebody was going to bond with her as a culmination of a plot line, it was going to be Navani. And you also can't spend as much time focusing on a character if you're not going to make that character a Radiant. They're eventually going to turn into a Radiant because that's what's going to make her relevant in the plot going forward. Yes, we have characters that are not Radiants, but they're not getting the kind of page time that Navani's been getting.
There is nothing that will ever make me appreciate this character. I agree a lot with how she was viewed in the prologue, that she kind of just goes with the flow, goes what the power is, and kind of latches onto things and therefore gains notoriety, like she gained it through her marriage. I find the way her chapters are presented, especially in this book, exceedingly boring. I don't like all the repetition of the experimentation, and yes, it's relevant to the plot. And there was a big discovery made that could change the tide of the war. And like, I can respect that as a plot point. I just didn't like how we got there, and I don't like her personality in general. I find her positively insufferable.
I honestly think a lot of the personalities of the characters kind of blend together after a while. I don't think that Sanderson, outside of a handful of characters, writes characters that are very different from each other. Wit is probably the most different character that he writes, and that is just because Wit is, I want to say, a self-insert character, because Wit is the character that goes through all of the Cosmere books, not just the Stormlight books. And, you know, Wit is exactly what his name implies, and that is witty. But I feel like most of the other characters have very similar personalities in terms of how they talk, and I think that is a product of this series more so than other series that I've read of his, because of the way that the society is here, that everybody's very samey. Everybody kind of lives up to the same social constructs and things like that, outside of like moving around them every once in a while. Like Lift is a little different from some of the other characters because of her upbringing, but I definitely feel like there's only a handful of characters that really step outside of the boxes that Sanderson kind of writes them into in this series.
I think there's certainly a lot of similarities between his characters, especially in terms of speech patterns. We see some differences with characters like Lift and Rock, for example, but I wouldn't describe them as the same. I think, for example, if we were to take Shallan and Kaladin, they're both Radiants, they both have dark pasts, they both have things that they're struggling with. Kaladin just deals with it in a more traditional depressive way, while Shallan has created separate personalities for herself to deal with everything and compartmentalize her trauma.
But I feel like Shallan, OG Shallan, dealt with it a lot of the same ways. The only reason Shallan is different, or was different for a while, is because she created all those alternate personalities. So those personalities were different, but baseline Shallan was very, base level, just like a lot of the other characters. I'm not saying I necessarily don't like how the characters are written. I'm just saying they come off as kind of samey.
I mean, it's arguable. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, because say me and my sister have had the same upbringing. We grew up in the same house and we're two very different people, but because there are similarities in their environment, ultimately they're going to have some shared traits, some shared viewpoints, some shared ways of viewing the world. But then we have people like Buyer/Moash who just doesn't accept that and is like, I'm gonna side with the quote bad guys, if you will, and murder everybody because you didn't do what you should have done to protect everybody, or whatever strange reason he comes up with.
I feel like Moash has to end up being the champion unless they're going to introduce another character in the next book. We're 10 days away from the contract, or the contest of champions, by the end of this book. I don't see there being enough time to introduce another character to become the champion. It's got to be Moash.
He's blind now, though. Would New Odium, which is also very interesting, I think having Taravangian ascend and become a god was an interesting choice, which we can talk more about momentarily if you'd like.
I think that worked very well for Taravangian because he was kind of always looking to go beyond his restrictions and looking to have the power. They say it right in the chapter, looking to have the power to save his people, and now he does. But they kind of leave it on his chapter, at the very least, or his portion of the chapter, they kind of leave it on that he's going to, be better than his predecessor, and he's not going to be controlled by the power. But that feels like it can't be the case, because if he ends up not getting ruled by the power, or he ends up just being, unless he just, becomes kind of a different character once he's got this power, it seems like it eliminates a huge enemy, a huge threat if Odium is no longer Odium.
Yeah, the other thing that's commented in that chapter where he sends is he knows how to defeat Dalinar. But ultimately, I don't think he ever wanted Odium to win. So I don't know if he might just throw everything. Like, originally, he sided with the humans. He's now in this position where he has to learn how to manage and contend with this power that he's unaccustomed to holding. But he was never really on Odium's side. He just did it because he thought, hey, this is better than probably losing. In fact, almost definitely losing. So let's just do what I can and make a crappy situation slightly less crappy.
Yeah, the thing that I can think about it in terms of the grand plan is once he gets the power, he sees the grand war that's going on. Essentially the conflict, the Cosmere level conflict that's beyond Roshar. And maybe he realizes what Odium was trying to express, that Roshar was only the training ground and this was only kind of a stepping stone to get the ability to go out and interact with the greater Cosmere. I haven't read pretty much any of the straight Cosmere books that deal with the larger thing, so I'm not exactly sure how that is. I plan on getting into them. I own them. But if he now takes this power and realizes maybe Odium had a certain level of, rightness to what he was trying to do, and that he still needs to accomplish the goals that Odium was trying to accomplish before he can, in effect the greater Cosmere. Because this is not something that Sanderson hasn't done before. Kind of spoilers for Mistborn, but the Mistborn series has the Lord Ruler, and the Lord Ruler is the main bad guy of the first book, but it's found out that he was actually, doing the things that he was doing to kind of stomp out and prevent a greater threat. So this is not necessarily something that's foreign to Sanderson.
I guess we'll have to see where he decides to go with it. There's a part of me that kind of hopes Taravangian throws it, but at the same time, I kind of just think for Dalinar's development, it might be better if he doesn't and he feels like he's actually taking part in a contest. I think it might be interesting to see Taravangian struggle even more with the corruption of the power on his system, fight, his human instincts, which is protect the other humans down on what was his Earth or Roshar, and the cravings that Odium has for sheer chaos.
What do you think about the final, the epilogue? I really loved and hated the epilogue for different reasons, because it always ends with Wit. Every book ends with an epilogue by Wit, and this one started off really cool, but then ended on a moment where you're like, oh man, I don't even really know what happened.
I actually really liked the fact that the final line could be interpreted in a few different ways. It reads, after all, Wit's first face-to-face meeting with Odium in over 1,000 years had gone exactly as he had imagined, which is in 1219. And you can take this in a number of ways. It's first, Wit's meeting had gone exactly as he had imagined it would. He knew that he would lose his memories. Or it could be Wit thinks it went exactly how he imagined it would because he can't remember he had lost his memories, or something else that we're not accounting for. And I like that ambiguity. Like, did he plan to lose his memories? Does he just think things went well? Does he think he came out ahead? Does a part of him know those things are missing? Like, because I imagine if you're someone who's lived a really long time and you're just kind of thinking back on your life one day and then you realize you can't draw up those memories anymore, you might know there's a problem, but it's unclear as to whether or not that's how this worked for him.
Yeah, I think part of me was frustrated with it because I know it's not going to get answered right away. I knew I was going to have to wait for the next book, and I don't think it's going to get answered immediately. It may get answered in the epilogue of the next book. If I were going to predict something, we might get a definitive answer on what that line meant and the result of him playing around with his memories in the epilogue of the next book, because I assume it's going to be a Wit epilogue again. And I think that's just a long time to wait because you have to go through the whole story. Every time we get a Wit chapter, we don't know if he's being manipulated. We don't know why he's doing the things he's doing, because that ambiguity was always there with the character, but now it's going to be even more so. And I assume that this Odium that he met with was the Taravangian Odium.
Yes.
So this is a new version of Odium, and I guess that's probably why he was actually able to notice this thing that the other Odium hadn't known about, because he's looking through new eyes.
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I would say that this is the Taravangian Odium, and that the old one might have known, but he might not have cared. To me, when Taravangian took over, it seemed like they had the same knowledge. It's just that the power and everything had corrupted Reyes so much that he was just kind of going insane with a desire to murder stuff.
Yeah, and it made sense because that version of Odium was the one that created the Thrill. So, and the Thrill was just like that, where it would be this surge of power and it would completely overtake the person that it was embodying. So it made sense that Odium himself at that moment would be like that version of him. But I do like the way that it was phrased at the end. I also like the fact that they actually called out breaths specifically, which is more tying threads to Warbreaker because that was the magic system of Warbreaker. And so actually getting it kind of called out here and not just alluded to is kind of cool. But overall, I think this book was a marked improvement over the last book.
That's not really a contest, though.
That's true. The last book was really bad, but it could have not bounced back.
That's true.
And I feel like I was worried that it wasn't going to bounce back because after the last book, I got a lot of thoughts in my head that, oh my God, we're going to have 7 books of this. And is he going to world build for the whole thing? Because that last book was just straight world building with crap plot. Yeah. So I was worried that we were going to have like 3 books in a row that was going to be all world building before we got a couple to resolve the conflict at the end. But I mean, I am wondering how we're going to get more books out of it. Like, I don't know how we're going to get 7 books out of this story, but you know, you have to have faith if you're going to continue it. And I think it bounced back, and I enjoyed the book, and revisiting it to go through for the summary and the reviews was really cool.
You're welcome, Jer.
Yes.
Glad to be of service.
And what are your thoughts on the book overall?
I would say it's definitely a lot stronger than the previous novel. Again, I don't think it's really a contest. I think the general consensus is Oathbringer is the weakest of the 4 novels that are currently out. I don't think I liked this one as much as A Way of Kings. I think A Way of Kings was probably my favorite because it focuses on Kaladin a lot more before he starts getting like super depressed, and I liked that element of him trying to figure things out, which yes, they're doing that here, but there was something about the way that it was done there that I appreciated a lot more, probably because it didn't have the like scientific classroom experimentation kind of thing they had going on with Navani, which doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have different ways of liking how our magic system is explained, because I like this trial and error, learning it out organically kind of thing. Like a big series that I really like are the Cycle of Galand books, and they do the same thing. When he learns a new thing or he sees a new thing, we will spend sometimes multiple chapters of him going, oh, let me try this, and it failed. Let me try this. Oh, I got a little further. Oh, let me try this. It failed again. And I like that because I like it being organically built out. I think if I were going to power rank the series so far, I would say Words of Radiance is probably my favorite, followed by this one, then followed by Way of Kings, then followed by Oathbreaker.
We can agree Oathbringer is at the bottom of the
yes,
pack.
It's a huge gap, I think. I don't know if another book in the series could be as bad as that one.
We'll just have to find out, won't we?
Yes, we will find out.
And hope that there is nothing as bad as that.
Yes.
Or anywhere close.
I hope that stays at the bottom.
And there you have it, our summary and review of Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War, the 4th novel in the Stormlight Archive. What did you think of our summary and review? Did we leave anything out? Do you feel prepared for the next installment in the series? Are you excited? Let us know down below in the comments. We always like to know what you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens think. And if you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue. Subscribe, ring that bell so you always know what's up, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.
Hi, Tisha Valenza, aka Poison Ivy, and you've just been watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch.